Chapter 321. You should beg Elder Zhao Lin. Duan Lingtian glanced at the robust young man with a calm gaze as he spoke indifferently. He originally only intended to frighten this new disciple, but now that Zhao Lin had interfered, it caused him to be unable to help but feel slightly enraged in his heart. Elder Zhao Lin, I beg you, you must not ask senior brother to let me go. The robust young man hurriedly looked at Zhao Lin when he heard this, and he was slightly hysterical. It was as if he was grabbing onto a life-saving straw. Zhao Lin's gaze went slightly cold when he heard the robust young man, and he looked at Duan Lingtian before abruptly shouting out explosively. Duan Lingtian killed a fellow disciple with cruel methods. According to the rules of the Seven-Star Sword sect, he ought to be killed. Killed a fellow disciple? Duan Lingtian couldn't help but be stunned when Zhao Lin said this. The others, including Wuxia, were stunned as well. When did Duan Lingtian kill a fellow disciple? Now, so long as it was someone with a discerning eye, they would be able to discern that Duan Lingtian threw the robust young man out of the chain bridge and suspended him high up in the sky only for the sake of frightening the robust young man. If Duan Lingtian intended to kill him, he would have thrown him down long ago and would not have spoken so much nonsense with him. But now, Zhao Lin said that Duan Lingtian killed a fellow disciple? What does he mean? In next to no time, the eyes of the people present blurred, and they completely understood the meaning behind Zhao Lin's words. Whoosh! A terrifying aura was emitted from Zhao Lin's body, and his entire body seemed to have transformed into a gust of wind that flashed straight towards Duan Lingtian. Vast origin energy raged and flashed. Whoosh! 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 They transformed into palm prints that covered the sky as they whistled down towards Duan Lingtian, enveloping Duan Lingtian within them. At the same time, 2,000 ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form in the sky above Zhao Lin. Obviously he'd exerted his full strength, desiring to directly kill Duan Lingtian. It could be imagined that if Duan Lingtian was killed by Zhao Lin, then the new disciple that was thrown out of the chain bridge and suspended high up in the sky by Duan Lingtian would surely die. No. The new disciple who was suspended in the air by Duan Lingtian saw Zhao Lin attack Duan Lingtian. His face turned pale as he cried out in grief. He closed his eyes in despair. Now, anyone with a discerning eye could see that Zhao Lin wanted to kill Duan Lingtian. Then he would push all the blame for the death of the new disciple that was thrown out of the suspension bridge by Duan Lingtian onto Duan Lingtian. In this way he would be eliminating evil for the sect. Duan Lingtian's expression changed greatly. He did not expect Zhao Lin to be so deranged. At this moment, a chill suddenly rose in his heart. Perhaps, from the very beginning when he threw this new disciple off the chain bridge, Zhao Lin already had this plan in mind. This Zhao Lin wanted to use this opportunity to get rid of him. As for Zhao Lin's goal, Duan Lingtian was extremely clear. It was none other than for the sake of the fabricated muscle tendon changing and marrow cleansing scroll that he fabricated. All these thoughts were completed in the blink of an eye by Duan Lingtian. As his thoughts spun, he saw Zhao Lin arrive before him. Origin energy palm prints that filled the sky contained the strength of 2,000 ancient mammoths, and they enveloped down towards him, causing him to be on the verge of suffocating. At this moment, not only was he unable to dodge in time, he wasn't even able to pull the robust young man back onto the chain bridge. Zhao Lin's speed was too swift. The palm prints condensed from origin energy that filled the sky whistled down, and a series of continuous sounds of air exploding echoed out in the air. Zhao Lin's face revealed a crazed expression. After waiting for so long, he finally found an opportunity. At the instant he made his move, he'd already condensed his origin energy into sound and sent it into the ears of Wuxia, who was standing not far behind Duan Lingtian. Elder Wuxia, so long as you don't make a move today, I Zhao Lin will owe you a great favor. He believed that with the friendship between him and Wuxia, coupled with his promise, Wuxia ought to not interfere. So long as Wuxia didn't interfere, Duan Lingtian would die for sure. Elder Wuxia. Duan Lingtian realized the arrival of danger, and his face went ghastly pale, and the first thing he thought of was Wuxia. Now only Wuxia could stop Zhao Lin. A wisp of disdain appeared on the corners of Zhao Lin's mouth when he heard Duan Lingtian call out Wuxia. Does this Duan Lingtian think that Wuxia will help him? Naive. But in next to no time, the smile of disdain on the corners of Zhao Lin's mouth completely froze. Whoosh! An afterimage flashed before his eyes, and he saw Wuxia instantly appear before Duan Lingtian. This scene caused his expression to become unsightly. Whoosh! Wuxia raised his hand and flicked his sleeve, and vast origin energy that contained an even more terrifying aura swept out. Above Wuxia, a few thousand ancient mammoth silhouettes appeared, Bang! His sleeve swept out, and in the blink of an eye, it dispersed the palm prints that covered the sky that Zhao Lin slapped out, causing them to vanish into thin air. Duan Lingtian, you've taught him a lesson. Let's forget about this matter. Lu Qiu stared vigilantly at Zhao Lin, who had an unsightly expression as he spoke to Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian took a deep breath. At that moment earlier he only felt that death was so close, and he was only a little bit away from being killed by Zhao Lin. Although he tried to call out to Lu Qiu, he was extremely perturbed in his heart. Because he knew that Lu Qiu and Zhao Lin had a relationship, and he wasn't sure if Lu Qiu would help him. If Lu Qiu didn't help him, then he would die for sure. At that moment he only felt that his heart was completely in his throat. That feeling of suffocation and discomfort was absolutely not inferior to the robust young man that he threw out of the chain bridge and hung high in the air. To him, the scene from before was a fine line between life and death. Hearing Lu Qiu's words, Duan Lingtian withdrew his hand and pulled the robust young man back onto the chain bridge, then casually threw him onto the chain bridge. Following the robust young man landing on the chain bridge lightly swayed. The robust young man lay limp on the chain bridge, unable to get up for a long time. Earlier he'd almost died. He slowly raised his head, his gaze furious, yet he wasn't looking at Duan Lingtian but at Zhao Lin. What are you looking at? When Zhao Lin noticed that this new disciple dared to use this sort of gaze to look at him, his face sank and he, who was already incomparably furious in his heart, shouted coldly. When the robust young man saw this, he lowered his head in the end. Only now did he remember that this Zhao Lin was the outer court elder of Migres Peak. If he really offended Zhao Lin, then once Zhao Lin wanted to kill him, he only had to find a place with no one around. Lu Qiu. Zhao Lin looked at Lu Qiu, his gaze gradually becoming gloomy, and his voice was incomparably cold. Zhao Lin, he's the person that Lord Peak Master wants to see. Lu Qiu fearlessly met Zhao Lin's gaze. Very good. You very good. Zhao Lin glanced deeply at Lu Qiu, then turned around to glance at the 20 new disciples and said coldly, "Let's go." When he saw Zhao Lin leaving with his people, Duan Lingtian looked at Zhao Lin's figure from behind, and his eyes were filled with dense killing intent. In this lifetime, the person that truly made Duan Lingtian arouse boundless killing intent in his heart, and wished for nothing more than to burn the bones and scatter the ashes, was the Crimson Sky Kingdom's Duan Lingxing from that time, undoubtedly the #1 person. Now he'd aroused a similar killing intent towards Zhao Lin. This Zhao Lin's actions today had completely and utterly infuriated him. That suffocating feeling of his life hanging by a thread was something he wasn't willing to experience a second time in his entire lifetime. Duan Lingtian's chest was completely filled with flames of rage, and they were on the verge of bursting out. Duan Lingtian, did you offend Zhao Lin in some way? Lu Qiu looked at Duan Lingtian and asked with a bewildered expression. Earlier, Zhao Lin obviously had the intent to kill Duan Lingtian, and even made a heavy promise to him. If it wasn't for the Peak Master wanting to see Duan Lingtian this time, and he'd obtained the heavy reward of the Peak Master not long ago because of Duan Lingtian, perhaps he would really agree to Zhao Lin's promise and not interfere in this matter. Even though Zhao Lin was only a first-level void-prying stage martial artist, Zhao Lin's background caused him to have no choice but to be fearful. He knew clearly in his heart that with Zhao Lin's attitude earlier, Zhao Lin obviously hated him to the core. Not only was the relationship between the two of them destroyed, Zhao Lin might even go against him everywhere in the future. I hope my choice is correct. Lu Qiu looked at the young man with limitless potential before him and silently thought in his heart. I don't know as well. Perhaps I inadvertently offended him. Duan Lingtian shook his head, as he didn't have the intention of speaking of the matter between him and Zhao Lin. If he denied the existence of the Muscle Meridian Rebirth Scroll, then wouldn't it be admitting that he'd consumed the 10,000-year stalactite milk? The 10,000-year stalactite milk was sufficient to cause anyone to be tempted, including Lu Qiu who stood before him. Lu Qiu nodded. Let's go. He naturally didn't believe Duan Lingtian's words. However, he was able to discern that Duan Lingtian had something that was difficult to say, so he didn't pursue the matter. Duan Lingtian and Lu Qiu walked side by side and continued to head towards the main peak, Dubhe Peak. On the way, Duan Lingtian had a sincere expression as he said to Lu Qiu, Elder Lu Qiu, I, Duan Lingtian, will remember the favor of saving my life today. I'll return this favor to you one day. Although it wasn't convenient for him to tell Lu Qiu the cause of the conflict between him and Zhao Lin. However, Lu Qiu had saved his life today and he was deeply grateful. Lu Qiu smiled lightly and didn't refuse. Because he knew how precious this promise of Duan Lingtian's was. Perhaps with the current Duan Lingtian's strength, he wouldn't be able to help him much. However, the future Duanling Tian would instead be an existence that even he had to look up to. Duanling Tian was able to possess an 8th level origin core stage cultivation at such an age, and it wouldn't be difficult for him to soar into the sky in the future. Of course, the precondition was that Duanling Tian was able to grow up safely and peacefully. Otherwise, once he died, it would be useless no matter how high his natural talent was. After the two of them arrived at the main peak, Dubhe Peak, Duanling Tian walked all the way up Dubhe Peak under Lu Qiu's guidance, and when they were near the peak, they saw a spacious platform halfway up the mountain. Needless to say, the cultivation environment here was extremely good, and even the origin energy in Duanling Tian's body had a trace of pulsation. Elder Lu Qiu, could it be that this is the spirit point of Dubhe Peak? Duanling Tian looked at Lu Qiu as he asked curiously. You even know about spirit points? Lu Qiu was slightly surprised. I heard Elder Bai mention it from Alcade Peak's Elder Bai. Duanling Tian nodded. He still remembered what Elder Bai said to him that day. The spirit point on Dubhe Peak was the best place to cultivate in the 7-star sword sect, and it was filled with spirit energy. Chapter 322. Exactly, if we head up from here, it's the spirit point on Dubhe Peak. Lu Qiu nodded and lightly smiled. The spirit point on Dubhe Peak is divided into 9 great spirit points. The peak masters of the 6 great outer court sword peaks of our 7-star sword sect each occupy a spirit point, and the other 3 spirit points are respectively occupied by the sect leader and the 2 guardian elders. When he spoke of the 7-star sword sect's sect leader, Lu Qiu's expression was relatively calm. But when he spoke of the 2 guardian elders, traces of reverence appeared on Lu Qiu's face. Guardian elders. Duanling Tian deeply remembered this in his heart. A figure that was able to make Lu Qiu lose his composure was surely not simple. 9 great spirit points. There ought to be a spirit point here, right? As Duanling Tian spoke, his gaze descended onto the vast platform halfway up the mountain. On this platform, a palace rose from the ground, and it had a vast aura. This palace is the Merak Hall, and it's also the cultivation place of the Merak Peak's master. Lu Qiu nodded and slowly spoke. Merak Hall? Merak Peak's master? The corners of Duanling Tian's mouth curled into a faint smile. He still remembered that during the outer court martial competition a few days ago, the 7th level origin core stage outer court disciple, Hu Shuefeng, who wanted to kill him, was the personal disciple of the Merak Peak's master. The spirit point at the bottom of the 9 great spirit points is occupied by the Merak Hall. If we head up from here, it's where the Mizar Hall is located, and it occupies another spirit point. Lu Qiu brought Duanling Tian to continue towards the main peak, Dubhe Peak. All along the way, Duanling Tian saw many 7-star sword sect disciples. Without exception, all these 7-star sword sect disciples had 7 stars around the sword-shaped symbol on their clothes that were silver in color. Obviously, these 7-star sword sect disciples were all inner court disciples. Elder Lu Qiu. Some inner court disciples that knew Lu Qiu lightly smiled as they bowed to Lu Qiu. As for Duanling Tian, they only casually glanced past him, and they didn't even look him in the eye. Even though the current Duanling Tian's name shook the 7-star sword sect's outer court, and he had some reputation in the inner court, however, not many people in the inner sect knew him. Soon, Duanling Tian followed behind Lu Qiu and continued to walk up. Along the way they could see many independent canyons. These places are the cultivation grounds of the inner court disciples. Although they're not on the spirit points, they're located in the spirit points formed by the 9 great spirit points. The cultivation environment there is pretty good. Lu Qiu explained to Duanling Tian. Duanling Tian nodded. Even though the cultivation environment here was far inferior to the stalactite cave, it was undoubtedly much better than the other places in the 6 great outer court sword peaks. This is Mizar Hall. Not long after, Lu Qiu's voice sounded. Duanling Tian glanced over and saw a vast platform appear in front of him. On the platform stood a magnificent palace. Mizar Hall. Duanling Tian knew clearly in his heart that this Mizar Hall ought to be the cultivation grounds of the peak master of Mizar Peak, Zheng Fan, who presided over the outer court martial competition a few days ago. Right when Duanling Tian and Lu Qiu intended to continue walking up, a figure that was like the wind flashed out from the pavilion above Mizar Hall, and it wasn't long before he arrived before Duanling Tian and Lu Qiu. Junior brother Duanling Tian, please wait. This was a young man around the age of 27 or 28, with slanted brows, starry eyes, and an imposing appearance. What caused Duanling Tian to be surprised was that this young man's forehead was actually slightly similar to the peak master of Mizar Peak, Zheng Fan. When he thought about how this person seemed to have walked out from Mizar Hall, Duan Lingtian thought in his heart. Could it be that he's related to Zheng Fan? Elder Lu. After the young man lightly smiled to Duan Lingtian, he looked at Lu Qiu, who was by Duan Lingtian's side, and bowed. Lu Qiu replied with a smile. Elder Lu Qiu, my father wants to speak a few words with junior brother Duan Lingtian. I wonder if you can make it convenient? The young man looked at Lu Qiu and slowly asked. Lu Qiu's brows raised as a trace of surprise flashed within his eyes, and in the end, he looked at Duan Lingtian. I can't make the decision on this. I have to seek Duan Lingtian's own opinion. At the same time that Lu Qiu spoke to the young man, he sent a voice transmission into Duan Lingtian's ears. Duan Lingtian, he's the son of the Hall Master of Mizar Hall, Zheng Fan Zheng Song. The son of the Hall Master of Mizar Hall Zheng Fan? Duan Lingtian came to a sudden understanding. No wonder he felt that this Zheng Song was extremely similar to Zheng Fan, so it turned out that they were father and son. In this way everything could be explained. Junior brother Duan Lingtian, I'm Zheng Song. My father is the Peak Master of Mizar Peak, Zheng Fan. I was drinking tea with him in the pavilion earlier, and he just happened to see you and asked me to invite you and Elder Lu over. Zheng Song looked at Duan Lingtian in a refined and courteous manner, and the smile on his face was like a spring breeze. Even if it was Duan Lingtian, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. This Zheng Song was the son of the Peak Master of Mizar Peak, and was even an inner court disciple of the Seven-Star Sword sect, in terms of identity, in terms of strength. They both far surpassed the personal disciple of the Merak Peak's master, Hu Shuefeng. But he didn't have the arrogance of looking down from above like Hu Shuefeng, and this was extremely rare. Although it was only the first time he'd met Zheng Song, Duan Lingtian couldn't help but have a slightly good impression of him in his heart. I have no objections. Duan Lingtian didn't refuse and nodded. Junior brother Duan Lingtian, Elder Lu Qiu, please. Under Zheng Song's lead, Duan Lingtian and Lu Qiu walked towards Mizar Hall, and when they approached Mizar Hall, Zheng Song brought Lu Qiu into Mizar Hall's audience hall. Duan Lingtian. Meanwhile, a figure leaped down from the pavilion in Mizar Hall. Duan Lingtian didn't even have the time to react when he felt a force that was difficult to resist pass through the hand of the person to grab onto his shoulder. Subsequently, Duan Lingtian flew up. Accurately speaking, he was brought along to fly up by the person. This Peak Master of Mizar Peak ought to be in existence at the 9th level of the Void Prying stage. When my spiritual force probed him, I actually had a blurry feeling. Duan Lingtian was secretly shocked in his heart. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian was brought to the pavilion and stood on solid ground, and the thick and heavy hand that grabbed onto his shoulder was withdrawn now. Duan Lingtian looked at the person before him and lightly smiled. Peak Master. The person that brought him from outside Mizar Hall to the pavilion was none other than the Peak Master of Mizar Peak, Zheng Fan. Sit. A warm smile hung on Zheng Fan's face as he gestured to Duan Lingtian to sit. Subsequently, he even personally brewed tea for Duan Lingtian. This caused Duan Lingtian to be slightly overwhelmed by the unexpected favor. Zheng Fan poured a cup of tea for Duan Lingtian and called out. This is cloudsword tea that I personally roasted, try it? Duan Lingtian nodded and picked up the teacup, but didn't drink it directly and instead placed it before his nose to smell it. The fragrance of the tea entered his nose, and the refreshing aura seemed to be able to enter into Duan Lingtian's mind, causing Duan Lingtian to feel that his consciousness was incomparably clear. Good tea. Although Duan Lingtian didn't know much about tea, he was still able to realize that this tea wasn't simple. Try a sip. Zheng Fan lightly smiled as he spoke. Duan Lingtian nodded, then placed the teacup before his mouth and lightly took a sip. The fragrant tea melted as soon as it entered his mouth, and the refreshing aura caused Duan Lingtian to shudder. He couldn't help but close his eyes and he felt slightly light as if he was riding on the clouds. Whew! After a short moment, he seemed to have descended from the clouds and returned to the ground. Duan Lingtian spat out a mouthful of foul air, and a bright light flashed within his eyes. How was it? Zheng Fan looked at Duan Lingtian and asked. Duan Lingtian sighed in admiration. Peak Master, this cloudsword tea of yours is really amazing. It's the first time I've drunk such fragrant tea. Just a sip of it allowed me to instantly have the feeling of riding on the clouds, and at that moment I seemed to have forgotten everything. Ha! Zheng Fan laughed heartily and slowly said, speaking of which, the roasting method for this cloudsword tea was something that I perfected through an incomplete method in an ancient book. The incomplete roasting method is a roasting method for a fragrant tea called carefree tea. Unfortunately, half of it is incomplete. As he finished speaking, Zheng Fan sighed, "In my life, my greatest regret is that I can't taste the real carefree tea. Although the soaring cloud tea was roasted by me according to the incomplete roasting method of the carefree tea, it is not the real carefree tea." Hearing Zheng Fan's words, Duan Lingtian shook his head and smiled. "Peak master, as the saying goes, those who are content will always be happy. There are some things that there is no need to be too forceful. Although the carefree tea is good, that is only your imagination. Or perhaps, the real carefree tea is actually not as good as the cloud soar tea that you added and roasted." As soon as Duan Lingtian finished speaking, Zheng Fan seemed to have been enlightened and stood on the ground in a daze. At this moment, only Duan Lingtian's words remained in his mind. Those who are content will always be happy. Perhaps the real carefree tea was not as good as the current cloud soar tea. Finally, Zheng Fan came back to his senses, and his eyes flickered with traces of a strange luster. Suddenly, Zheng Fan raised his hand, and a narrow saber that was as thin as a cicada's wing appeared in his hand. Grade 6 spirit weapon. Seeing the narrow saber in Zheng Fan's hand, Duan Lingtian's eyes suddenly lit up as he recognized the grade of this spirit weapon narrow saber. He saw Zheng Fan raise his hand. Origin energy coiled around the narrow saber, emitting a strange and terrifying aura. It lightly slashed through the air, and a clear white stream of light flashed and disappeared. And at this moment, the aura of the saber in Zheng Fan's hand seemed to have completely changed. Through the memories of Samsara Emperor Wu, Duan Lingtian relied on his powerful spiritual force to faintly notice something. And at the instant that the aura of the narrow saber in Zheng Fan's hand suddenly changed, strands of origin energy appeared on the surface of Zheng Fan's body, and then it gradually converged and disappeared. Although it was only a short instant, in Duan Lingtian's eyes, Zheng Fan had completely changed. Before Zheng Fan converged his aura after the transformation, Duan Lingtian smiled lightly. "Congratulations, Peak Master." At this moment, the raging aura on Zheng Fan's body was gradually converged by him, and the narrow saber in his hand vanished as he put it away in his spatial ring. Haha. Chapter 323. Zheng Fan's laughter was unrestrained and carefree. Besides that, it also contained traces of excitement that was difficult to express with words. Duan Lingtian was naturally clear about why Zheng Fan was excited. Otherwise he wouldn't congratulate Zheng Fan earlier. "Duan Lingdan, were you able to discern what happened to me earlier?" Finally, Zheng Fan suppressed the wild joy in his heart and looked at Duan Lingtian. His eyes flickered with a sheen of wisdom, as if he wanted to see through Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian smiled indifferently. "Congratulations, Peak Master, for comprehending Saber concept and breaking through to the Void initiation stage in one go." He was naturally able to discern what had happened to Zheng Fan earlier. His words caused Zheng Fan to be enlightened. Although it was only a small matter in life, it was a knot in Zheng Fan's heart. Perhaps, even Zheng Fan himself didn't realize that it was precisely because of this knot in his heart that had trapped him and caused him to be unable to comprehend Saber concept and break through to the Void initiation stage. According to the memories of Samsara Emperor Wu, Duan Lingtian was clearly aware that if a Void prying stage martial artist wanted to break through to the Void initiation stage, then besides having a cultivation at the 9th level of the Void prying stage, it also required sufficient comprehension ability. Only a 9th level Void prying stage expert that transformed force into concept would be able to break through to the Void initiation stage. This was the iron law of Cloud Continent. So, this was also the main reason why Void initiation stage experts couldn't be directly fostered using treasures of heaven and earth. It was precisely because of this that Duan Lingtian denied that the mysterious yellow-clothed young girl Han Xuanai was a Void initiation stage expert that day. In his eyes, in the eyes of the former Samsara Emperor Wu, no matter how high or heaven-defying her comprehension ability was, it was still impossible for her to comprehend concept. "Duan Lingtian, I've still underestimated you." Zheng Fan glanced deeply at Duan Lingtian, and his wise gaze seemed to be able to see through everything. "You're from a small kingdom under the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, yet you actually know of concept? Looks like you're really not that simple." Duan Lingtian raised his eyebrows and looked at Zheng Fan in surprise. "Peak Master, you know me quite well." Zheng Fan didn't find it strange that he knew he was from a kingdom under the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Half a year ago, when he just arrived at the 7-Star Sword sect, he'd spoken of this matter before Wuxia and the group of new disciples. So now, there were surely many people in the 7-Star Sword sect that knew of his origins. "Duan Lingtian, No matter what, if it wasn't for you today, I wouldn't have been able to successfully break through the bottleneck I've been stuck in for so many years. I Zheng Fan owe you a favor. Zheng Fan looked at Duan Lingtian with a solemn expression and made a promise. He knew very well that if Duan Lingtian hadn't enlightened him today, he wouldn't have been able to break through. This was a huge favor. As heavy as Mount Tai. Hearing Zheng Fan's words, Duan Lingtian's face lit up with joy. Then I'll thank you in advance, Peak Master. From today onwards, the person before him wasn't just the Peak Master of Mizar Peak. Moreover, he was a formidable Void Initiation Stage expert. Void Initiation Stage expert, even in the entire 7-star sword sect, there were only a handful of them, and they were the absolute pillars of the 7-star sword sect. The promise of a Void Initiation Stage expert couldn't be measured with money. Zheng Fan's promise was undoubtedly a great trump card to Duan Lingtian. Zheng Fan nodded, and his eyes sized Duan Lingtian up with interest as he asked. Duan Lingtian, if I intend to take you as my disciple, are you willing to respect me as your master? As soon as Zheng Fan finished speaking, Duan Lingtian was stunned. No matter what, he never imagined that Zheng Fan would suddenly say this, ask me to take him as my master? When he saw Duan Lingtian being stunned, Zheng Fan thought that Duan Lingtian was hesitating and continued. If you respect me as your master, I'm willing to give you my tearless knight as a gift for our first meeting. As he spoke, a narrow saber that was thin like a cicada's wing appeared in Zheng Fan's hand. The narrow saber was dark violet in color, like a specter in the night, and it flickered with strands of frightening cold lights. It was precisely the Grade 6 spirit saber that Zheng Fan carried with him. A Grade 6 spirit weapon was an extremely precious thing in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. There were many Grade 6 alchemists in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, but Grade 6 weapons craftsmen could be counted on one hand. Meanwhile, Duan Lingtian recovered from his shock. Grade 6 spirit weapon? Truthfully speaking, he really wasn't interested in this Grade 6 spirit saber. He was already a 7th level Origin Core stage martial artist now, and was able to condense a Grade 7 weapon flame. He was a Grade 7 weapons craftsman. Once he broke through to the nascent soul stage, he would even be able to condense a Grade 6 weapon flame. Become a Grade 6 weapons craftsman. At that time, he would be able to refine a Grade 6 spirit weapon himself. Peak Master, everyone in the 7-star sword sect uses swords. I never imagined that you would instead use a saber. Duan Lingtian glanced at the Grade 6 spirit saber, Tearless Knight, in Zheng Fan's hand and lightly smiled. Zheng Fan lightly stroked the blade of Tearless Knight, and his gaze was slightly blurred. After a long time he sighed. This Grade 6 spirit saber was discovered by me and my wife in the depths of the primeval forest all those years ago. At that time I still wasn't the Peak Master of Mizar Peak. All those years ago, this Grade 6 spirit saber was within the lair of a formidable nascent soul stage fierce beast. I originally intended to give it up, but for the sake of allowing me to pass the test and become the successor to the Peak Master of Mizar Peak, she instead persisted in obtaining this Grade 6 spirit saber. In the end, for the sake of this Grade 6 spirit saber, she was killed by that fierce beast. Although Zheng Fan spoke calmly, Duan Lingtian was still able to sense traces of a sorrowful aura from Zheng Fan's tone. She was one of the top disciples of Alcade Peak at that time, and her natural talent wasn't inferior to me. In my entire lifetime, the thing I regret the most was that I didn't stop her that day and instead accompanied her to go crazy. As he finished speaking, Zheng Fan's body lightly trembled, and he was slightly lost. Later on, that nascent soul stage fierce beast was killed by me with this Grade 6 spirit saber. Before she died, she gave this Grade 6 spirit saber a name. Tearless Knight. Tearless Knight is the name of the saber. As for Tearless, I knew clearly in my heart that she wanted me in song to not shed tears for her. Later on, relying on this Grade 6 spirit saber that could provide a 40% amplification of strength, I easily passed the Peak Master's successor test of Mizar Peak, and was fostered by the previous Peak Master of Mizar Peak. Later on, I took over Mizar Peak. It can be said that everything I have now was given to me by her. As Zheng Fan spoke, his eyes became slightly moist. A Grade 6 spirit saber that provided a 40% amplification? Duan Lingtian's eyes squinted. Although when he broke through to the nascent soul stage and became a Grade 6 weapons craftsman, he would be able to refine a Grade 6 spirit weapon that provided a 40% amplification. But that was because he'd inherited all the memories of Samsara Emperor Wu as a royal grade weapons craftsman. He could imagine that the weapons craftsman that refined this Grade 6 spirit saber wasn't simple. However, at the same time that he was shocked in his heart, Duan Lingtian was able to deeply feel the love the wife of Mizar Peak's master Zheng Fan had for Zheng Fan. For the sake of her husband's future, she would stop at nothing. Even her own life. The cord in the depths of his heart was plucked. Zheng Fan's wife was worthy of respect. Later on, for the sake of this tearless knight, I started to abandon the sword to practice the saber, and switch to saber skills. Zheng Fan heaved a sigh of relief, then he looked at Duan Lingtian and squeezed out a trace of a smile on his face. If you're willing to become my disciple, I presume that my wife will approve of me giving this tearless knight that has extraordinary meaning to you. Peak Master. Duan Lingtian shook his head. I'm sorry, I don't have the intention of taking you as my master now. As for this tearless knight, it has extraordinary meaning to you, so you should properly keep it. Zheng Fan didn't speak and he looked seriously at Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian met Zheng Fan's gaze, and his gaze was firm and unchanging. He'd inherited the lifetime worth of memories of Samsara Emperor Wu, and it was equivalent to inheriting the pride of Samsara Emperor Wu. The pride of Samsara Emperor Wu caused him to be bound to not take a person that was weaker than Samsara Emperor Wu as his master. After a long time, Zheng Fan seemed to have realized Duan Lingtian's firmness, and he nodded. Never mind, everyone has their own aspirations. Even if you really take me as your master, I'm afraid I have nothing to teach you. As he finished speaking, Zheng Fan didn't force Duan Lingtian any further. Peak Master, then I'll take my leave first. Duan Lingtian lightly smiled to Zheng Fan, then his figure flashed as he leaped down the pavilion and steadily descended onto the ground. Zheng Fan stood before the pavilion and gazed at Duan Lingtian's figure with a complicated gaze. What sort of person is he actually? He's able to display such composure when facing a super top grade 6 spirit saber that's capable of providing an amplification of 40%. This kid will surely be extraordinary in the future. It's truly the fortune of my 7-star sword sect. Meanwhile, Wuxia, who was waiting for Duan Lingtian, noticed Duan Lingtian's appearance, and he greeted the nearby Zheng Song before walking towards Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian and Wuxia walked side by side, and they continued to head towards the main peak, Dubhe Peak. Target. Migra's Hall. Zheng Fan returned to his senses when he saw Duan Lingtian's figure vanish at the other end of the mountain path, and he sighed. He and Duan Lingtian were bound to not have the fate of being master and disciple. Father. Meanwhile, Zheng Song arrived at the pavilion and asked. Did he agree? Obviously, Zheng Song knew of Zheng Fan's plans as well. Zheng Fan shook his head. No. No. Zheng Song was stunned. That Duan Lingtian is really so arrogant? Even Father, the Peak Master of Mizar Peak, condescended to take him as a personal disciple, and he refused? Not only that. The corners of Zheng Fan's mouth curled into a bitter smile. I even took out the tearless knight your mother left me, but he seemed to be utterly disdainful of it. Tearless knight. Zheng Song's pupils constricted. He never imagined that for the sake of that Duan Lingtian, his father would even take out that grade 6 spirit saber with extraordinary significance. What he never imagined even more was that when faced with the temptation of that grade 6 spirit saber, Duan Lingtian actually remained unmoved. Such composure was shocking. After all, in the entire 7-star sword sect, only the grade 5 spirit sword in the sect leader's possession could compare to the grade 6 spirit saber in his father's possession. The grade 6 spirit swords in the possession of the other peak masters and guardian elders. In terms of amplification ability, it was far inferior to the grade 6 spirit saber in his father's possession. Tearless knight. Father, I heard your laughter earlier. Why did you laugh? Chapter 324. Zheng Fan smiled mysteriously when he heard his son's question. What do you think is still worthy of me laughing heartily now? Father, just speak frankly. Zheng Song laughed bitterly. How could he have guessed? I've broken through. Zheng Fan spoke slowly with a calm tone. However, it caused Zheng Song to be stunned on the spot, and he only recovered from his shock after a short while, then stared blankly. Father. You said you've broken through? Zheng Song looked at Zheng Fan with an expression of pleasant surprise and disbelief. Yes. Zheng Fan lightly smiled as he nodded. It's all thanks to Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian? Zheng Song was slightly bewildered. He's an outer court disciple. What can he do to help Father? Father, are you mistaken? This isn't related to whether he's an outer court disciple or not. Zheng Fan shook his head. Today, even if the sect leader arrived personally, he might not be able to help me break through. All in all, if it wasn't for Duan Lingtian, I'm afraid I would still need a very long time to break through. I owe him a great favor. Zhang Song gasped. It was truly difficult for him to imagine how an outer court disciple actually helped his father break through. In next to no time, under his pursuit, Zhang Fan spoke of the sequence of events. Zhang Song came to a sudden understanding. Duan Ling Tian. Zhang Song was filled with gratitude towards Duan Ling Tian in his heart. He was extremely clear about how many years his father had stayed at the 9th level of the void prying stage. Today, if it wasn't for Duan Ling Tian enlightening his father, even after a few more years, his father might not be able to smoothly break through to the void initiation stage. This was indeed a great favor. Duan Ling Tian and Lu Qiu continued to walk along the main peak, Dubhe Peak, up the mountain path. Migra's hall was above. Elder Lu Qiu, when is the 7-star sword sect's inner court disciple test usually held? On the way, Duan Ling Tian recalled the reason he left the stalactite cave today, and he asked Lu Qiu who was by his side. The inner court disciple test is held once every half a year, and it's usually 1 month after the outer court disciple test. Today just happens to be the day of the outer court disciple test. Therefore there is only 1 month left until the inner disciple examination. Lu Qiu said slowly. Now Lu Qiu, who'd seen Duan Lingtian's cultivation at the 8th level of the origin core stage, wasn't surprised that Duan Lingtian asked about the inner court disciple test. In his opinion, with Duan Lingtian's current strength, passing the inner disciple trial would be a piece of cake. Once an outer court disciple broke through to the 8th level of the origin core stage, passing the inner court disciple test would be a cinch. A month later? Duan Lingtian nodded and then asked, Elder Lu Qiu, is there a need to register for the inner court disciple test? Lu Qiu shook his head. There's no need. On the day of the inner court disciple test, you can directly head to the Dubhe Peak's test platform. Examination platform? Duan Lingtian was stunned. He wasn't familiar with the main peak, Dubhe Peak. The assessment platform is the vast platform where you participated in the outer sect disciple assessment half a year ago. Lu Qiu patiently explained without the slightest impatience. In his eyes, the current Duan Lingtian had a boundless future. In the future, if he were to stay in the 7-star sword sect, he would surely be a pillar of the 7-star sword sect, and becoming the next sect leader of the 7-star sword sect wasn't impossible. If he were to leave the 7-star sword sect, he would surely be a great figure whose name shook the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. According to his knowledge in the history of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, there seemed to have never been a figure that could compare with Duan Lingtian in terms of natural talent in the martial Dao. He believed that once Duan Lingtian matured, the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom might not be able to accommodate Duan Lingtian. So that's the examination platform. Duan Lingtian came to a sudden understanding. He clearly remembered that vast platform. After all, it was the place he participated in the outer court disciple test that day. Not long after, Duan Lingtian and Lu Qiu finally arrived at the location of the Migres Hall. The Migres Hall was similarly situated on a vast platform halfway up Dubhe Peak, and it had a vast aura. Duan Lingtian and Lu Qiu walked forward in large strides to stand side by side outside the Migres Hall. Hall Master, Lu Qiu has brought along Duan Lingtian to seek an audience. Lu Qiu stood before the Migres Hall and spoke in a loud voice, and his voice contained origin energy that extended and spread out to envelop the entire Migres Hall. In next to no time, a young man around the age of 26 or 27 with a thin figure and slight gloominess mixed between his brows walked out from within the Migres Hall. His pair of sharp eyes squinted as he looked at Lu Qiu and Duan Lingtian who were outside. Master asked the two of you to go in. This young man's voice was hoarse and low, causing others to feel extremely uncomfortable when they heard it. Duan Lingtian couldn't help but frown. He's the foster son of our Migres Peak's master, Wu Yongqian. Lu Qiu's voice transmission entered into Duan Lingtian's ears. Duan Lingtian nodded, then walked forward shoulder to shoulder with Lu Qiu, and under Wu Yongqian's lead, they walked into the Migres Hall. As soon as they entered the Migres Hall, Duan Lingtian saw the middle-aged man standing within. This middle-aged man's age was similar to the Mizar Peak's master, Zheng Fan, and his appearance was extremely ordinary, and belonged to the type of person that couldn't be found in a crowd. Duan Lingtian's spiritual force was able to vaguely detect that this middle-aged man's cultivation ought to be comparable to Zheng Fan before he broke through. 9th level of the void prying stage. He ought to be the peak master of Migres Peak. Duan Lingtian thought in his heart. Although he hadn't seen the peak master of Migres Peak, but as a disciple of Migres Peak he'd still heard of him. The peak master of Migres Peak was called Wu Dao. Foster father, they've come. As expected, After Wu Yongqian brought Duan Lingtian and Lu Qiu in, he bowed and reported to the Peak Master of Migra's Peak, Wu Dao, and his hoarse and low voice was filled with reverence. Subsequently, Wu Yongqian stood behind Wu Dao. Peak Master. Lu Qiu respectfully bowed to Wu Dao. Peak Master. Duan Lingtian nodded to Wu Dao as well. If it was an ordinary time, Duan Lingtian acting like this by himself, perhaps no one would pay attention to it. But now, Duan Lingtian's attitude towards Wu Dao was a clear contrast when compared to Lu Qiu. Wu Dao's brows slightly frowned, and he was slightly displeased. Presumptuous. Wu Yongqian, who stood behind Wu Dao, had a pair of fierce eyes that were suffused with a frightening sheen as he looked at Duan Lingtian and shouted out coldly. However, Duan Lingtian instead paid no attention to Wu Yongqian, and instead looked at Wu Dao with a carefree expression, as if his expression wouldn't change even if Mount Tai collapsed before him. Wu Yongqian's face sank when he saw Duan Lingtian actually dared to disregard him, and his eyes flickered with gloomy cold lights that were waiting to swallow Duan Lingtian up. Lu Qiu stood by Duan Lingtian's side, and now he broke out in cold sweat for Duan Lingtian as well. You're Duan Lingtian? Wu Dao's brows eased up, and his eyes were instantly suffused with a wisp of coldness as he stared fixedly at Duan Lingtian. At the same time, a formidable imposing aura gushed out from Wu Dao's body, and it pressed down onto Duan Lingtian, the imposing aura of a 9th-level void-prying stage expert. But, when faced with Wu Dao's formidable imposing aura, Duan Lingtian instead seemed to not feel anything, and he stood on the spot with an unchanged expression, not moving like a mountain. The imposing aura on Wu Dao's body ceaselessly rose. Duan Lingtian's expression still didn't change, and the corners of his mouth even curled into a wisp of a smile. It was a composed smile. What a Duan Lingtian! Finally, Wu Dao's imposing aura was completely restrained by him, and he laughed loudly, and the displeasure from before vanished without a trace. As expected of an existence that's able to kill the number one disciple in the outer court, sure how. Duan Lingtian, now, you fully deserve the title of number one disciple in the 7-star sword sect's outer court. Duan Lingtian didn't mind Wu Dao's sudden change in attitude, and he nodded. Thank you for your praise, Peak Master. Wu Yongqian, who was behind Wu Dao, had an additional sheen of jealousy and viciousness appear in his cold eyes when he heard Wu Dao praise Duan Lingtian. He was Wu Dao's foster son. But since he was young, he'd never heard Wu Dao praise him like this. Neither servile nor overbearing, he's a rare talent. Wu Dao looked at Duan Lingtian and nodded with satisfaction, then said, Duan Lingtian, you killed Shihao this time and seized the first place in the outer court martial competition, bringing honor to our Migra's Peak. You said you want a reward? Reward? Duan Lingtian frowned. Wu Dao's words were filled with a condescending tone, as if a person in a higher position was speaking to a person in a lower position. This caused him to feel extremely uncomfortable. Peak Master, I'm a member of Migra's Peak as well. Before leaving Migra's Peak, doing some things for Migra's Peak is something I ought to do. Duan Lingtian spoke indifferently and was slightly dispirited. Leave Migra's Peak? Wu Dao was first stunned when he heard Duan Lingtian, then he recovered from his shock and nodded. I almost forgot, you obtained the first place in the outer court martial competition this time and obtained a profound origin fruit. If nothing unexpected happens, you ought to be at the 7th level of the origin core stage now. 7th level of the origin core stage? The corners of the mouth of the nearby Lu Qiu twitched. He felt that Wu Dao had truly underestimated Duan Lingtian too much. With your ability, stepping into the 7th level of the origin core stage and wanting to pass the inner court disciple test isn't difficult. Wu Dao looked at Duan Lingtian and pondered for a short moment, then his eyes were suffused with a burning flowing light as he stared fixedly at Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian, do you know why I asked Lu Qiu to get you here? Duan Lingtian shook his head. Peak Master, please tell me. Duan Lingtian, I don't like to beat around the bush, so I'll be frank. At the same time that Wu Dao spoke, not only Duan Lingtian and Lu Qiu, even Wu Yongqian who stood behind Wu Dao looked at Wu Dao together. Finally, Wu Dao caught his breath and said with a clear voice. I, Wu Dao, the Peak Master of Migra's Peak, desire to take you, Duan Lingtian, as my personal disciple. Whoosh. As soon as Wu Dao said this, the three people including Duan Lingtian were stunned for a moment. Duan Lingtian was speechless. When did he become so popular? Duan Lingtian reacted to Wu Dao's words and shook his head. Peak Master, I'm sorry, I temporarily don't have any plans to take you as my master. He'd even refused Jing Fan who'd broken through to the void initiation stage now, let alone this Wu Dao. Presumptuous. When Wu Yongqian, who was behind Wu Dao, heard that his foster father wanted to take Duan Tian as his personal disciple, the flames of jealousy that filled his heart almost caused his chest to explode. Chapter 325. Duan Tian continued to choose to disregard Wu Yongqian, who was about to go berserk, as if he utterly didn't take Wu Yongqian seriously. He indeed didn't take Wu Yongqian seriously. Duan Tian's disregard caused Wu Yongqian's rage to practically burn to the limit. As the peak disciple of Migres Peak and an inner court disciple of the Seven-Star Sword sect, when had he ever been disregarded like this? The face of Wu Dao, who was refused by Duan Tian, sank slightly, and his eyes were suffused with a bright light as he stared fixedly at Duan Tian. Duan Tian, you're refusing me so straightforwardly? As the peak master of Migres Peak, Wu Dao had his own pride. Now, Duan Tian actually openly refused his good intentions, and it caused a ball of flames to arise within his heart. Peak Master, I'm sorry? Duan Tian's gaze was calm when faced with Wu Dao, who had a displeased expression, and he spoke indifferently. A wisp of a bitter smile appeared on the face of Wuxia, who stood beside Duan Tian, and he sighed in his heart. This little fellow, it's his fortune that the Peak Master wants to take him as a disciple. He actually refused. Wuxia never imagined that Duan Tian would actually refuse to become Wu Dao's personal disciple. Although Duan Tian's natural talent in the martial Dao could be said to be heaven-defying, he hadn't matured after all, and finding a good master in the Seven-Star Sword sect would undoubtedly be of great help to him. On the other hand, he could also have one more backer and cause those people who wanted to harm him to be somewhat fearful. Now, Duan Tian's decision had completely exceeded his expectations. Wu Dao, the Peak Master of Migres Peak, an expert whose strength could be ranked in the top 10 of the Seven-Star Sword sect, intended to take Duan Tian as his personal disciple. Duan Tian had refused so straightforwardly and without the slightest consideration. It caused his scalp to go numb. Duan Tian. Wu Dao's gaze gradually calmed down, but the expression he looked at Duan Tian with didn't have the full smile from before, and his tone was slightly low. Looks like you're extremely confident of your strength. Do you think that with your natural talent, I, Wu Dao, the Peak Master of Migres Peak, don't have the qualifications to be your master? Duan Tian frowned. He shook his head and said, Peak Master, I've never thought of that. I just don't have any plans to become your disciple. Apprenticeship? Ever since he had absorbed the memories of Emperor Wu of Samsara, Duan Tian had gained another master, a master who would not hold back from him. That teacher was none other than Samsara Emperor Wu. The reincarnation Emperor Wu was once an expert who stood at the peak of the Cloud Continent. Now, Duan Tian's rejection was considered tactful. If he really had to speak his mind, he would say to Wu Dao, You want me to acknowledge you as my master? Are you worthy? Duan Tian's tactful rejection was undoubtedly an excuse in Wu Dao's ears, and it caused Wu Dao's expression to become even gloomier. Duan Tian, you're extremely confident. But a person can be confident, but once one is overconfident, then it's arrogance. Today, since I, Wu Dao, have opened my mouth to take you as my personal disciple, then I naturally won't easily take it back. Wu Dao's gaze descended onto Duan Tian, and his words were filled with an unquestionable domineering tone. Peak Master, a forced melon isn't sweet. Duan Tian's face sank slightly, as he never imagined that Wu Dao would be so difficult to deal with. At this moment he only felt that the Mizar Peak's master, Zheng Fan, was so amiable when compared to this Migres Peak's master, Wu Dao. This Wu Dao still wants to force me to take him as my master? Luccio's brows slightly frowned, and he felt that Wu Dao was going slightly too far. But Wu Dao was the Peak Master of Migres Peak, whereas he was only an outer court elder of Migres Peak, and the disparity between their statuses was too great. So, even if he couldn't stand it, he didn't dare say anything. Duan Tian, since I've already spoken, then there's naturally no room for me to take it back. Wu Dao's tone was terrifyingly calm. Duan Tian's brows knit together. Is this Wu Dao a madman? If I'm not willing to take him as my master, can he still force me? Of course. Suddenly Wu Dao spoke out once more and he looked at Duan Tian. I can give you a chance. You battle my foster son. If you're able to defeat my foster son, then I can take it as I've never said anything before. But if you lose at his hands, then you must obediently become the personal disciple of I, Wu Dao. You can give up this chance. But after giving it up, no matter if you're willing or not, you, Duan Tian, are the personal disciple of I, Wu Dao. If you dare gossip outside and deny that you're my Wu Dao's disciple, then you're going against me, Wu Dao. In the future, there won't be a place for you to stay in the 7-Star Sword sect. As he finished speaking, Wu Dao's words were filled with tyrannical and overbearing. Duan Lingtian's face sank. This Wu Dao is so overbearing. There won't be a place for me to stay in the 7-Star Sword sect? Does this Wu Dao really think he's the sect leader of the 7-Star Sword sect? If it was said who was the happiest at this moment, then it was undoubtedly Wu Yongqian who stood behind Wu Dao. Duan Lingtian, do you dare battle me? Wu Yongqian looked at Duan Lingtian, his eyes flickered with a fierce light, and the corners of his mouth curled into a cold and indifferent smile. As far as he was concerned, this was an opportunity. If he defeated this Duan Lingtian, then his foster father would surely be extremely satisfied. His status in his foster father's heart would rise with the tide. Peak Master, do you keep your word? Duan Lingtian still didn't pay attention to Wu Yongqian, and when Wu Yongqian's expression became exceedingly savage, he looked at Wu Dao and asked indifferently. His tone didn't contain any feelings. I, Wu Dao, am the Peak Master of Migres Peak. Would I deceive a little kid like you? Wu Dao sneered when he heard Duan Lingtian, and his eyes were suffused with a trace of bright light. He knew that Duan Lingtian had taken the bait. Even though he'd heard of the matter of Duan Lingtian killing Shihao with a cultivation at the 6th level of the Origin Core stage, and knew that Duan Lingtian had the ability to surmount a cultivation to kill an enemy, but as far as he was concerned, even if the current Duan Lingtian broke through to the 7th level of the Origin Core stage, it would be impossible for the current Duan Lingtian to be a match for his foster son. Although his foster son's natural talent couldn't be considered to be high, he was a 9th level Origin Core stage inner court disciple at any rate. Even if Duan Lingtian broke through to the 7th level of the Origin Core stage, it was because he'd just broken through, and his foundation was unstable. Moreover, Qian. A wisp of coldness appeared on the corners of Wu Dao's mouth, and he suddenly spoke out. Foster father. Wu Yongqian withdrew his vicious gaze that descended onto Duan Lingtian, and looked respectfully at Wu Dao. In his heart, his foster father was the heavens. The heavens that couldn't be defied. Duan Lingtian frowned. What does this Wu Dao want to do? In next to no time, Duan Lingtian's face went grim when he saw a 3-foot-long blade appear out of thin air in Wu Dao's hand. Qian Yu's father's autumn water and properly experienced the ability of the number 1 disciple in our 7-Star Sword sect's outer court. Wu Dao passed the 3-foot-long blade that he'd just withdrawn from his spatial ring to Wu Yongqian. This 3-foot-long blade had a glossy blade that flickered with translucent light, and it was like an expanse of autumn water that swayed. Grade 6 Spirit Sword. Lucio, who stood beside Duan Lingtian, couldn't help but go grim when he saw the 3-foot-long blade in Wu Dao's hand, and he exclaimed in a low voice. Autumn water. Wasn't it the Grade 6 Spirit Sword in the possession of their Migres Peak's master, Wu Dao? He never imagined. For the sake of allowing his foster son, Wu Yongqian, to defeat Duan Lingtian, Wu Dao actually even withdrew the Grade 6 Spirit Sword he carried with him. Wu Dao's actions caused Lucio to feel slightly uncomfortable in his heart. As far as he was concerned, in this way, even if Wu Yongqian won, it would be an unfair victory. Yes, foster father. Wu Yongqian's eyes shone as he solemnly received the Grade 6 Spirit Sword, Autumn Water, and his body lightly trembled as he was slightly excited. Grade 6 Spirit Sword. Although as far as Wu Yongqian was concerned, even if he didn't have a Grade 6 Spirit Sword, it was impossible for Duan Lingtian to be a match for him, but now that he had the chance to use his foster father's Grade 6 Spirit Sword, it still caused him to feel a wave of delight. Don't disappoint me. Wu Dao said indifferently to Wu Yongqian. Don't worry, foster father. Wu Yongqian nodded solemnly as he held the Grade 6 Spirit Sword, Autumn Water, and his pair of fierce eyes descended onto Duan Lingtian as if choosing to swallow him up. Meanwhile, Duan Lingtian's expression eased up slightly. But the gaze he looked at Wu Dao with had instead become unfamiliar and icy cold. For the sake of making him become his personal disciple, this Wu Dao actually debased himself to such an extent that he even withdrew his Grade 6 Spirit Sword and gave it to Wu Yongqian. All for the sake of allowing Wu Yongqian to defeat him. If it was said that he was only displeased with Wu Dao before, then now he looked down upon Wu Dao from the bottom of his heart. As far as he was concerned, this was a person that couldn't afford to lose. Allowing an inner court disciple to deal with an outer court disciple like him was already an unfair victory, but now he actually even withdrew his Grade 6 Spirit Sword. What difference was this from cheating? A person like this wants to become my master? Duan Lingtian's face seemed to be covered in a layer of ice, and his gaze calmly stared at Wu Yongqian, who was glaring at him like a tiger watching its prey. He saw the confidence on Wu Yongqian's face. Does this Wu Yongqian really think that he can defeat me just because he possesses a grade 6 spirit sword? The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a wisp of imperceptible disdain. Meanwhile, Wu Dao took a few steps back, and under his gaze, Lu Qiu moved to the side as well and stopped to watch from the sidelines. For a time, an empty space appeared in the spacious audience hall. Duan Lingtian and Wu Yongqian stood facing each other. In Duan Lingtian's hand, a 3-foot-long blade appeared out of thin air, and it was precisely the grade 7 spirit sword he'd withdrawn from his spatial ring. Even though Duan Lingtian was a grade 7 weapons craftsman now, and was even able to refine a grade 7 spirit weapon that provided an amplification of 31%, but he hadn't refined it yet. This grade 7 spirit sword was the spoils of the battle he'd obtained in the past. Its amplification ability was ordinary. Duan Lingtian, my foster father wants to take you as his personal disciple because he thinks highly of you. Not only do you not feel deeply grateful, you actually dare to refuse. Today I, Wu Yongqian, will properly teach you a lesson on behalf of my foster father, and let you know that there's always someone stronger. At the same time that Wu Yongqian's cold and indifferent voice sounded out, the grade 6 spirit sword in his hand, Autumn Water, was suffused with traces of a pulsating sheen of origin energy. His origin energy skyrocketed and raged. Whoosh. Instantly, numerous lifelike ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form above Wu Yongqian. Chapter 326. Wu Yongqian, a 7-star sword sect inner court disciple, a 9th-level origin core stage martial artist. When he exerted his full strength, he was able to exert the strength of 120 ancient mammoths. Now relying on the grade 6 spirit sword, Autumn Water. Above Wu Yongqian, 164 ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form. Autumn Water, the grade 6 spirit sword, amplified the strength of 44 ancient mammoths for Wu Yongqian. A grade 6 spirit sword that amplifies strength by 37%? The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a wisp of disdain, and the grade 7 spirit sword in his hand abruptly shook, drawing out a dazzling and resplendent sword flower. At the same time, boom, origin energy leaped and bloomed on the grade 7 spirit sword, and it was incomparably gorgeous. Instantly, 110 ancient mammoth silhouettes appeared above Duan Lingtian. Suddenly, along with the rhythmic movement of the origin energy on the grade 7 spirit sword in his hand, the ancient mammoth silhouettes increased explosively to 140, the strength of 140 ancient mammoths. 8th level of the origin core stage? Wu Dao, who was standing in the distance, narrowed his eyes when he saw the strength Duan Lingtian displayed. A hint of astonishment appeared on his face. He was able to discern that Duan Lingtian was only able to exert such a formidable strength by relying on a grade 7 spirit sword with a cultivation at the 8th level of the origin core stage. 8th level origin core stage at the age of a little over 20? A single profound origin fruit allowed him to directly break through from the 6th level of the origin core stage to the 8th level of the origin core stage? Wu Dao was indescribably shocked in his heart, and he slightly didn't dare believe that the scene before his eyes was real. However, all this happened before his eyes, and he had no choice but to believe it. Only now did he realize. He'd still underestimated this Duan Lingtian. Now his heart slightly sank. Even though his foster son, Wu Yongqian, possessed a grade 6 spirit sword, he never imagined that Duan Lingtian had actually broken through to the 8th level of the origin core stage. He'd heard of the outer court martial competition from a few days ago. Duan Lingtian relied on a strength that was weaker than Shi Hao by over 20 ancient mammoths to kill Shi Hao. Presently, the strength his foster son, Wu Yongqian, exerted was merely the strength of 24 ancient mammoths more than Duan Lingtian. Taking a deep breath, Wu Dao calmed down his feelings, and his pair of sharp eyes stared fixedly at Duan Lingtian as his mood surged. Let me see if you're able to defeat a strong opponent like you did a few days ago during the outer court martial competition and defeat this useless foster son of mine. Useless adopted son. This was Wu Dao's evaluation of Wu Yongqian in his heart. All those years ago, the reason he'd taken Wu Yongqian as his foster son and brought Wu Yongqian back to the 7-star sword sect was because he'd taken a fancy to the natural talent Wu Yongqian revealed when he was young. Who would have thought that after a few years Wu Yongqian's talent gradually became mediocre, making him extremely disappointed. This time, when he heard of the deeds of Duan Lingtian, He originally thought that he would be able to take a personal disciple that would command the winds and clouds on the stage of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom in the future. Who knew that Duan Lingtian would actually resolutely refuse him? Lu Qiu stood in the distance and wasn't surprised when he saw the strength Duan Lingtian revealed. Today, before arriving at the main peak, Dubhe Peak, he'd already witnessed Duan Lingtian's strength on the chain bridge, and he knew that Duan Lingtian was already an 8th level Origin Core Stage martial artist now. 8th level of the Origin Core Stage? Wu Yongqian stared at Duan Lingtian, his fierce eyes were suffused with coldness, and his voice was low and hoarse. Duan Lingtian, today, I'll defeat you by relying on my foster father's grade 6 spirit sword, Autumn Water. I want to let you know that the gap between an inner court disciple and an outer court disciple is something you're unable to surmount. Although he now knew that Duan Lingtian was an 8th level Origin Core Stage martial artist, Wu Yongqian wasn't afraid in the slightest. As far as he was concerned, the rumors about the outer court martial competition from a few days ago were most likely exaggerated by the group of 7-star sword sect outer court disciples. He didn't believe that Duan Lingtian had such ability. He suspected that actually, Duan Lingtian was already a 7th level Origin Core Stage martial artist at that time, but intentionally concealed his cultivation before others. Later on, during the battle with Shihao, he revealed the strength of a 7th level Origin Core Stage martial artist at the most critical moment, and only then was he able to kill the careless Shihao. Now, when he saw Duan Lingtian reveal a cultivation at the 8th level of the Origin Core Stage, he was even more certain of his past guesses in his heart. Profound Origin Fruit. It was impossible to allow a 6th level Origin Core Stage martial artist to directly break through to the 8th level of the Origin Core Stage. If Duan Lingtian knew what Wu Yongqian was thinking now, he wouldn't be surprised. A profound Origin Fruit was indeed unable to allow him to break through to the 8th level of the Origin Core Stage, and the current him wasn't at the 8th level of the Origin Core Stage. He was only a 7th level Origin Core Stage martial artist. Because of the uniqueness of the cultivation method he cultivated, the 9 Dragons War Sovereign technique, it was able to allow him to possess a strength that wasn't inferior to an 8th level Origin Core Stage martial artist when he was at the 7th level of the Origin Core Stage. The gap between an inner court disciple and an outer court disciple is something I'm unable to surmount? Duan Lingtian lightly smiled when he heard Wu Yongqian's provocative words, and his eyes narrowed into a line. I don't know about other inner court disciples. But you, Wu Yongqian, I really don't take you to heart. He'd always been someone that respected him tenfold. This Wu Yongqian had aroused killing intent towards him earlier, and although he didn't pay any attention to it, it didn't mean that he didn't care. Inner court disciple? So what? I'll still CK you to the point you're unable to get up. A cold light flashed within Duan Lingtian's eyes. You're courting death. Duan Lingtian's words entered into Wu Yongqian's ears and caused Wu Yongqian to completely go berserk. His figure flashed out, and his entire body seemed to have transformed into a gust of wind that swept towards Duan Lingtian. Nether Sword Technique. At the same time that Wu Yongqian's figure flashed out, his hoarse and low voice contained killing intent mixed within. The grade 6 spirit sword, Autumn Water, in his hand abruptly transformed into nothingness before appearing once more, and not a short moment later, it once again vanished without a trace. Meanwhile, Wu Yongqian had already arrived nearby Duan Lingtian. Nether Sword Technique? Relying on his formidable spiritual force and Samsara Emperor Wu's lifetime worth of martial experience, Duan Lingtian saw through the profundity of the sword skill Wu Yongqian executed with a single glance. This set of sword skill was nothing more than paying attention to catching one off guard. This was very similar to his sword drawing technique. But its speed was inferior to the sword drawing arts. The Nether Sword Technique paid attention to the combination of speed and speed. When it was fast, it was like a gale of lightning, causing one to be unable to capture it with the naked eye. When it was slow, it was like a cool breeze blowing past the clouds, confusing the opponent's line of sight. Whoosh! Duan Lingtian only felt a gust of wind assault his face. It was Wu Yongqian flashing before him, and the Nether Sword Technique that caused one to be unable to fathom followed him like a shadow, and it had only just appeared when it vanished without a trace in the next moment. Of course, although Duan Lingtian's eyes were unable to capture the location of Wu Yongqian's sword strike, his spiritual force was able to clearly sense it. Suddenly Wu Yongqian shouted explosively. His eyes were crimson red as he exerted all his strength. Duan Lingtian was able to clearly sense with his spiritual force that the grade 6 spirit sword, Autumn Water, in Wu Yongqian's hand was currently flashing towards his abdomen with the intention of heavily injuring him. Although this Wu Yongqian wishes for nothing more than to kill me, Wu Dao hasn't spoken, so he doesn't dare kill me in the end. Right at this instant, such a thought emerged in Duan Lingtian's heart. In the next moment, Duan Lingtian's gaze went slightly cold. Sword drawing arts. Duan Lingtian's hand that held the sword shook, and the grade 7 spirit sword moved. Swish. The sword struck out like a bolt of lightning and vanished before Wu Yongqian's eyes. Although the strength Duan Lingtian displayed now was inferior to the strength of an entire 24 ancient mammoths from Wu Yongqian. However, the characteristic of the sword drawing arts was speed. Amongst the martial skills in the world, only speed was invincible. So fast. In the distance, Wu Dao and Lu Qiu stared fixedly at the exchange between Duan Lingtian and Wu Yongqian, and they were shocked by the speed at which Duan Lingtian drew his sword. The speed of the grade 7 spirit sword flashed out was actually not the slightest bit inferior to the grade 6 spirit sword, Autumn Water, in Wu Yongqian's hand. Duan Lingtian's eyes were unable to capture the sword in Wu Yongqian's hand, but it didn't mean that they were unable to. Now, relying on their formidable cultivations, they were able to clearly capture the trajectory of the spirit swords in Duan Lingtian and Wu Yongqian's hands flashed past. The grade 7 spirit sword in Duan Lingtian's hand caught up to the speed of the grade 6 spirit sword in Wu Yongqian's hand. Clang. A wave of the sound of iron weapons colliding sounded out. It was the grade 7 spirit sword in Duan Lingtian's hand that had blocked the grade 6 spirit sword in Wu Yongqian's hand in the nick of time. This scene caused Wu Dao's gaze to focus. He knew clearly in his heart that the outcome of this exchange would be decided in this exchange. If either Duan Lingtian or Wu Yongqian was able to suppress the other in a head-on collision, then they would obtain victory in one go. The speed of your sword skill isn't bad, but unfortunately your strength is far inferior to mine. Wu Yongqian's hoarse voice revealed a trace of a sneer, and the origin energy on the grade 6 spirit sword, Autumn Water, in his hand suddenly skyrocketed. The strength of 164 ancient mammoths gushed out without holding back in the slightest. He wanted to blast away the grade 7 spirit sword in Duan Lingtian's hand and heavily injure Duan Lingtian in one go. Is that so? When he heard Wu Yongqian, Duan Lingtian's handsome face with slanted brows and starry eyes bloomed with a brilliant smile, and his smile contained strong confidence mixed within. This scene caused Wu Dao to be stunned. Where did this Duan Lingtian get such great confidence from? Lu Qiu, who stood at the side, stared fixedly at the scene before his eyes as well. He wasn't present when Duan Lingtian made a move to kill Shihao the last time, and he felt regretful. Today he wanted to properly experience Duan Lingtian's method of defeating a stronger opponent with the weak. He had confidence in Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian's eyes squinted as he felt the violent energy that instantly gushed out from the grade 6 spirit sword, Autumn Water, in Wu Yongqian's hand, and a cold light flashed within. Quake energy. At practically the instant he felt the energy on the grade 6 spirit sword skyrocket, Duan Lingtian made a move and executed the formidable ability bestowed upon him by the 9 Dragons War Sovereign Techniques WRM Python transformation. Instantly, the origin energy on the grade 7 spirit sword in Duan Lingtian's hand started to tremble imperceptibly. The frequency of the trembling became faster and faster. Clang. The 2 spirit swords that had just separated collided together once again. Right when Wu Dao thought that the grade 7 spirit sword in Duan Lingtian's hand was about to be blasted flying by the grade 6 spirit sword in Wu Yongqian's hand. Umph. A muffled groan suddenly sounded out. Wu Yongqian's face was livid, and the hand that held the sword seemed to have started trembling, but he gritted his teeth and endured it. Chapter 327. Wu Yongqian's hand that held the sword was dripping with blood, and his hand trembled along with the sword, but he still gritted his teeth and forcefully endured. Let's see how long you can last. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a sneer when he saw this. The frequency of the quake energy was raised to the limit. Instantly. Ah! Wu Yongqian emitted a shrill cry and let go of the grade 6 spirit sword, Autumn Water, in his hand, but it was still too late. The bones in his wrist were shattered by the quake energy, and one of his arms was completely limp, weak and boneless. The bones in his entire arm were shattered from the quake. Clang. The grade 6 spirit sword, Autumn Water, was blasted flying by the grade 7 spirit sword in Duan Lingtian's hand before crashing to the ground. Swoosh. Duan Lingtian withdrew his sword and slapped out with his palm. Origin energy raged as he slapped Wu Yongqian, whose origin energy had been temporarily shattered by the quake energy flying. Bang! Accompanied by a wave of shrill cries, Wu Yongqian crashed to the ground. Wu Yongqian, whose face was ghastly pale, tightly held onto the hand that held the sword earlier, and no matter how Duan Lingtian used his other hand to shake, the hand that held the sword, and his entire arm didn't have any reaction, crippled. No. 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 Wu Yongqian's shrill cries stopped abruptly, and at this moment he seemed to have become completely numb to the pain. His face was ghastly pale as his fierce eyes stared wide open, and he didn't dare believe that all this was real. His right hand, the most important hand, was completely crippled. Die. I want you dead. I want you dead. Wu Yongqian abruptly stood up, and his eyes emitted dense hatred as he flashed towards Duan Lingtian, wanting to risk his life against Duan Lingtian. His right hand was crippled, but he still had his left hand. Wu Yongqian's left hand was suffused with origin energy as he slapped out towards Duan Lingtian, wanting to kill Duan Lingtian to vent the hatred in his heart. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a cold smile when he saw this scene. This Wu Yongqian wasn't a match for him by relying on a grade 6 spirit sword. Could it be that he thinks he's a match for him empty-handed? Naive. Laughable. Enough. Suddenly an angry shout rang out, causing Wu Yongqian, who was running towards Duan Lingtian, to stop and freeze in place. Although his face was still filled with unwillingness, he didn't dare to make any more movements. Haven't you embarrassed yourself enough? The expression of the Migres Peak master, Wu Dao, was as unsightly could be, and his pair of fierce eyes descended onto Wu Yongqian as he spoke in a low voice. Wu Yongqian lowered his head in shame. But the moment he lowered his head, his eyes swept towards Duan Lingtian, filled with bloodthirsty hatred. He wanted nothing more than to tear Duan Lingtian into pieces and grind his bones to dust. Peak Master, can I leave now? Duan Lingtian looked at Wu Dao and said calmly. Wu Daojing was still angry. He snorted coldly and ignored Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian did not mind. He nodded to Lu Qiu, and the two of them left the Migres Palace together. For a time, only Wu Dao and Lu Qiu remained in the spacious audience hall. Wu Dao put away the grade 6 spirit sword, Autumn Water, then with a raise of his hand, a medicinal pill shot out from his hand and flashed straight towards Wu Yongqian. This grade 6 great recovery pill ought to be able to allow your right arm to heal completely. Thank you, foster father, thank you, foster father. Wu Yongqian received the grade 6 great recovery pill and had an overjoyed expression as he hurriedly consumed it. In Cloud Continent, healing medicinal pills were divided into 9 grades. The lowest grade was undoubtedly the gold injury pill. The gold injury pill was further divided into grade 9 gold injury pill, grade 8 gold injury pill, and grade 7 gold injury pill. The middle grade healing medicinal pill was the great recovery pill. It was divided into grade 6 great recovery pill, grade 5 great recovery pill, and grade 4 great recovery pill. As for the high grade healing medicinal pill, the life recovery pill, not to mention the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, even in the entire Darkhan dynasty, it was an existence of legends. According to legend, the life recovery pill was divided into 3 grades. They were respectively grade 3 life recovery pill, grade 2 life recovery pill, and grade 1 life recovery pill. Supposedly, the grade 1 life recovery pill was capable of reviving the dead and regrowing bones. So long as one still had a single breath left, one could be saved by using the grade 1 life recovery pill. Of course, this was only a legend. But in next to no time, Wu Yongqian's delighted expression completely froze, and he shook his head with a sense of loss and sorrow. It's useless, the grade 6 great recovery pill is useless. What? Wu Dao was shocked as he knew that Wu Yongqian had injured his tendons and bones in the battle with Duan Lingtian earlier, and that was why he bestowed the grade 6 great recovery pill. So long as the bone marrow wasn't injured, the grade 6 great recovery pill was capable of helping the cracked bones heal. But now the grade 6 great recovery pill was useless? Whoosh! Wu Dao's figure flashed and gave rise to a gust of wind, and he arrived before Wu Yongqian in the blink of an eye. His speed was so swift that it was more than 10 times faster than Wu Yongqian. Wu Dao's hand grabbed onto Wu Yongqian's limp arm, and his origin energy fused into it as he inspected the injury. In the end, his pupils constricted and he had an astonished expression. What exactly did that Duan Lingtian use? It actually shattered your arm bone to such an extent. The bone marrow within your arm bone is completely destroyed. Bone marrow destroyed. An injury like this, unless it was the legendary life recovery pill that could revive the dead and regrow flesh and bones, Otherwise, it was utterly impossible to recover. Moreover, the life recovery pill must be consumed within an hour of the injury. Otherwise, even if it was a grade 1 life recovery pill, it was still powerless to save the situation. Foster father, my hand. My hand is crippled. Wu Yongqian's face was ghastly pale, and his body lightly trembled as he wasn't willing to believe that all this was real. This hand of his had an extraordinary meaning to him. Since a young age he'd always used this hand to cultivate his martial skills. Now that this hand was crippled, his strength would be greatly reduced. If he wanted to use his other hand to once again cultivate his high-grade profound rank sword skill nethersword technique, to the perfection stage, he would undoubtedly have to spend several years of bitter effort. In this way it would surely delay his cultivation. His entire life was completely ruined. Thinking up to here, Wu Yongqian only felt as if he'd fallen into an icy pool, and his entire body was terrifyingly cold. In his heart, hatred that came from the bones arose. Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian. I can't live under the same sky as you. Can't live under the same sky. Wu Yongqian's eyes stared till they were perfectly round, as if they were about to be shattered by his glare. What happened earlier? Tell me in detail. Wu Dao, who stood at the side, was dazed for a moment before returning to his senses. His eyes emitted a resplendent luster as he looked at Wu Yongqian and asked in a low voice. As for Wu Yongqian's hand being crippled, he didn't seem to care much. Perhaps he'd long since stopped holding any expectations towards Wu Yongqian. Wu Yongqian noticed this as well. His heart was as cold as ice, and in the depths of his heart, his hatred towards Duan Lingtian grew even deeper. But he still answered Wu Dao honestly. I originally thought that with my strength that far surpassed his, it would be sufficient to directly crush him. Who knew that just as my strength leaked out, his origin energy seemed to have started trembling, and the speed of the trembling became faster and faster. In the end, the trembling of his origin energy directly shattered my origin energy, causing me to be powerless to continue. Not only that, when his origin energy passed through his grade 7 spirit sword to the sword in my hand, my sword and hand both started trembling along with it. I forcefully held on for an instant, and the web between my thumb and index finger was split open by him. As he spoke up to here, Wu Yongqian's voice started trembling slightly. After that, I continued to hold on. The trembling of his origin energy instantly spread throughout my entire arm. Now it looks like if I hadn't stopped in time, perhaps all the bones in my body would have been shattered by him. Wu Yongqian's heart was filled with regret. If he knew earlier that Duan Lingtian had such ability, he would surely have chosen to abandon his sword when the web between his thumb and index finger was split open. In that way, at most his web between his thumb and index finger would be injured, and his right arm would absolutely not be injured. But unfortunately, there was no medicine for regret in this world. No matter how much regret he felt now, it was of no use no matter how much he regretted it. Duan Lingtian. In the end, Wu Yongqian transformed all his regret into ghastly hatred, and he vented it all onto Duan Lingtian. His eyes emitted a bloodthirsty sheen, and he was simply even more ferocious than the most venomous viper. Origin energy? Trembling? After Wu Dao finished listening to Wu Yongqian's description, he slightly muttered to himself. That Duan Lingtian relied on this to defeat someone stronger? This doesn't seem to be a martial skill, nor is it force. Could it be that it's a technique that comes with the cultivation method he cultivates? Or perhaps, it's an origin energy cultivation method that's separated from martial skills? Looks like I have to find a time to have a good chat with him in private. As he thought up to this point, Wu Dao made a decision in his heart, and traces of a greedy sheen appeared within his eyes. If he was able to grasp this technique, he dared say that no one below the void initiation stage was a match for him. Outside the primeval forest, in the tranquil sky, two extremely swift figures flashed out from the primeval forest and floated high in the sky. The owners of these two figures were a young girl and an old woman. The old woman in azure clothes respectfully followed behind the young girl with a humble expression, as if she was a servant with a lowly status. The young girl in yellow clothes had a pretty and cute appearance, and her eyes moved slightly as they flickered with a mischievous sheen. Suddenly, hiss hiss, two little heads stretched out from under the young girl's sleeve, and they were two little pythons that ceaselessly flicked their tongues. The two little pythons, one black and one white, their gold and silver eyes were looking towards the same direction in the distance, and traces of reluctance were mixed within their gazes. Little black, little white, both of you miss Big Brother Ling Tian again? The yellow-clothed young girl rubbed the little heads of the two little pythons and smiled playfully, and the two little dimples on her face were extremely cute. Hiss hiss, the two little pythons nodded like humans. We're leaving. I'll bring both of you to look for Big Brother Ling Tian in the future, alright? When Big Brother Ling Tian sees both of you next time, we'll surely give him a huge shock. The yellow-clothed young girl revealed a crafty smile. Hiss hiss, the two little pythons leaped with joy when they heard the yellow-clothed young girl. Young miss, we should leave. The azure-clothed old woman that floated behind the yellow-clothed young girl bowed as she spoke to the yellow-clothed young girl. Yes, Jianghu, let's go. The yellow-clothed young girl nodded. Whoosh. Instantly, the azure-clothed old woman raised her hand, and an extremely strong and shapeless force enveloped her and the yellow-clothed young girl. Suddenly the air shook. Chapter 328. After Duan Lingtian and Lu Qiu left Migres Hall together, they returned along the path they came from. Duan Lingdian. On the way, Lu Qiu was slightly hesitant to speak as if he wanted to say something, yet seemed to have some misgivings. Elder Lu Qiu, you've saved my life and have given me a new lease on life. If you have something to say, then speak frankly. Duan Lingtian lightly smiled, and his smile was like a spring breeze caressing his face. Lu Qiu nodded, then continued. Although I don't know what ability you relied on to defeat someone stronger than you, kill Shihao, and even defeat the foster son of the Peak Master Wu Yongqian. However, as the saying goes, an ordinary man is innocent, but treasures are a crime. Today you revealed such terrifying ability before the Peak Master. I'm afraid the Peak Master will arouse covetous thoughts towards the ability I possess, right? Duan Lingtian continued Lu Qiu's words, and the corners of his mouth curled into an indescribable smile. Lu Qiu nodded with a serious expression. Thank you for your concern, Elder Lu Qiu. But I had no other choice at that time and could only do that. Duan Lingtian's eyes narrowed into a line and he lightly smiled. Indeed, he had no other choice. If he didn't use quake energy, it would be impossible for him to be a match for Wu Yongqian. Once he lost at the hands of Wu Yongqian, then according to the agreement between him and the Migres Peak's master, Wu Dao, he must become Wu Dao's personal disciple. For the sake of making Wu Dao dispel this thought, he naturally had to attack with his full strength and defeat Wu Yongqian. Only in this way would he be able to escape. I really don't understand why you didn't agree to the Peak Master's request. If you become the Peak Master's disciple, then to a certain extent, you'll be able to obtain his protection. At least, Zhao Lin would be afraid of you because of this and wouldn't dare act rashly. Lu Qiu shook his head, and was extremely puzzled by Duan Lingtian's decision. As far as he was concerned, if Duan Lingtian were to take their Migres Peak's master, Wu Dao, as his master, it would be extremely beneficial. Duan Lingtian only smiled when he heard Lu Qiu, and didn't say anything further. He had his own ideas. Not to mention the fact that he had inherited the memories of Reincarnation Emperor Wu, there was no need for him to become the disciple of someone weaker than Reincarnation Emperor Wu. Anyone with a discerning eye could see the reason why Wu Dao wanted to take him in as his personal disciple. Wu Dao didn't really want to take him in as his personal disciple. Instead, he wanted to use him to satisfy his own vanity. Duan Lingtian believed that so long as he was willing, the Seven-Star Sword Sect's sect leader would probably fight to take him as a personal disciple. The natural talent he revealed now had already surpassed the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. In the history of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, there had never been an existence that possessed such a cultivation at his age. Suddenly, it's you? Duan Lingtian, who was walking on the mountain road, heard a thunder-like explosion, which woke him up from a dream. He glanced over. Duan Lingtian saw a person walking up Dubhe Peak along the mountain path. This was a young man around the age of 25 or 26 that wore the uniform of a Seven-Star Sword Sect inner court disciple. With just a glance, Duan Lingtian felt that this person was slightly familiar. This inner court disciple looked at Duan Lingtian with eyes that emitted flames, and he seemed as if he wished for nothing more than to directly charge over and fight Duan Lingtian to the death. Fan Jian? Lu Qiu, who was by Duan Lingtian's side, obviously recognized this inner court disciple. Meanwhile, the inner court disciple noticed Lu Qiu, and he took a deep breath before slightly bowing respectfully to Lu Qiu. Elder Lu Qiu. What? You know Duan Lingtian? Lu Qiu looked at Fan Jian and asked with slight surprise. He clearly saw the gaze Fan Jian shot at Duan Lingtian earlier. It was a gaze that was filled with hatred and rage. He couldn't help but be slightly curious. According to his knowledge, Fan Jian had left the Seven-Star Sword Sect half a year ago and went on a long journey. Looking at Fan Jian's travel-worn appearance, he'd obviously just returned. Whereas Duan Lingtian had only entered the Seven-Star Sword sect half a year ago, and he was from a small kingdom under the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Logically speaking, it was impossible for Fan Jian to know Duan Lingtian. Not only do I know him. Fan Jian looked at Duan Lingtian with a ferocious gaze and a face that emitted resentment. Do I know you? Duan Lingtian frowned and was slightly speechless. There's nothing wrong with this inner court disciple's head, right? Although he felt that Fan Jian was slightly familiar. But he remembered that during the half-year he'd arrived at the Seven-Star Sword sect, he seemed to have utterly not come into contact with any inner court disciple. Looks like you've really forgotten. Then I'll properly remind you. Half a year ago, Black Bamboo City restaurant. Fan Jian gnashed his teeth. This fellow asked the people by his side to throw him out of the restaurant that day, causing him to lose face. Now, he'd actually completely forgotten about it. Fan Jian originally thought that he'd already tossed that matter to the back of his mind. Only when he saw Fan Jian once again did he notice that the resentment in his heart hadn't vanished. Half a year ago? Black Bamboo City restaurant? In next to no time, Duan Lingtian's eyes flashed as he completely recalled. You're that inner court disciple that intended to forcefully buy the infant rat in my possession with Huaxian and Yuan Wu at the Black Bamboo City restaurant that day? Umph. Looks like you've finally remembered. Fan Jian sneered when he saw Duan Lingtian recognizing him. But he was slightly bewildered in his heart. This young man had actually become an outer court disciple now. Looks like the guess of him, Huaxian and Yuan Wu that day was correct. He really did appear in Black Bamboo City that day because he intended to enter the Seven-Star Sword sect. Moreover, this young man seemed to know Huaxian and Yuan Wu. Could it be that Huaxian and Yuan Wu had already taught him a lesson? Huaxian? Yuan Wu? The corners of Lucio's mouth twitched when he heard Duan Lingtian. He vaguely realized something. He still remembered that half a year ago, not long after Duan Lingtian entered the Seven-Star Sword sect, he had a conflict with Huaxian and Yuan Wu, and even entered the life and death arena. Huaxian and Yuan Wu were killed by Duan Lingtian in a single move on the Migres Peak's life and death arena. It was precisely after that battle that Duan Lingtian became a famous person on Migres Peak. At that time he felt it was slightly strange. Duan Lingtian had just entered the Seven-Star Sword sect, and logically speaking, it was impossible for him to have such a large conflict with Huaxian and Yuan Wu, and it was actually to the extent that he had to ascend the life and death arena to determine life and death. Now, when he heard Duan Lingtian he seemed to have understood something. So it turned out that Huaxian and Yuan Wu had once wanted to forcefully buy Duan Lingtian's things. Perhaps, it was precisely because of this that the conflict occurred. Fan Jian, Huaxian, and Yuan Wu had a conflict with Duan Lingtian at that time? Lucio's heart jerked as a bad premonition arose within his heart. Yes, I remember now. Duan Lingtian nodded indifferently, then looked calmly at Fan Jian with a carefree expression. Umph. Slight rage arose on Fan Jian's face when he saw Duan Lingtian acting as if nothing had happened, and he said in a low voice, "You're called Duan Lingtian, right? Since you know that the two outer court disciples that were with me that day were Huaxian and Yuan Wu, I presume you've already been taught a lesson by them. However, that's that. They taught you a lesson because they wanted to settle the debt between the two of you. The debt you owe me, Fan Jian, has yet to be settled." Fan Jian looked at Duan Lingtian, and his gaze gradually went icy cold. Yes, I've indeed been taught a lesson by them. Duan Lingtian nodded in all seriousness, then glanced deeply at Fan Jian and said in his heart, "However, for the sake of teaching me a lesson they threw away their lives as well." Very good. Fan Jian's face revealed a gloomy smile. That day in Black Bamboo City, you had a nascent soul martial artist protecting you. But now you're in the Seven-Star Sword sect. No one can protect you. So what? Duan Lingtian laughed, and he laughed extremely brilliantly. Now he was able to discern it. This Fan Jian had probably just returned to the Seven-Star Sword sect. He remembered that at that time he didn't know if it was Huaxian or Yuan Wu, but they seemed to have said that Fan Jian had left the Seven-Star Sword sect and went on a long journey. Now it would seem that Fan Jian ought to have just returned. How about it? Fan Jian's face sank when he saw the smile on Duan Lingtian's face, and a cold light flickered within his eyes. Duan Lingtian, that day you caused me to lose face in public. Today I'll give you a chance. You crawl under my crotch and everything between us will be written off. The smile on Duan Lingtian's face completely froze when he heard Fan Jian. Crawl under my pants? Instantly, raging flames leaped about in the depths of Duan Lingtian's eyes, and it seemed as if it could ignite everything Duan Lingtian was enraged. Did this Fan Jian really think that he was afraid of him? Lu Qiu's face abruptly went gloomy, then he looked at Fan Jian and shouted out in shock. Fan Jian, apologize to Duan Lingtian right now. Lu Qiu felt Duan Lingtian's rage. Fan Jian was frightened by Lu Qiu's sudden shout, and he frowned and was slightly displeased. Although he was from Migres Peak and had a good relationship with Lu Qiu, but Lu Qiu acting like this would undoubtedly cause him to lose face in public. Elder Lu Qiu. Fan Jian's face sank and he wanted to say something, but he hadn't finished speaking when his face froze, and his eyes emitted traces of disbelief and terror. Because it was at this moment that he received Lu Qiu's voice transmission. Fan Jian, half a year ago, Duan Lingtian had just entered the 7-star sword sect when he killed Hua Xian and Yuan Wu on the life and death arena. Later on he killed a 6th level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciple. A few days ago during the Outer Court martial competition, Duan Lingtian killed the number 1 disciple in the Outer Court, Shi Hao. Just earlier the foster son of my Migres Peak's master Wu Dao Wu Yongqian, in existence at the 9th level of the Origin Core Stage. Only a single move and lost at his hands. If you don't want to cause trouble and end up like Hua Xian and Yuan Wu, then apologize right now. Lu Qiu's voice was like a thunderclap that blasted Fan Jian to the point he was shocked. This Duan Lingtian had only entered the 7-star sword sect for half a year, and had already done so many shocking things? Moreover, even senior brother Wu Yongqian wasn't a match for him? Forget about Hua Xian, Yuan Wu and Shi Hao, they were only outer court disciples and he didn't take them seriously. But Wu Yongqian? But they were inner court senior brothers that even he felt inferior to. Now even Wu Yongqian had lost at the hands of Duan Lingtian. If he were to go against Duan Lingtian, the outcome could be imagined. Although he wasn't willing to believe it, Fan Jian knew clearly in his heart that it was impossible for Elder Lu Qiu to deceive him. Duan Lingtian's gaze went slightly cold, and when he saw Fan Jian greet Lu Qiu, his throat seemed as if it was choked by someone, and he was unable to speak any longer. He'd already guessed it. Chapter 329. Duan Lingtian, I'm sorry. Fan Jian's face slightly trembled and was slightly distorted. In the end, he seemed to have made a great decision as he gritted his teeth and apologized to Duan Lingtian. His face was filled with unwillingness and didn't have the slightest sincerity. Today, out of respect for Elder Lu Qiu, I can bury the hatchet with you. However, as the saying goes, spilled water can't be undone. Duan Lingtian looked at Fan Jian and his gaze became slightly icy cold. Since some words have been spoken, then they must be paid the price. At practically the instant Duan Lingtian finished speaking, Lu Qiu and Fan Jian's expressions changed. Duan Lingtian moved. Swish. The great 7-spirit sword that appeared out of thin air in Duan Lingtian's hand seemed to have transformed into a bolt of lightning, whistling past and disappearing in a flash. At practically the same time. Ah! Fan Jian emitted a shrill cry. The little finger on his right hand was cut off by Duan Lingtian. Fresh blood splattered as the severed finger fell to the ground. This was the price that Duan Lingtian wanted Fan Jian to pay. Fan Jian took a deep breath, his face flushed red, and origin energy pulsed at the wound on his little finger, temporarily stopping the bleeding. Just when Fan Jian's gaze fell on the severed finger on the ground and was thinking of picking it up and finding an alchemist to connect it. Swish. As if he'd realized Fan Jian's intentions, the grade 7-spirit sword in Duan Lingtian's hand shook and flashed out, picking up the severed finger and sweeping it out of W Peak, falling into the bottomless abyss and disappearing. Now, even if Fan Jian ran down W Peak and found the severed finger, it would be impossible to connect it. Duan Lingtian. This scene caused Fan Jian's eyes to turn crimson red as he stared fixedly at Duan Lingtian. At this moment, Fan Jian seemed to have transformed into a fierce beast that opened its bloody mouth and wanted to swallow Duan Lingtian. His chest was filled with restless flames of rage that could gush out at any moment. The enmity between you and me is now written off. Duan Lingtian ignored the enraged Fan Jian and spoke in a calm tone. He didn't wait for Fan Jian's reply and casually put away the grade 7 spirit sword in his hand and walked down W Peak. At this moment, some of the inner disciples who were passing by were dumbfounded as they watched Duan Lingtian leave. Who was this outer sect disciple? He was actually so valiant. He chopped off the pinky of an inner disciple and swept it into the bottomless abyss, not giving the other party a chance to reconnect it. Fan Jian, take care of yourself. Lu Qiu took a deep look at the furious Fan Jian, shook his head and sighed. The saying, trouble comes from the mouth, was used to describe the current Fan Jian. He could tell that even though Duan Lingtian had recognized Fan Jian, he was still calm and did not show any signs of anger. In other words, Duan Lingtian had no intention of doing anything to Fan Jian at that time. Only when Fan Jian threatened to let Duan Lingtian crawl between his legs did Duan Lingtian emit a dense killing intent that caused even Lucio to feel fear. He knew that if it wasn't for him saving Duan Lingtian's life on the chain bridge today, Duan Lingtian would absolutely not let Fan Jian off so easily because of him. In Cloud Continent, the strong were respected. Every martial artist that possessed the heart of an expert had their own dignity. Duan Lingtian, the rare genius martial artist of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, his dignity undoubtedly surpassed ordinary martial artists. The person that trampled on his dignity could already be considered to be lucky to be able to survive. Fan Jian's eyes emitted dense coldness as he gazed at Duan Lingtian's disappearing figure. Asking him to write off all the enmity between him and Duan Lingtian just like this? No. He wasn't willing. However, when he thought of the strength Duan Lingtian possessed now, a trace of reason arose within his heart. Finally, reason prevailed and suppressed the flames of rage that filled his heart. When Fan Jian returned to his senses and saw the group of inner court disciples standing nearby and looking at him, his face sank and he shouted in a low voice, "What are you looking at?" The group of inner court disciples dispersed in an uproar when they saw Fan Jian fly into a rage out of humiliation. When they arrived near the chain bridge that led to Migres Peak, Duan Lingtian lightly smiled to Lucio and said, "Elder Lucio, I still have some other matters to attend to, so I won't be returning with you for now." "Okay, you go ahead." Lucio nodded, then walked towards the chain bridge by himself. Duan Lingtian looked at his surroundings, then circled around the various mountain roads of Migres Peak where streams of people flowed. After half an hour, he walked down Dubhe Peak after confirming that he wasn't followed by anyone. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian arrived near the entrance to the sect. The Seven-Star Sword sect had a place that specialized in rearing horses, and the Fergana horse that Duan Lingtian rode over half a year ago was left here. "I'm going to get the horse." Duan Lingtian walked into the stable and walked towards an outer court disciple that reared horses, then lightly smiled. "Number plate." The outer court disciple spoke as he raised his head to look at Duan Lingtian. With just a glance, the outer court disciple was stunned on the spot, then stared blankly at Duan Lingtian, then he rubbed his eyes and asked with slight uncertainty, "Your senior brother Duan Lingtian?" Duan Lingtian withdrew a number plate from his spatial ring and passed it to the outer court disciple, then nodded. "You know me?" "Of course." The outer court disciple hurriedly nodded with an excited expression. "Senior brother Duan Lingtian, I went to watch the outer court martial competition that day as well. You're too formidable. Even senior brother Shihao isn't a match for you." Duan Lingtian smiled. "Senior brother Duan Lingtian, the horse in the stable that this number plate corresponds to is yours?" Suddenly, the outer court disciple glanced at the number plate that Duan Lingtian passed over and asked respectfully. "Yes." Duan Lingtian nodded. "Senior brother Duan Lingtian, in the future, I'll surely properly get more delicious food for your horse, and guarantee that it'll be able to walk as if it's flying." The outer court disciple laughed slyly as he spoke to Duan Lingtian. "Then I'll thank you first." Duan Lingtian lightly smiled. "What's your name?" The outer court disciple instantly had an excited expression when he heard Duan Lingtian ask his name. "Senior brother Duan Lingtian, I'm called Mou, Mo as in ink and U as in corn." "I'll remember it, Mou." Duan Lingtian nodded. "Let's go, bring me to get the horse." "Yes." Hearing this, Mou hurriedly brought Duan Lingtian inside. "Mou, did you volunteer to come to the stable to look after the horses?" Duan Lingtian looked at this outer court disciple who was similar in age to him and asked curiously. "Yes." Mou nodded and laughed slyly. "My family's conditions are ordinary and my current strength isn't strong enough, so I don't dare to go deep into the primeval forest. So, I applied to look after these horses and this way I can earn a salary." Duan Lingtian nodded. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian saw his Fergana horse. Compared to half a year ago, the Fergana horse was much fatter. Come to think of it, in this half a year the Fergana horse was raised like a pig. It would be strange if it didn't gain weight. Mounting the Fergana horse, Duan Lingtian smiled to Mou. "Then I'll be leaving first. Take care, senior brother Duan Lingtian." Under Mou's respectful gaze, Duan Lingtian spurred his horse out of the stable and left the Seven-Star Sword sect's entrance to head towards Black Bamboo City. I wonder when I'll be able to possess even half of senior brother Duan Lingtian's strength. Mou's eyes were filled with anticipation and firmness. After half a year, Duan Lingtian once again came to Black Bamboo City. In next to no time he arrived at the courtyard house he bought that day. Young master. When Xiong Quan saw Duan Lingtian, he was as humble and respectful as before. Yes. Duan Lingtian nodded and slowly said, Xiong Quan, I came to look for you this time mainly for the sake of refining a grade 7 spirit cleansing pill for you to consume. After 3 months, your cultivation will be able to completely recover. Completely recover my cultivation? Xiong Quan's face was filled with excitement when he heard Duan Lingtian's words. His tiger-like eyes were misty. Thank you, young master, thank you, young master. Xiong Quan excitedly thanked Duan Lingtian. He could finally recover his cultivation from his prime, 6th level of the void prying stage. Moreover, during these past few years, although his cultivation couldn't recover to its former state, he didn't dare slack off in the slightest when it came to cultivation. He was confident that once his cultivation recovered to the 6th level of the void prying stage, it wouldn't be long before he would be able to smoothly break through to the 7th level of the void prying stage. After a short moment, Xiong Quan calmed down his feelings and realized that he'd neglected Duan Lingtian, and an apologetic expression appeared on his face. Young master, I'm sorry I was too excited. I can understand. Duan Lingtian nodded and didn't mind. Young master, you're able to refine a grade 7 spirit cleansing pill now. Then doesn't that mean you've already broken through to? Finally, Xiong Quan, who recovered from his shock, realized an extremely important problem. According to his knowledge, only an alchemist at the 7th level of the origin core stage or above was able to condense a grade 7 pill fire and refine a grade 7 medicinal pill. Exactly, I've broken through to the 7th level of the origin core stage. Duan Lingtian didn't conceal it and nodded. Congratulations, young master. At the same time that Xiong Quan congratulated Duan Lingtian, a tempestuous storm arose in his heart. It's only been half a year and young master has already broken through to the 7th level of the origin core stage? Presently, young master seems to be less than 21 years old, right? A 7th level origin core stage martial artist less than 21 years old. Just thinking about it caused Xiong Quan's scalp to go slightly numb. Alright, stand on guard for me and don't let anyone disturb me. I'll help you refine a grade 7 spirit cleansing pill. Duan Lingtian greeted Xiong Quan before walking into his former room. The room was extremely clean, as Xiong Quan had obviously asked someone to clean it on normal days. Duan Lingtian withdrew his cauldron, but didn't directly start refining the pill. What he wanted to refine now was a grade 7 spirit cleansing pill, and this grade 8 spirit weapon cauldron was already insufficient. Grade 7 pill fire was sufficient to directly cripple a grade 8 spirit weapon cauldron. So, what he wanted to do now was to refine a grade 7 spirit weapon cauldron. This grade 8 spirit weapon cauldron was given to him by Li Fei's grandfather that day, and it was a cauldron refined by the teacher of Li Fei's grandfather using high-quality weapons refining materials. He only needed to add some materials and Duan Lingtian would be able to advance it to a grade 7 spirit weapon. This was something that Duan Lingtian had planned since long ago. It was even to the extent that when he left the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom that day, amongst the materials he asked the various powers to gather, there were materials for refining a grade 7 spirit weapon cauldron. So, what he wanted to do now was to advance the grade of the cauldron. Chapter 330. After taking out the materials, Duan Lingtian's gaze squinted. With a flip of his palm, a strand of flame lit up at the center of his palm, raging, soaring, and spreading. This flame was golden in color, dazzling and resplendent. It was precisely a grade 7 weapon flame. Along with the rising of the grade 7 weapon flame, the pile of weapons refinement materials that Duan Lingtian took out quickly melted, transforming into pools of liquid before finally fusing together under the control of Duan Lingtian. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian had melted the grade 8 spirit weapon cauldron as well. Another pool of liquid appeared. In the end, the two pools of liquid converged together and gradually fused together. Under the control of the grade 7 weapon flame in Duan Lingtian's hand, they gradually fused into one, and didn't separate any longer. The entire process took more than an hour. The grade 7 weapon flame raged, and under the control of Duan Lingtian, the liquid that had completely fused into one gradually condensed into shape, transforming into the cauldron embryo of a cauldron. The cauldron embryo gradually became clear, and in the end, It transformed into an exquisite cauldron. Around the cauldron were 9 lifelike domineering divine dragons. I'll call you the 9-dragon cauldron in the future. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a smile as he looked at the cauldron before him, and along with the grade 7 weapon flame in his hand gradually extinguishing, the 9-dragon cauldron slowly descended into his hand. This was the first time Duan Lingtian was refining a weapon since becoming a grade 7 weapons craftsman. He who possessed the lifetime worth of weapons refinement experience of Emperor Wu of Samsara was able to easily refine this cauldron without encountering any resistance. Everything was so natural. Since he now possessed the grade 7 spirit weapon cauldron, the 9-dragon cauldron, Duan Lingtian could start refining the grade 7 spirit cleansing pill. The grade 7 spirit cleansing pill was sufficient to completely remove the remaining origin restriction goo in Xiongquan's body and allow Xiongquan to recover his strength at his prime. Once Xiongquan recovered, it would be an extremely great assistance to Duan Lingtian. At his prime, Xiongquan was a 6th-level void prying stage martial artist after all. It was precisely because of this that not long after he broke through to the 7th level of the Origin Core stage and became a grade 7 alchemist, he impatiently rushed back to Black Bamboo City for the sake of helping Xiongquan remove the remaining origin sealing parasite poison. The materials required for the grade 7 spirit cleansing pill were also one of the materials he asked the various powers of the Crimson Sky Kingdom's Imperial City to help gather. Now he could directly refine it. With a flip of his hand, Duan Lingtian once again condensed a wisp of golden flames in his hand. This strand of golden flame was different from the grade 7 weapon flame from before. It was completely condensed together and its color was deep. 7th grade alchemy fire. Duan Lingtian took out a pile of medicinal ingredients and combined them with the 9 dragons cauldron and grade 7 pill fire. After spending an entire 2 hours, he finally refined the grade 7 spirit cleansing pill. 3 grade 7 spirit cleansing pills. Duan Lingtian walked out of the room and passed the 3 grade 7 spirit cleansing pills into Xiongquan's hand, and at the same time he instructed. Xiongquan, your cultivation will recover to its prime in 3 months. At that time, I intend to make a trip to Solitary Peak. Solitary Peak, Shangguan Yen. It was precisely the person that the Boundless Sect's young sect leader asked Duan Lingtian to find that day. Duan Lingtian had a voice transmission jade slip in his hand, and it was the Boundless Sect's young sect leader who asked him to pass it to Shangguan Yen. Yes. Xiongquan replied respectfully, and a wisp of gratitude appeared in his eyes. He was once a member of the Boundless Sect, and Duan Lingtian was still able to remember the Boundless Sect's young sect leader's instructions, and it caused him to feel gratitude from the bottom of his heart. Recover well, I'll come look for you 3 months from now. Duan Lingtian informed Xiongquan before leaving the courtyard house and Black Bamboo City. After returning to the 7-star sword sect, he returned to Migres Peak. After vigilantly circling a few rounds around the various mountain roads that were filled with people flowing about on Migres Peak, and after half an hour, after confirming that it was impossible for anyone to follow him, Duan Lingtian turned into a remote mountain road and headed towards the peak of Migres Peak. Today, Zhao Lin's madness caused Duan Lingtian to realize that he was in danger. He had to be careful. Once Zhao Lin found an opportunity, he would be doomed eternally. After returning to the stalactite cave, Duan Lingtian calmed his heart and cultivated, waiting for the arrival of the inner court disciple test. During this 1 month of time, besides cultivating, Duan Lingtian also made a trip to the primeval forest, and during the process of killing fierce beasts, he tested out the scope of effect of the quake energy he possessed now. He still remembered that when he was at the 4th level of the Origin Core stage, the scope of effect of the quake energy was within the body of 10 ancient mammoths. When he was at the 5th level of the Origin Core stage, the scope of effect of the quake energy was within the body of 20 ancient mammoths. When he was at the 6th level of the Origin Core stage, the scope of effect of the quake energy was within the body of 30 ancient mammoths. Now, his cultivation had stepped into the 7th level of the Origin Core stage, and the scope of effect of the quake energy had increased to within the body of 50 ancient mammoths in one go. In other words, so long as his opponent's strength didn't exceed the strength of 50 ancient mammoths, then his quake energy would be able to be effective. Once my cultivation breaks through to the 9th level of the Origin Core stage, the 3rd form of the 9 Dragons War Sovereign technique, the WRM Python form, will be perfected. At that time, the quake energy will increase to the limit as well. But I wonder to what extent the quake energy will increase to at that time. Duan Lingtian took a deep breath, and his eyes flickered with bright lights that were filled with anticipation. A month of time quickly passed. The day of the inner court disciple test arrived as scheduled. Duan Lingtian left the stalactite cave, left the peak of Migres Peak, and arrived nearby the trade hall. Right when Duan Lingtian was about to step onto the chain bridge. Duan Lingtian. Suddenly, Duan Lingtian heard a slightly familiar voice sound out from behind him, but he was unable to recall who it was for a moment. Turning around, Duan Lingtian saw the young man that walked over with large strides. The young man's face squeezed out a trace of a smile. Hidong. Duan Lingtian replied with a smile. The person that arrived was none other than the Migres Peak 7th level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciple, Hidong. In next to no time, relying on his acute spiritual force and the lifetime of experience of Samsara Emperor Wu, Duan Lingtian was able to sense that there seemed to be a trace of a slight change on Hidong, and he had a guess in his heart. Duan Lingtian, you're intending to participate in the Inner Court Disciple Test, right? Hidong stood before Duan Lingtian and lightly smiled as he asked. He could be arrogant before other Migres Peak disciples, but before Duan Lingtian, he was unable to be arrogant in the slightest. In terms of natural talent, in terms of strength. He was unable to compare with this young man that was a little over 20. Duan Lingtian lightly smiled as he nodded. I heard that after you consumed the profound origin fruit, you broke through to the 8th level of the origin core stage in one go. Congratulations. Hidong congratulated with a smile on his face. Duan Lingtian nodded, and he wasn't the slightest bit surprised that Hidong was able to know his current cultivation. After all, many people saw him exert a strength comparable to the 8th level of the origin core stage that day, and now, perhaps it had already spread throughout Migres Peak. Congratulations to you too. Duan Lingtian lightly smiled and congratulated Hidong as well. Congratulations to you too? Hidong was stunned and was unable to react for a time. Duan Lingtian glanced deeply at Hidong, and the corners of his mouth curled into a smile. Didn't you break through to the 8th level of the origin core stage as well? You ought to be intending to participate in the Inner Court Disciple Test now, right? You? How did you know? Hidong was stunned. How did this Duan Lingtian see through it? After all, he'd only broken through a few days ago, and after he broke through, no one had mentioned the matter of him breaking through to anyone, nor had he revealed his cultivation at the 8th level of the origin core stage before anyone. Now, it was seen through by Duan Lingtian, and it caused him to be extremely astounded. Duan Lingtian smiled mysteriously. Duan Lingden, I'm unable to see through you more and more now. Hidong sighed. No matter if it was witnessing the former number 1 disciple in the outer court Shihao being killed by Duan Lingtian that day, or this time, Duan Lingtian was able to see through his cultivation with a single glance, it all caused him to realize how mysterious Duan Lingtian was. This Duan Lingtian seemed to conceal many secrets. Since both of us are going to participate in the Inner Court Disciple Test, then how about we go together? Hidong looked at Duan Lingtian and issued an invitation. I'm fine with it. Duan Lingtian shrugged and spoke indifferently. Subsequently, Duan Lingtian and Hidong stepped onto the chain bridge together, and after arriving at the main peak, Dubhe Peak, they walked all the way down the mountain towards the test platform. Duan Lingtian had come to the test platform 7 months ago. At that time he just arrived at the 7-star sword sect, and he'd passed the outer court disciple test there to become a member of the 7-star sword sect. When Duan Lingtian and Hidong arrived at the test platform, there were already many people waiting there. Duan Lingtian. A familiar voice sounded out by his ears, and Duan Lingtian looked over, and the young woman that stood alone at the side slowly walked over. The young woman had a delicate and pretty appearance, a pair of beautiful eyes that were extremely lively, and a wisp of a light smile appeared on her face. Senior Sister Wuxia. Duan Lingtian lightly smiled as he greeted the delicate and pretty young woman. The delicate and pretty young woman was precisely Li Fei's senior sister, Wuxia. Duan Lingtian, I heard that you broke through to the 8th level of the origin core stage 1 month ago. Looks like the medicinal strength of the profound origin fruit has really been completely unearthed by you. Obviously, Wuxia had heard of the matter of Duan Lingtian breaking through as well. I was just lucky. Duan Lingtian shook his head and smiled as he spoke modestly. There's nothing to be lucky about. Wuxia shook her head, then said, I heard that after you broke through to the 8th level of the origin core stage, junior sister cultivated even more painstakingly. I'm afraid it won't be long before she'll be able to smoothly break through to the 6th level of the origin core stage. When she mentioned Li Fei, Wuxia's eyes emitted traces of doting. She liked that junior sister that had extraordinary natural talent from the bottom of her heart. Duan Lingtian's brows raised and the corners of his mouth curled into a bitter smile. That little girl is always so eager to excel. Zuoqing, you've come to participate in the inner court disciple test as well? Could it be that you've broken through as well? Hidong looked at Zuoqing with a face full of surprise. Zuoqing shook her head. Who said that one can only participate in the inner court disciple test after breaking through? It is indeed difficult for a 7th level origin core stage martial artist to pass the inner court disciple test. But it isn't like there's no chance to pass. As she finished speaking, Zuoqing had a face full of confidence. Besides, if you can come, then why can't I? Chapter 331. Duan Lingtian shook his head and smiled when he saw Zuoqing's current attitude towards Hidong. Looks like his senior sister Zuoqing was still unable to accept the fact that she lost to Hidong in the outer court martial competition the other day. At that time, it was only because Zuoqing made a mistake that she lost to Hidong. Otherwise, the two of them might not be able to determine a victor. Hidong laughed bitterly, then glanced at Duan Lingtian with a pleading gaze. Duan Lingtian looked at Zuoqing and lightly smiled. Senior sister Zuoqing, there's something you might not know. Hidong has already broken through to the 8th level of the origin core stage a few days ago. Zuoqing's expression froze when she heard Duan Lingtian, as she obviously didn't expect that Hidong would break through before her. After a short moment, Zuoqing looked at Hidong and grunted in a low voice. Although she was unwilling to admit it, she still had to admit it. Even if Hidong defeated her in the outer court martial competition the other day purely by luck. Now Hidong had broken through to the 8th level of the origin core stage and was already not on the same level as her, so he could easily defeat her. Umph. Right at this moment, a cold snort sounded out by Duan Lingtian's ears, then a familiar and ear-piercing voice sounded out. Hidong, I never expected that you've broken through as well. If there's a chance, let's spar? Duan Lingtian frowned. He didn't see the person but only heard the voice, and he'd already discerned who the owner of the voice was. Hu Shuefeng, the personal disciple of the Merak Peak's master. From what Hu Shuefeng said now, he could discern that he'd broken through to the 8th level of the origin core stage as well. Hu Shuefeng had just stepped onto the test platform, and obviously heard what Duan Lingtian said to Zuoqing. He walked over in large strides, then looked at Zuoqing and his eyes narrowed. Zuoqing, now, amongst us, it seems that only you haven't broken through. You have to work hard. Ah. Hu Shuefeng's words weren't without ridicule. Hu Shuefeng. Zuoqing's delicate and pretty face sank, and her beautiful eyes seemed to have a trace of rage arose within. What? You've become angry from embarrassment? Hu Shuefeng started laughing. Zuoqing, it's not that I'm looking down on you, but even if I didn't break through to the 8th level of the origin core stage, you're still not a match for me. As for now, you, a 7th level origin core stage martial artist, I, Hu Shuefeng, only need a single sword strike to defeat you. Zuoqing was so angry that her delicate body trembled. Her pretty face turned ashen as she said coldly, You can try. I'm happy to oblige. Hu Shuefeng smiled brightly with a bit of arrogance between his brows. He did not put Zuoqing in his eyes at all. At this moment, the other outer court disciples who were preparing to participate in the inner court disciple test noticed the commotion and gathered around to watch the show, just when everyone thought that Hu Xiefeng and Zuoqing were about to fight. A cold snort that seemed to have come from an ice cave brought with it an extreme coldness, causing the bodies of the people present to tremble uncontrollably. For a time, the gazes of everyone present fell onto Duan Lingtian, who was beside Zuoqing. This cold snort came from Duan Lingtian. Zuoqing was Li Fei's senior sister. Li Fei was Duan Lingtian's woman. Duan Lingtian naturally took Zuoqing to be his senior sister. Now, his senior sister was being provoked and humiliated right in front of him. With his temper, would he be able to endure it? The answer was no. Hu Shuefeng. Duan Lingtian's gaze went slightly cold as it descended onto Hu Shuefeng, and the corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile. So what if you've broken through to the 8th level of the origin core stage? Do you believe that I only need a single sword strike to kill you? I only need a single sword strike to kill you? Duan Lingtian's straightforward words entered into Hu Shuefeng's ears, causing Hu Shuefeng's face to instantly stiffen, and his eyes emitted a fierce light. Hu Shuefeng's body was angered to the point of trembling, and he was enraged to the limit. Duan Lingtian, what are you complacent about? You've only consumed the profound origin fruit to possess your current cultivation. If it wasn't for that, why would I, Hu Shuefeng, be afraid of a 6th level origin core stage outer court disciple like you? Hu Shuefeng's face sank, and his icy cold eyes stared fixedly at Duan Lingtian. He'd heard of the matter of Duan Lingtian breaking through to the 8th level of the origin core stage 1 month ago. At that time his rage shot to the skies. As far as he was concerned, that profound origin fruit ought to be his, but it was seized by Duan Lingtian halfway through. Otherwise, once he consumed the profound origin fruit, his cultivation might have already broken through to the 9th level of the origin core stage. Ah! Duan Lingtian couldn't help but laugh when he heard Hu Shuefeng, and after he finished laughing, his gaze focused onto Hu Shuefeng. Hu Shuefeng, on that day during the outer court martial competition, I was only a 6th level origin core stage outer court disciple. You, a high and mighty 7th level origin core stage outer court disciple, why didn't you dare battle me? Now, do you think that because you've broken through to the 8th level of the origin core stage, you have the confidence to think that I, who was at the 6th level of the origin core stage, wasn't a match for you? As he finished speaking, the sneer on the corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth grew deeper. Of course. Hu Shuefeng sneered, and his eyes emitted a strand of cold light. If you were still a 6th level origin core stage martial artist, then the current me would only need a single sword strike to kill you. Shameless. Zuoqing couldn't help but spit when she heard Hu Shuefeng. The surrounding crowd of outer court disciples all looked at Hu Shuefeng with strange expressions. When this Hu Shuefeng's cultivation was at the 7th level of the origin core stage, he didn't have the guts to battle the 6th level origin core stage Duan Lingtian. Now that he'd broken through to the 8th level of the origin core stage, he was boasting here, saying that he would be able to kill the former 6th level origin core stage Duan Lingtian with a single sword strike. Absurd. You, Hu Shuefeng, have broken through, and you still want others to stay where they are and be oppressed by you? Simply the ravings of a fool. Ha! Duan Lingtian laughed once more, and his eyes flickered with a bright light as he stared at Hu Shuefeng. Hu Shuefeng, according to what you mean, if the current you were to face the me from a month ago before I consumed the profound origin fruit, then you wouldn't be cowardly to the point of not daring to battle me? Even to the extent that you would be able to kill me with a single sword strike? Of course. Hu Shuefeng had a proud expression, as he who'd broken through to the 8th level of the origin core stage was incomparably confident. If Duan Lingtian was still a 6th level origin core stage martial artist now, then he had the confidence to be able to kill Duan Lingtian with a single sword strike. All right. Duan Lingtian started laughing and a brilliant smile appeared on his face. Since you said so, then I'll give you a chance. Duan Lingtian's words caused most of the people present to be stunned. They didn't understand the meaning of Duan Lingtian's words. Zuoqing and Hidong looked at Duan Lingtian as if they were lost in thought. As for Hu Shuefeng, his face sank slightly, and a bad premonition arose within his heart. Hu Shuefeng. Duan Lingtian looked at Hu Shuefeng, then abruptly took a step forward as his body emitted battle intent that shot into the sky, and his fierce gaze descended onto Hu Shuefeng. I, Duan Lingtian, am willing to suppress my strength to the 6th level of the origin core stage and battle you on the life and death arena. If I use strength that surpasses the 6th level of the origin core stage, then I'm willing to commit suicide on the spot. Do you dare? Do you dare? As soon as Duan Lingtian finished speaking, in the eyes of the surrounding crowd of outer court disciples, the Duan Lingtian before them was so lofty. It was as if he'd transformed into an invincible god of war. Overbearing and fearless. What a Duan Lingtian. Hidong looked at Duan Lingtian and couldn't help but secretly praise in his heart. He noticed that at this moment he was completely convinced by Duan Lingtian, and it was difficult for him to arouse the desire to compare with Duan Lingtian. Junior sister, why didn't you come with me today? This is your man. Zuoqing's gaze was complicated, and her eyes revealed slight envy. If a woman was able to obtain the love of a man like this in her lifetime, then she would have no regrets even if she died. Senior brother Duan Lingtian, a true man. From today onwards, my idol is senior brother Duan Lingtian. Some of the surrounding outer court disciples were excited to the point their faces flushed red, as if the person that stood there and issued the life and death arena invitation to Hu Shuefeng wasn't Duan Lingtian, but was instead themselves. In next to no time, the gazes of everyone descended onto Hu Shuefeng. Hu Shuefeng had repeatedly said earlier that the current him was able to kill the 6th level origin core stage Duan Lingtian with a single strike of his sword. Now, Duan Lingtian used a cultivation at the 6th level of the origin core stage to invite Hu Shuefeng to battle in the life and death arena. Did Hu Shuefeng dare accept the challenge? Hu Shuefeng's expression was terrifyingly gloomy. He dared speak those words earlier because he had blind confidence towards his own strength, and felt that if Duan Lingtian was still that 6th level origin core stage martial artist from before, he would surely be able to easily kill Duan Lingtian. But now, Duan Lingtian actually wanted to suppress his strength to the 6th level of the origin core stage to battle him in the life and death arena. As he looked at Duan Lingtian, who stood there with a face full of confidence and battle intent that shot into the sky, his heart was shaken. Was he really able to kill the 6th level origin core stage Duan Lingtian? Although now he was still sure of this. But he didn't dare open his mouth to accept Duan Lingtian's life and death arena invitation. He hesitated. Duan Lingtian's current confidence caused traces of fear to arise within his heart. If he wasn't confident, would Duan Lingtian issue such a challenge? Putting himself in Duan Lingtian's shoes, Hu Shuefeng felt even more how mysterious and terrifying Duan Lingtian was. Perhaps, Duan Lingtian was really able to kill him with a cultivation at the 6th level of the origin core stage. After all, Duan Lingtian used a cultivation at the 6th level of the origin core stage to kill Shi Hao, who was at the 7th level of the origin core stage. Duan Lingtian's methods were too strange. When he saw Hu Shuefeng's expression that flickered between a livid and ashen expression, Duan Lingtian seemed to be able to see through Hu Shuefeng's state of mind, and he ridiculed. Hu Shuefeng, the personal disciple of the Merak Peak's peak master? You're only SOSO. Only a coward. Coward? Duan Lingtian's words caused Hu Shuefeng to be filled with rage, and he glared angrily at Duan Lingtian. What? You're still unwilling to admit it now? Didn't you say earlier that with your current strength, you'd be able to kill me who's at the 6th level of the origin core stage with a single sword strike? Now, I've suppressed my cultivation to the 6th level of the origin core stage with the intention of battling you in the life and death arena. You hesitated for a long time and didn't dare accept the challenge. Isn't this still a coward? The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a cold smile, and every single word he said struck at Hu Shuefeng's heart. Chapter 332. Coward. As the personal disciple of the Merak Peak's peak master, how could the arrogant Hu Shuefeng possibly admit that he was a coward? But now that he realized the strong confidence emitted from Duan Lingtian, he didn't dare accept the challenge. He could only maintain his silence. The gazes that were like blades from the surroundings contained traces of ridicule, and he naturally noticed it. His heart was filled with humiliation and resentment. Duan Lingtian. At this moment, the resentment Hu Shuefeng had towards Duan Lingtian in his heart had practically reached an extreme. If he was given the chance, he wouldn't hesitate in the slightest to kill Duan Lingtian, and even burn his bones and scatter his ashes. Coward. Seeing Hu Shuefeng's gloomy face and not daring to reply for a long time, the corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a trace of disdain as he coldly grunted. He and Hu Shuefeng originally didn't have any relationship. But this Hu Shuefeng actually wanted to take his life during the outer court martial competition. Today Hu Shuefeng even humiliated Zhuqing, his woman's senior sister, in front of him. This caused Duan Lingtian's rage to be completely vented. Hu Shuefeng's breathing became hurried, and his eyes transformed into a crimson-red color, yet he just happened to not dare flare up. He didn't dare gamble. The confidence Duan Lingtian displayed caused him to be extremely fearful. The surrounding crowd of outer court disciples looked at Hu Shuefeng with more and more strange gazes. However, when their gazes descended onto Duan Lingtian, they were instead filled with reverence. Senior sister, if this coward dares to be disrespectful to you in the future, feel free to tell me. Duan Lingtian looked at Zhuqing and lightly smiled. Zhuqing was his woman's senior sister, and was also his senior sister. He had the responsibility to protect Zhuqing and not allow others to humiliate her. Zhuqing lightly nodded, and a brilliant smile hung on her beautiful face. Duan Lingtian, you're really something. Hidong shook his head and smiled as he wholeheartedly submitted to Duan Lingtian. Test Elder has arrived. Suddenly, a sharp-eyed outer disciple looked into the distance and exclaimed. Upon hearing the voice, Duan Lingtian turned around and followed the gaze of the outer disciple. The Test Elder whom Duan Lingtian had met 7 months ago had appeared before him once more. Presently the Test Elder had come up from the main peak, Dubhe Peak. Behind him, there were 8 inner sect disciples who were divided into 2 groups. They carried 2 huge objects covered in red cloth and slowly walked onto the examination platform. Test Elder. The group of outer court disciples on the test platform respectfully greeted the test elder who was in the lead. The exam elder nodded slightly. He stood in the middle of the exam platform and said to the 8 inner disciples, "Put the 2 cages here." Yes. 8 inner sect disciples responded and carried the 2 huge objects covered in red cloth over to him. A cage? Hearing the words of the invigilating elder, the outer court disciples present were all puzzled. Ferocious beasts? Duan Ling Tian immediately used his spiritual energy to detect a clue. He discovered that there was actually a powerful ferocious beast hibernating within each of the huge objects covered in red cloth. Could this be the inner court disciple assessment? Duan Ling Tian secretly guessed in his heart. Bang, bang. 2 loud noises sounded. The 2 huge objects covered in red cloth landed in the middle of the exam platform. Now, apart from the test elder and the 8 inner court disciples present, only Duan Ling Tian had a calm expression on his face. All the outer court disciples, including Hidong and Zhuqin, stared curiously at the 2 huge objects covered in red cloth. They wanted to know what was inside. Lift the red cloth. At this moment, the test elder looked at the inner court disciples who were standing on the side of the huge objects covered in red cloth and said lightly, "Whoosh, whoosh." As the red cloth was lifted by the 2 inner court disciples, the huge objects under the red cloth were completely revealed before the eyes of Duan Ling Tian and the group. Some outer court disciples couldn't help but stare in shock. Violent ape. It's a violent ape. An outer court disciple couldn't help but shout out in shock, and his face was ghastly pale. Presently, what appeared before the eyes of everyone was 2 enormous cages. The cages were obviously made of special materials, and within each of the 2 enormous cages sat a sleeping huge object. These 2 huge objects were enormous apes that were completely covered in black fur. They were 3 meters tall with bulging muscles on their entire bodies, and they were obviously not ordinary ferocious beasts. Violent ape, 9th level origin core stage ferocious beast. Duan Lingtian's gaze squinted as he recognized the origins of these 2 ferocious beasts. Violent ape, 9th level origin core stage ferocious beast. It possessed boundless strength and speed like the wind. It was able to smash a tiger or leopard to death with a single punch, and a single collision was able to knock down a large tree that required a few adults to encircle. It was an extremely terrifying and troublesome ferocious beast. Awaken them. Right when the gazes of Duan Ling Tian and the group descended onto the 2 violent apes, the test elder continued to instruct. Instantly, 2 inner court disciples withdrew 2 medicinal pills and stuffed them into the mouths of the 2 violent apes. After a short moment, the 2 violent apes that had fallen asleep woke up, and they opened their crimson-red eyes that were large as gongs. When they opened their eyes, they saw the group of people and they instantly became irritable. Oh. Oh. The 2 violent apes pounded their robust chests as they exerted all their strength to ram into the cages that locked them up. But unfortunately, even though they possessed boundless strength, they were still unable to do anything to the 2 cages. The material of this cage seems to be 1,000-year dark iron. Duan Ling Tian couldn't help but be astounded as he looked at the pitch-black enormous cage. As expected of the 7-star sword sect, so extravagant. This 1,000-year dark iron was the main material to refine a grade 7 spirit weapon, but now it was actually used to make a cage. Extravagant. Too extravagant. In the end, the 2 violent apes seemed to have realized that using brute force was unable to solve the problem. They stopped moving, and their human-like eyes flickered as their gazes descended onto the test elder. When he saw this scene, Duan Ling Tian couldn't help but praise in his heart. As expected of the ape-type fierce beasts that are closest to humans. Although they're only at the 9th level of the origin core stage, they've already begun to understand human nature. Under the gaze of Duan Ling Tian. Oh, the 2 violent apes looked at the test elder and roared in a low voice, and their gong-sized eyes contained a trace of begging mixed within. As long as you cooperate, I'll get someone to send you back to the primeval forest after we're done. The test elder looked at the 2 violent apes with a calm gaze as he spoke indifferently. Seeming to have understood what the test elder said, the 2 violent apes took human form and nodded, then obediently stayed within the cage. These 2 violent apes wouldn't be the content of the inner court disciple test this time, right? An outer court disciple couldn't help but guess. It shouldn't be. Although the violent ape is strong, it's only a 9th level origin core stage fierce beast after all, and its strength is only comparable to the strength of 120 ancient mammoths. Not to mention senior brother Duan Ling Tian and the others, Even I, with my cultivation at the 7th level of the origin core stage and relying on a grade 7 spirit sword, would be sufficient to kill it. Another outer court disciple shook his head. His words obtained the agreement of most of the people. Duan Lingtian agreed as well. A 7th level origin core stage martial artist possessed the strength of 100 ancient mammoths, and if they were to utilize a spirit weapon, their attack strength would completely crush the violent ape. Coupled with being in such a narrow cage, the violent ape was utterly unable to exert its speed, and in the end it could only be reduced to a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. What? All of you look down on the violent ape so much? The corners of the test elder's mouth curled into a ridiculing smile when he heard the group of outer court disciples whispering in discussion. Duan Lingtian's heart jerked when he saw the test elder's sly smile. Traces of a bad premonition arose within the hearts of the other outer court disciples as well. Test elder, could it be that these two violent apes are really the content of the inner court disciple test? An outer court disciple looked at the test elder and couldn't help but ask. Exactly. Test elder nodded. Right when the group of outer court disciples were beaming with joy and had faces full of excitement, and felt that the inner court test this time was extremely simple. Test elder continued. Right, I almost forgot to tell all of you. The content of the inner court disciple test this time is exactly as all of you guessed. It's to allow all of you to battle the violent ape. But when all of you battle it, all of you are not allowed to utilize any external forces, including spirit weapons, inscriptions, and so on. When Test Elder finished speaking, the hearts of the group of outer court disciples had already risen to their throats. After Test Elder finished speaking, the expressions of all the outer court disciples couldn't help but go pale. Not using external forces? At this moment, besides Duan Lingtian, whose gaze shone and had a calm expression, the expressions of the others couldn't help but go pale. Including Hidong, Zuoqing, and Hu Shuefeng. The expressions of the three of them were extremely unsightly. Even if Hidong and Hu Shuefeng had broken through to the 8th level of the origin core stage now, but if they didn't rely on any external forces and fought empty-handed against two 9th level origin core stage fierce beasts, the violent apes, they similarly didn't have the slightest confidence. Test Elder. How could this be possible? If we don't use external forces, how could we possibly go against the violent apes? An outer court disciple was terrified by what Test Elder said to the point his legs trembled, and he asked with slight hesitation. His words obtained the agreement of all the outer court disciples besides Duan Lingtian. Amongst the outer court disciples present, including the strongest Duan Lingtian, Hidong, and He Shuefeng, the strongest was only at the 8th level of the origin core stage, and there wasn't a single 9th level origin core stage martial artist. Test Elder grunted in a low voice, and his fierce gaze swept past all the outer court disciples present one by one. He couldn't help but frown when he saw the outer court disciples with unsightly expressions, and only when his gaze descended onto a young man around the age of 20 did his frown ease up. You're Duan Lingtian? In next to no time, Duan Lingtian noticed that Test Elder had looked over. Test Elder. Duan Lingtian nodded and smiled to Test Elder. Indeed, young. I heard that after you consumed the profound origin fruit, you've already broken through to the 8th level of the origin core stage? When Test Elder faced Duan Lingtian, his face was filled with a brilliant smile. Duan Lingtian's natural talent was already worthy of him facing him with a smiling face. Meanwhile, the gazes of the nearby 8 inner court disciples descended onto Duan Lingtian. He's that Duan Lingtian? He's really as young as the rumors say. Oh my god. Such a young man is an 8th level origin core stage outer court disciple? Chapter 333. During the outer court martial competition, he killed the number 1 disciple in the outer court, Shihao, with a cultivation at the 6th level of the origin core stage. 1 month ago, he consumed the profound origin fruit, and his cultivation broke through from the 6th level of the origin core stage to the 8th level of the origin core stage in one go. All this happened on a young man that was only a little over 20. This young man was Duan Lingtian. Presently, even if it was within the 7-star sword sect's inner court, the name Duan Lingtian was like a thunderclap that reverberated in the ears. So long as it wasn't an inner court disciple that was especially ill-informed, practically all of them had heard of Duan Lingtian. However, even though the 8 inner court disciples had heard of Duan Lingtian, when they really saw Duan Lingtian now, they couldn't help but be slightly shocked. Only because Duan Lingtian was truly too young. Shockingly young. For a time. As expected, Duan Lingtian became the absolute center of attention on the test platform. Even the test elder greeted Duan Lingtian with a smiling face. No one noticed that at the corner of the crowd, Hu Shuefeng stood there with a pair of icy cold eyes that emitted a sheen of jealousy. Duanling, the two of us are absolutely irreconcilable. Hu Shuefeng was ruthless in his heart, and he secretly swore a ghastly oath. It was just luck. Duan Lingtian lightly smiled to Test Elder as he replied. Test Elder shook his head. This isn't luck. After you consumed the profound origin fruit, you were able to directly break through from the 6th level of the origin core stage to the 8th level of the origin core stage in one go, and it's sufficient to show that your natural talent is shocking. Work hard. Even in the entire Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, no one is able to compare to your natural talent, and it can be said to be unprecedented. I will. Duan Lingtian smiled modestly and was refined and courteous. It's rare for you to be neither arrogant nor impatient. I really look forward to your future. Test Elder smiled to Duan Lingtian then asked. I heard you entered the sect 7 months ago? Yes. Duan Lingtian nodded. That day when I entered the sect, it was precisely the outer court disciple test that Test Elder presided over. I didn't notice you back then. The Test Elder shook his head and smiled. The 7-star sword sect has a total of 5 Test Elders, and every single Test Elder takes turns to be in charge of the outer court disciple and inner court disciple tests for a year. This year I've successively been in charge of your test twice, and it's sufficient to show that we're fated. Duan Lingtian smiled and nodded. It is indeed fate. In the future, if you have time, you can come to my place often. Yes, my name is Jianghu. The invigilating elder said to Duan Lingtian. The surrounding people were all shocked. The exam elder had even told Duan Lingtian his name. This was enough to show how much he valued Duan Lingtian. Don't worry, Elder Jianghu. I'll definitely disturb you when I'm free. Duan Lingtian nodded and smiled. Yes. Test Elder Jianghu nodded, then his gaze swept past all the outer court disciples present and said in a clear voice, Earlier I've already spoken of the contents of the inner court disciple test. Every single one of you must take turns to enter the cage and battle the violent apes. As soon as Jianghu finished speaking, all the outer court disciples present shuddered. Isn't this asking us to give our lives away? Exactly. How are we supposed to deal with these 2 violent apes if we're unable to rely on external forces? Once we enter the cage, we'll die for sure. Some outer court disciples whispered in discussion. Although the outer court disciples' discussion was soft, it was still heard by Jianghu, and Jianghu said coldly, If all of you are afraid of death, you can withdraw from the inner court disciple test this time. No one is forcing all of you to participate. The crowd of outer court disciples instantly went silent when they heard Jianghu. Meanwhile, Jianghu continued. Although the inner court disciple test today allows all of you to enter the cage and battle the violent apes without relying on any external forces, it doesn't require all of you to kill the violent apes. So long as any one of you is able to persist for more than 10 breaths of time under the hands of the violent apes, then you'll be able to pass the inner court disciple test and become an inner court disciple. As soon as Jianghu said this, Duan Lingtian came to a sudden understanding. So it's only like this. For a time, He Dong and Hu Shuefeng heaved a sigh of relief. It was practically impossible for them to kill the violent apes without relying on external forces, but if it was only persisting for 10 breaths of time under the hands of the violent apes, then it wasn't difficult for them. Even Zhuqing had a firm expression now, and her eyes were filled with burning yearning. Yearning to pass the inner court disciple test and become an inner court disciple. At this moment, although the other outer court disciples still felt great pressure, they couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. Persisting for 10 breaths of time was much easier than killing the violent apes. Now, all the outer court disciples that need to participate in the inner court disciple test, stand by my side. Jianghu spoke out. For a time, including Duan Lingtian, He Dong, and Zhuqing, the group of outer court disciples stood by Jianghu's side, and not a single one of them gave up. They'd come here today for the sake of the inner court disciple test, and if they didn't give it a try, they wouldn't be satisfied. Moreover, the inner court disciple test today was nothing more than to allow them to persist for a period of time under the hands of the violent apes. If they didn't have confidence, they were completely able to choose to flee. Very good. Jianghu looked at the group of outer court disciples and nodded. When the test is carried out in a while, there will be an inner court disciple entering the cage with all of you. If all of you are unable to persist, then they will make a move to save all of you. Jianghu's words caused the hearts of most of the outer court disciples to be at ease. With an inner court disciple making a move, they were much more at ease. Now the people I've called out, enter the cage and battle the violent apes. As Jianghu spoke, he looked at an outer court disciple. You enter the cage on the left. You enter the cage on the right. Subsequently, Jianghu called out another outer court disciple. The two outer court disciples took a deep breath, then walked towards the two cages in the distance, and entered the cages with the two inner court disciples. Now, the two violent apes seemed to have realized something. They raised their arms and fiercely pounded their chests, and their crimson-red eyes that were large like gongs flickered with a bloodthirsty sheen. Ow, oh, oh. The cries of the two violent apes caused the faces of the two outer court disciples to go ghastly pale, and their legs started trembling. Feeling fear before the battle, they'll probably be unable to persist for 3 breaths of time. Hidong shook his head and spoke to Duan Lingtian who was beside him. Duan Lingtian nodded and smiled as he thought so as well. In next to no time the two outer court disciples respectively attacked the two violent apes. Whoosh! One of the outer court disciples flashed out, and he seemed to have transformed into a gust of wind that blew towards the violent apes. Above him, 100 ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form. 7th level of the origin core stage. Oh! The violent ape was instantly enraged when it saw this human daring to attack it, and its robust arms spread out before pouncing over. The strength of 120 ancient mammoths that belonged to a 9th level origin core stage fierce beast, all exploded out. Whoosh! The outer court disciple's fist shot out, fiercely smashing onto the violent ape's arm, but it didn't cause any material harm to the violent ape. Oh! The violent ape roared explosively, then swung its arms up and fiercely smashed down onto the outer court disciple's head. If it were to hit, this outer court disciple would die for sure. When faced with the enraged violent ape, the outer court disciple's face went ghastly pale, and his legs seemed as if they were filled with lead, and he was unable to move in the slightest. Oh! When faced with the violent ape's attack, he cried out in grief, and his voice contained slight despair mixed within. Bang! Right at this moment, the inner court disciple made a move, slapping out with his palm to block the violent ape's attack. This inner court disciple was in existence at the 9th level of the origin core stage as well. Oh! The violent ape roared furiously, and its enormous body shook, wanting to launch another attack. Whoosh! The inner court disciple raised his hand, and a 3-foot-long blade appeared out of thin air. Above him, 150-plus ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form. Instantly, the violent ape's enormous body stopped, and it glanced at the 150-plus ancient mammoth silhouettes in terror, then retreated and stood there obediently. You persisted for less than a breath of time, eliminated. The inner court disciple looked at the outer court disciple that was scared silly long ago, and said with a cold voice. The outer court disciple laughed bitterly, then obediently left the cage. Earlier, before the violent ape, he felt as if his heart was about to jump out, and he even forgot to dodge. In the other cage, the mental strength of the outer court disciple was comparatively stronger, and he dodged 2 of the violent ape's attacks. But even then he was still unable to dodge the 3rd attack. Fortunately, an inner court disciple made a move and stopped the violent ape for him, otherwise he would die for sure. Persisting for 2 breaths of time, not bad. The inner court disciple nodded to the outer court disciple. However, you don't satisfy the conditions to pass the inner court disciple test. Eliminated. The outer court disciple laughed bitterly as he nodded, then left the cage. Although this outer court disciple didn't pass the test as well, he still obtained gazes of admiration from the group of outer court disciples. Being able to persist for 2 breaths of time before the 9th level origin core stage violent ape with a cultivation at the 7th level of the origin core stage was already not bad. Subsequently, the outer court disciples were called out by the test elder Jianghu one by one. One by one, the outer court disciples were miserably eliminated. When facing this violent ape, if a 7th level origin core stage martial artist doesn't possess a superior movement technique, it's extremely difficult for them to persist for 10 breaths of time. Hidong shook his head and sighed. Even if they possess a superior movement technique, it's useless, the disparity in strength is too great. It's not easy to persist for 10 breaths of time. Duan Lingtian's eyes squinted, then he glanced at the nearby Zhuqin, and a trace of a bright light flashed within his eyes as he seemed to be lost in thought. Zhuqin. In next to no time, Jianghu's gaze descended onto Zhuqin, and he called out the outer court disciple's name for the first time. Obviously he knew Zhuqing. Zhuqing took a deep breath, then walked towards a cage in large strides. Zhuqing isn't skilled in movement techniques, and it's not very likely for her to pass the test. Hidong shook his head and didn't hold any hope towards Zhuqing. However, Zhuqing ought to be about to break through to the 8th level of the origin core stage. She can't pass the test this time, but she'll surely be able to pass the test next time and become an inner court disciple. Hidong, isn't it a bit early for you to say this now? Duan Lingtian smiled slightly disapprovingly when he heard Hidong. What? Could it be that you think Zhuqing can persist for 10 breaths of time before the violent ape? Hidong had an expression of disbelief. He couldn't see through this little freak, Duan Lingtian, but Zhuqing was instead his old rival. Chapter 334. Just watch. The smile on Duan Lingtian's face still remained, and he seemed to be extremely confident of Zhuqing. Oh? Hidong frowned. Needless to say, his heart was filled with bewilderment towards Duan Lingtian's current attitude. Although he didn't have much interaction with Duan Lingtian, he was able to discern that Duan Lingtian wasn't the type of person that spoke without thinking. Now Duan Lingtian was so confident of Zhuqing, could it be that he knew something? But no matter what, he wasn't willing to believe that Zhuqing, who was at the 7th level of the origin core stage, was able to persist for 10 breaths of time under the hands of the 9th level origin core stage violent ape. Even if it was him, before he broke through to the 8th level of the origin core stage, he didn't have the slightest certainty. Some people go too far in boasting, and even the people by their side don't believe them. Laughable. A ridiculing voice suddenly sounded out, and it was incomparably ear-piercing. Duan Lingtian's face sank when he heard the voice, and he turned around to look at the owner of the voice with a cold and indifferent gaze. It was precisely Hu Shuefeng who stood at the other side of Test Elder. What? Am I wrong? The corners of Hu Shuefeng's mouth curled into a ridiculing smile when he saw Duan Lingtian looking over. Getting angry from embarrassment? Duan Lingtian glanced at Hu Shuefeng as if he was looking at an idiot, then sneered. Hu Shuefeng, you said I was boasting. Then how about we make a bet? If senior sister Zhuqing is able to persist for 10 breaths of time under the violent ape, then pass the inner court disciple test and become an inner court disciple. You Hu Shuefeng, fight me on the life and death arena, and we'll fight to the death. Do you dare? Duan Lingtian once again threatened to invite Hu Shuefeng to battle on the life and death arena. Do you dare? Similar to before, Duan Lingtian's question was powerful and resonant, and when it entered Hu Shuefeng's ears, it caused his face to flicker between livid and pale. When he saw the confidence on Duan Lingtian's face, he hesitated once again in his heart. He didn't dare reply. Including the test elder Jianghu, the other 8 inner court disciples looked at Duan Lingtian in astonishment, and at the same time, they glanced at Hu Xiefeng. Before they arrived, they were unaware of the conflict between Duan Lingtian and Hu Shuefeng on the assessment platform. If you dare battle me on the life and death arena, then I'll still do as I said before and suppress my strength to the 6th level of the origin core stage to battle you. You Hu Shuefeng, do you dare battle me? Duan Lingtian's gaze gradually turned cold, as if it had turned into an icicle that pierced towards Hu Xiefeng. Hu Shuefeng's face was ashen. Yet he did not dare to accept the challenge. Duan Lingtian's confidence once again made him feel uncertain. Suppressing his strength to the 6th level of the origin core stage? When Jianghu and the 8 inner court disciples heard Duan Lingtian, their pupils couldn't help but constrict as they were shocked. As far as they were concerned, Duan Lingtian was simply courting death. They'd heard of the news of Hu Xiefeng breaking through to the 8th level of the origin core stage half a month ago, the personal disciple of the Merak Peak's peak master. As far as they were concerned, no matter how strange and heaven-defying Duan Lingtian's methods were, it was still impossible for him to kill a genuine 8th level origin core stage martial artist with a cultivation at the 6th level of the origin core stage. Right when they thought Hu Xiefeng would accept the challenge, they instead noticed that Hu Xiefeng's expression was unsightly, and he didn't dare make a sound for a long time. Hu Xiefeng didn't dare accept the challenge? For a moment they were all stunned, and the gazes they shot at Hu Xiefeng underwent a change. An 8th level origin core stage martial artist didn't even dare accept the challenge of a 6th level origin core stage martial artist? Truly shameful. Hu Xiefeng naturally noticed the disdainful gazes from Jianghu and the 8 inner court disciples, and this caused his expression to become even more unsightly and even more livid. When he saw Hu Xiefeng's current appearance, Duan Lingtian naturally knew that Hu Xiefeng was terrified again, and he couldn't help but sneer. I really don't know why the Merak Peak's peak master would take a coward like you as his personal disciple. You've really thrown away the face of the Merak Peak's peak master, and even the Merak Peak itself. Meanwhile, many people thought that Hu Xiefeng would explode because of what Duan Lingtian said. In next to no time they were disappointed. Hu Xiefeng stood there with his head lowered and his body trembled. He was enraged to the limit, yet he just happened to not dare vent it. Hu Xiefeng, the personal disciple of the Merak Peak's peak master, is only SOSO. I heard that the Merak Peak's peak master took him as a personal disciple because of his family. The Hu clan is a great clan in our Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's Imperial City. So he's from the Imperial City's Hu clan. Looks like he's someone that relied on relationships to obtain his position. Truly laughable. Senior brother Duan Lingtian wants to suppress his cultivation to the 6th level of the Origin Core stage to battle him, yet he, an 8th level Origin Core stage martial artist, is actually afraid. One by one the outer court disciples whispered in discussion. Although their voices weren't loud, practically all the people on the test platform were existences at the 7th level of the Origin Core stage or above. Which one of them didn't have shocking hearing? They naturally heard it. Duan Lingtian. Hu Xiefeng lowered his head, and his eyes were suffused with crimson red and covered in blood veins, and his eyeballs seemed as if they would explode at any moment. Duan Lingtian swept Hu Xiefeng with a disdainful gaze, then withdrew his gaze to descend onto the distant Wuqin. Because of the small incident from before, the inner court disciple test was temporarily suspended. Now continue. Duan Lingtian, you're too ruthless. But this Hu Xiefeng's background isn't simple, you have to be more careful when you do things in the future. Hidong's voice transmission entered into Duan Lingtian's ears. Duan Lingtian shrugged and smiled indifferently with an indifferent expression, and his gaze descended onto Zhuqing, who walked into the cage and stood in confrontation with the violent ape. All of a sudden, whoosh! Zhuqing moved, as if transforming into a bolt of lightning that flashed directly towards the violent ape. Brr. The violent ape roared furiously when it saw Zhuqing's movements. As a fierce beast, it utterly didn't know how to be protective of a woman, and its strong arms spread open as if transforming into a strong bow as it pounced towards Zhuqing. Zhuqing's figure flashed out. Just when everyone thought that she wanted to dodge the violent ape's attack, her figure abruptly descended. What does Zhuqing want to do? This was the question in the hearts of most people present. Roar! The violent ape's furious roar sounded out once more, and this time the furious roar contained slight pain mixed within. Everyone's vision blurred, and they noticed that after Zhuqing descended to the ground, she'd borrowed the force to leap up, avoiding the violent ape's arms that whistled towards her before firmly descending onto the violent ape's shoulder. The time of a breath passed. Heavens! Zhuqing borrowed force from the violent ape's feet earlier? An outer court disciple looked at the scene before him with disbelief. Seems like it. Zhuqing is simply courting death. Her actions will only infuriate the violent ape. Most outer court disciples didn't look favorably upon Zhuqing. Duan Lingtian, what's Zhuqing doing? Hidong frowned when he saw Zhuqing's graceful body firmly descending onto the violent ape's broad shoulder, and he had a puzzled expression. You'll know if you continue watching. Duan Lingtian smiled indifferently with a carefree expression. Whoosh! Within the cage, Zhuqing borrowed force from the violent ape's shoulder as her leg shot out, fiercely flashing towards the violent ape's neck. Even though the violent ape's strength was strong and its speed was swift, it still required a process of conditioned reflexes. Presently, it was unable to avoid Zhuqing's kick, and it forcefully suffered Zhuqing's kick. Oh! The violent ape felt pain and howled sorrowfully. Its crimson-red eyes seemed to have blazed with scorching flames of rage, and it raised its arms, wanting to grab Zhuqing. Zhuqing seemed to have known beforehand that the violent ape would make this move, and she'd first borrowed force from the violent ape's shoulder to rise up, narrowly avoiding the violent ape's swinging arms. This, in the eyes of others, the violent ape was cooperating with Zhuqing's leap, and that was why it swung its arms to sweep over, sweeping empty air. The time of 2 breaths passed. Brr. The violent ape seemed to have realized that it had to take the initiative, and its enormous body shook as it wanted to dash to the other side of the cage to pull apart the distance between it and Zhuqing. A scene that caused everyone to be dumbstruck appeared once more. The direction the violent ape charged towards was precisely the direction Zhuqing had borrowed force to leap up and land on the ground. Zhuqing once again firmly landed on the violent ape's body. Whoosh. A leg that was suffused with origin energy and raged once again descended onto the violent ape's neck, causing the violent ape's head to tremble as it emitted an extremely sorrowful howl. The time of 3 breaths passed. Seeing Zhuqing predict the future time and time again, taking the initiative to avoid the violent attacks of the violent ape, besides Duan Lingtian, everyone present was dumbstruck, including the inner court disciple within the cage. 10 breaths of time has passed. Only when Duan Lingtian's voice transmission pierced into the ears of the inner court disciple did the inner court disciple react, and his figure moved to stop the violent ape. Zhuqing, persist for more than 10 breaths of time and pass the inner court disciple test. Yeah. Zhuqing flew down, her beautiful cheeks flushed red, and she walked lightly with graceful steps to leave the cage. Zhuqing has passed the inner court disciple test and become an inner court disciple. Meanwhile, the voice of the test elder sounded out in a timely manner. This caused everyone that was dazed to recover from their shock. My God. Unbelievable. It's truly unbelievable. Senior Sister Zhuqing actually passed the test just like this. Why do I feel that the violent ape seemed to be intentionally letting her pass? I have this feeling as well. Could it be that all of you didn't notice that the violent ape is staring madly at Senior Sister Zhuqing? Obviously it was extremely aggrieved from everything earlier. One by one the outer court disciples discussed. In next to no time, everyone noticed that the violent ape that was subdued by the inner court disciple stood within the cage, and as it looked at Zhuqing's figure that left, it roared madly as its arms swung like the wind, fiercely pounding its own chest. It seemed as if it was venting the rage in its heart to its heart's content. Its emotions went out of control for a moment. F***K. This violent ape has gone mad. I wonder which unlucky bastard will be the next to go fight this berserk ape. The gaze of an outer court disciple descended onto some outer court disciples that hadn't participated in the test yet. This will depend on who the test elder picks. The gazes of all the outer court disciples descended onto Jianghu. Chapter 335. Finally, the gaze of test elder Jianghu flashed past all the outer court disciples that hadn't participated in the inner court disciple test. Everywhere Jianghu's gaze passed, all the outer court disciples had ghastly pale expressions. Jianghu frowned and in the end his gaze descended onto Duan Lingtian, Hidong and Hu Shuifeng. Duan Lingtian, Hidong, Hu Shuifeng. Who amongst the 3 of you will go first? Duan Lingtian shrugged with an indifferent expression. Hidong was slightly eager to give it a try. Me. But their movements weren't as swift as Hu Shuifeng. Hu Shuifeng stood out as if he wanted to use his performance to once again win back the dignity he'd lost earlier. At the same time that Hu Shuifeng took the initiative to volunteer, it caused the group of outer court disciples to be shocked, and he'd indeed obtained the admiration of many people. Although Hu Shuifeng is inferior to senior brother Duan Lingtian, he still has some ability. Yeah, he even dared to take the initiative to go up when facing that violent ape that has gone mad. As expected of the personal disciple of the Merak Peak's master. Some outer court disciples' opinions towards Hu Shuifeng had changed. The corners of Hu Shuifeng's mouth curled into an imperceptible complacency when he heard similar discussions. Meanwhile, another cage had successively changed a few more outer court disciples. Not a single person passed the test. Now, besides Duan Lingtian, Zhuqing and Hidong, the gazes of everyone else had descended onto Hu Shuifeng, who walked towards the violent ape that had gone mad. Hu Shuifeng was about to enter into battle with the violent ape that had gone mad. They were filled with anticipation. Meanwhile, Zhuqing returned to Duan Lingtian's side and said via voice transmission, "Duan Lingtian, thank you." Duan Lingtian shrugged and replied via voice transmission. "Senior Sister Zhuqing, your little face senior sister, so you're my senior sister as well? We're all family, there's no need to be courteous." Family? A brilliant smile appeared on Zhuqing's beautiful face when she heard Duan Lingtian, and she nodded. "Zhuqing, how did you do it?" Hidong was puzzled as he stared at Zhuqing in disbelief. Zhuqing's actions had shocked him. During those 10 breaths of time when Zhuqing and the berserk ape were fighting in the cage, it was as if Zhuqing and the berserk ape had gone through countless rehearsals. It was even more like a play. However, this play was extremely realistic and thrilling. You should ask Duan Lingtian about that. Zhuqing only gave Hidong a single sentence before her gaze descended onto Hu Shuefeng, who'd walked into the cage and was facing the violent ape that had gone mad, and the smile on her face faded away to be replaced by gloominess. Duan Lingtian? Hearing Zhuqing's words, Hidong looked at Duan Lingtian and his heart couldn't help but tremble. No wonder Duan Lingtian was so confident in Zhuqing. It turned out that he already had a plan in mind. Furthermore, he seemed to have contributed a lot to Zhuqing being able to pass the inner court disciple test. Duan Lingtian, how did you do it? Hidong looked at Duan Lingtian as he asked in a light voice, and his tone contained a sense of astonishment mixed within. To him this was simply too inconceivable. Duan Lingtian's brows raised as he slowly said, "Actually it's very simple, you only need to know the habits of the berserk ape." Subsequently, Duan Lingtian roughly explained to Hidong. All of this came from the lifetime experience of the Emperor Wu of Samsara. Hidong was intoxicated as he listened. However, this berserk ape has been tricked once and it won't be tricked a second time. If you want to play like this, then you can only go find another berserk ape. After Duan Lingtian finished speaking, he smiled. Duan Lingtian, you actually know so many things that I've never heard of before. Now, I'm really curious exactly how many secrets are stored in your head. Presently, Hidong admired Duan Lingtian to the point of prostrating himself before him, and he completely had no temper. His gaze descended onto the other berserk ape. I hope the test elder will call me out to deal with this berserk ape. I'll also be able to test out the theory you taught me. Roar. Meanwhile, Hu Shuefeng had already started a fierce battle with the berserk ape that had gone mad. Rather than calling it a fierce battle, it could be said that Hu Shuefeng dodged as he fought, as an 8th-level origin core stage martial artist. Although Hu Shuefeng was unable to utilize the grade 7 spirit sword in his hand, his strength couldn't be underestimated, and he narrowly dodged the berserk ape's attacks time and time again. Of course, Hu Shuefeng didn't have it easy either, and was in an extremely sorry state. Hidong. Test Elder Jianghu called out Hidong to enter the other cage and battle with the other berserk ape. My luck isn't bad. Hidong smiled, then walked in with large strides. In next to no time, everyone saw that the method Hidong used to deal with the berserk ape was exactly the same as Zhuqing. Senior brother Hidong has broken through as well? The crowd of outer court disciples were dumbstruck when they saw the 110 ancient mammoth silhouettes that condensed into form above Hidong. Even Test Elder Jianghui's face revealed slight astonishment. Hidong relied on his cultivation at the 8th level of the origin core stage to toy with the berserk ape, and it was even easier than Zhuqing. In the eyes of others, Hidong seemed as if he was playing. He easily persisted for 5 breaths of time. Meanwhile, in the other cage, 10 breaths of time was up. Hu Shuefeng had passed the inner court disciple test. However, the current Hu Shuefeng was covered in dust, and he completely didn't have the handsome appearance from before. Right when Hu Shuefeng's face revealed complacency and he was waiting for the cheers of the people nearby, he instead noticed that not a single person was looking at him now, as the gazes of everyone had descended onto the other cage. It was as if there was an even more exciting scene there. Hu Shuefeng frowned and looked over. Just a glance caused his pupils to constrict and his face to sink. Within the cage, Hidong's figure floated gracefully, and he easily dodged the berserk ape's attacks. After 10 breaths of time passed and he passed the inner court disciple test, the berserk ape didn't even touch the corners of Hidong's clothes. Ayo! Ayo! Along with Hidong passing the test at the same time that the crowd of outer court disciples cheered for him, the berserk apes within the 2 cages had already started to go berserk and were completely enraged. Hidong Hu Shuefeng passed the test. Test Elder Jianghu slowly spoke out. 2 8th-level origin core stage outer court disciples have passed the inner court disciple test as expected. An outer court disciple couldn't help but sigh. 8th-level origin core stage martial artists with shocking strength, passing the test isn't strange. However, even though they've passed the test, who's strong and who's weak can be seen through with a glance. That's true. Even though senior brother Hu Shuefeng passed the test, he was in an extremely sorry state. On the other hand, senior brother Hidong completely doesn't seem like a person that had just fought a berserk ape. Hidong and Hu Shuefeng stood there and formed a sharp contrast. Hu Shuefeng's face sank and he fiercely glared at Hidong. Now he even hated Hidong. As far as he was concerned. If it wasn't for Hidong seizing his limelight, he would surely be the absolute center of attention now. He hated. Within the 2 cages, the 2 berserk apes were extremely restless, ceaselessly pounding their chests, and their crimson-red eyes that were large as gongs caused one to be shocked. The few outer court disciples that hadn't participated in the inner court disciple test had pale faces when they saw test elder Jianghu's gaze sweep over. I give up. I give up as well. In the end they chose to give up. Earlier they'd clearly seen the ability of the berserk ape that went berserk. Even Hu Shuefeng, who was at the 8th level of the origin core stage, was in such a sorry state. If it was them, perhaps they wouldn't even be able to persist for the time of a single breath. They knew their limits. For a time, only Duan Lingtian remained amongst the people present that hadn't participated in the inner court disciple test. The gazes of everyone descended onto Duan Lingtian, and they looked forward to Duan Lingtian's performance. Duan Lingtian, the young man that had just entered the 7-star sword sect 7 months ago. In a short 7 months of time, he'd already become famous in the entire 7-star sword sect and became the publicly acknowledged #1 genius of the 7-star sword sect. The #1 genius since the founding of the sect. Presently, the halo above Duan Lingtian was dazzling and dazzling. A little over 20 years old with a cultivation at the 8th level of the origin core stage. Not to mention the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, even if it was in the entire Darkstone Empire, or even the Dark Han Dynasty, such natural talent was a top-rate existence. Duan Lingtian. Test Elder Jianghu's gaze descended onto Duan Lingtian, and he lightly smiled. 2 berserk apes, which one will you choose? Presently, the 2 berserk apes that were locked within the 2 cages seemed to have gone mad, and had completely gone berserk. Of course, there was a difference in the degree to which the 2 berserk apes went berserk. The berserk ape that He Dong faced earlier was still fine, and it was only enraged just now. Now that some time had passed, its mood had calmed down greatly. However, the berserk ape that Hu Shuefeng faced was even more berserk and enraged to the limit than after he fought with Zuoqin. It was repeatedly played with by 2 people whose strengths were inferior to it. At this moment, this berserk ape seemed to have transformed into a berserk ape. Now, even if an ordinary 9th level origin core stage fierce beast appeared before it, perhaps the fierce beast would be directly torn into pieces by it. I wonder which berserk ape Duan Lingtian will choose. An outer court disciple was slightly curious. His curiosity aroused the curiosity of the crowd of outer court disciples as well. I feel that he ought to choose the berserk ape that He Dong faced earlier. After all, the rage of that berserk ape seems to have calmed down greatly now. I think so as well. The berserk ape that Hu Shuefeng faced earlier was already infuriated by Zuoqin, and its rage hadn't subsided yet when it was infuriated by Hu Shuefeng. Now, the strength of this berserk ape under its rage has probably already arrived at an unimaginable extent. Its current strength is absolutely the limit of a 9th level origin core stage fierce beast strength. Right when the gazes of everyone descended onto Duan Lingtian and were curious about how Duan Lingtian would choose. Hu Shuefeng's icy cold gaze followed to descend onto Duan Lingtian, and he sneered. Duan Lingtian, you should choose that berserk ape that He Dong faced earlier. Otherwise, I'm afraid you'll be unable to pass the inner court disciple test this time. Hu Shuefeng's sneer contained dense ridicule mixed within. Chapter 336. You seem to not have the qualifications to talk about me now. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a sneer as he looked at Hu Shuefeng, and he slowly spat out 2 words. Coward. Coward. Duan Lingtian had once again ridiculed Hu Shuefeng as a coward in public. This time, the people present included Test Elder Jianghu and the 8 inner court disciples, and all of them looked at Hu Shuefeng with strange expressions. Hu Shuefeng's expression was unsightly to the extreme, yet he just happened to have no words to refute. Presently, when he noticed the numerous gazes of ridicule from the surroundings, he wished for nothing more than to dig a hole and hide in it. Under the gazes of everyone present, Duan Lingtian withdrew his gaze that had descended onto Hu Shuefeng, then swept the 2 violent apes in the distance one by one before walking over with large strides. Everyone present concentrated their minds and calmed their breathing. They were all curious which violent ape Duan Lingtian would choose to be his opponent. The restless mood of the violent ape that He Dong faced earlier had already calmed down now. Duan Lingtian wanting to persist for 10 breaths of time under this violent ape ought to not have the slightest difficulty. After the successive provocations of Zuoqin and Hu Shuefeng, the other violent ape's rage had reached its peak, and up until now, it was still beating its robust chest like a madman. Thump, 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 thump. On the test platform that had temporarily quieted down, the sound of the violent ape ceaselessly swinging its arms and beating its chest as if it had gone mad could be vaguely heard. Oh! The violent ape emitted roars of extreme rage from time to time, the muscles on its body that was like a small hill bulged, and strong muscles could vaguely be seen twitching ceaselessly. Not far away from the two cages, Duan Lingtian stopped moving. Duan Lingtian is going to choose. On the test platform, the hearts of everyone, including Test Elder, couldn't help but rise to their throats. Numerous gazes descended onto Duan Lingtian. They were curious exactly what choice Duan Lingtian would make. Duan Lingtian. He Dong and Zhuqing looked at Duan Lingtian's back as flowing lights flickered within their eyes, and they were similarly curious. Hu Xiefeng looked at Duan Lingtian from afar. His handsome face was slightly distorted and ugly. Finally Duan Lingtian moved. He took a step forward and his entire body moved. It was as if he had turned into an agile snake, and quickly swept into one of the cages. He had made his choice. It's the berserk ape that Hu Xiefeng dealt with earlier. In the end, senior brother Duan Lingtian still chose this extremely enraged berserk ape. With senior brother Duan Lingtian's strength, it shouldn't be a problem for him to persist for 10 breaths of time in front of this crazy violent ape. I just don't know if he will be as miserable as Hu Xiefeng. One by one, the outer disciples looked at the scene before them with anticipation. Everyone's gazes fell onto the cage. Currently, Duan Lingtian was standing opposite the berserk ape. Senior brother, you go out first. After Duan Lingtian walked into the cage, he started sizing it up from top to bottom. When everyone was bewildered, he looked at the inner court disciple that stood within the cage and lightly smiled. The inner court disciple was unable to react for a moment when he heard this, and he was stunned. Senior brother Duan Lingtian asked that inner court senior brother to leave the cage? Awesome. Too awesome. That's a 9th level origin core stage fierce beast, the berserk ape. Senior brother Duan Lingtian is so confident? As expected of the current number 1 disciple in our 7-star sword sect's outer court. Senior brother Duan Lingtian is too awesome. Senior brother Duan Lingtian, do your best. Some outer court disciples were aroused by Duan Lingtian's decision, and their hot blood boiled. Duan Lingtian, you're really asking me to leave? The inner court disciple was slightly hesitant when he heard Duan Lingtian. If I leave the cage, then even if 10 breaths of time have passed, it won't stop. Are you sure you don't need my help to subdue it? No need. Duan Lingtian shook his head with a confident expression. The inner court disciple nodded, but he still looked at the test elder, Jianghu, from afar, and only when Jianghu nodded and obtained Jianghu's permission did he leave the cage. What a Duan Lingtian. Jianghu looked at Duan Lingtian, and for a time he felt that Duan Lingtian was really pleasing to the eye no matter how he looked at him, and his face revealed a wisp of a smile. Our 7-star sword sect has really picked up a treasure this time. Once this Duan Lingtian grows up in the future, he'll surely become a genius of the Darkhan dynasty. A genius of the generation. Figures that were able to be called geniuses of the generation in the Darkhan dynasty were all top figures in the Darkhan dynasty. It could be imagined that Jianghu held extremely great expectations towards Duan Lingtian's future. After the inner court disciple left the cage, Duan Lingtian raised his hand and actually closed the door of the cage, then casually locked it. This scene caused the scalps of the people present to go numb. What does senior brother Duan Lingtian want to do? He wouldn't be thinking of killing the violent ape, right? The crowd of outer court disciples were completely dumbstruck, and they were unable to understand Duan Lingtian's actions. As far as they were concerned, Duan Lingtian's actions were simply sealing off his path of retreat. Oh. Within the completely sealed cage, the violent ape that seemed to have gone mad stared wide open its crimson-red eyes that were large like gongs as it sized up Duan Lingtian, then abruptly roared explosively, and it was filled with threatening intent. Duan Lingtian stood on the spot, and a light smile hung on his face. He had a carefree expression, and his expression wouldn't change even if Mount Tai collapsed before him. Presently, in the eyes of others, Duan Lingtian stood within the cage, unmoving like a mountain. It was as if what he was facing wasn't a 9th level origin core stage fierce beast that had gone mad, but a docile little cat. The violent ape is about to make a move. An inner court disciple that had always been paying attention to the violent ape's changes couldn't help but exclaim in a low voice. Instantly, the gazes of everyone descended onto the violent ape. Oh! Within the cage, the violent ape roared explosively, then at the same time that it swung its arms and took a stride out, it fiercely smashed towards Duanlingtian. The violent ape that had gone mad smashed out with its arm, and it carried the strength of 120 ancient mammoths. The strength of a 9th-level Origin Core Stage fierce beast exploded out without holding back in the slightest. Right when everyone thought that Duanlingtian would choose to dodge, a scene that caused them to be astounded appeared. They saw Duanlingtian take a stride forward and actually didn't dodge or dodge. Not only that, the current Duanlingtian took a stride out like a mountain, and he actually copied the violent ape and swung his arm out directly. Whoosh! Duanlingtian's arm swung out tore through the air, causing everyone present to have the misconception that what Duanlingtian swung out wasn't an arm, but a strong and powerful python tail. His arm tore through the sky like a python swinging its tail. Above Duanlingtian, 110 ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form. This arm swung out carried the strength of 110 ancient mammoths. Madman. At practically the instant that Duanlingtian made a move to go head-on with the violent ape, the same thought couldn't help but emerge within the hearts of everyone present. Using the strength of 110 ancient mammoths to go head-on with the strength of 120 ancient mammoths of the violent ape? Is he really rational? Besides the outer court disciples present that seemed to be lost in thought, Test Elder Jianghu and the inner court disciples all had astonished expressions. Under the gazes of everyone present. Bang! The arm that Duanlingtian swung out fiercely smashed together with the arm that the violent ape smashed down. Instantly, the dust beneath the feet of Duanlingtian and the violent ape was affected by the two formidable forces and suffused into the air. Satisfying. Duanlingtian's face revealed an excited smile, and he felt the hot blood in his entire body boil, swinging out his arm to go head-on with the violent ape that had gone mad. How many martial artists below the nascent soul stage would dare do this? At the instant that he swung out his arm and smashed out with the violent ape's arm, Duanlingtian felt a formidable force come from the violent ape's strong arm, causing the vital blood in his entire body to roil. However, in the blink of an eye, this force was dissolved by the quake energy that slightly trembled within him. So, as far as the spectators were concerned, he and the violent ape were evenly matched, and it was difficult to determine a victor. In reality, this was only the beginning. Duanlingtian is actually evenly matched with the violent ape? The surrounding crowd of spectators were all shocked. Looks like it's as the rumors say, this Duanlingtian does indeed possess a mysterious and unfathomable ability to defeat a stronger opponent with the weak. Jianghu thought in his heart. Ow! Within the cage, the violent ape was instantly enraged when it saw the human before it had blocked its attack, and it roared explosively as its other arm fiercely swung up and smashed down towards Duanlingtian. Whoosh! Everywhere the violent ape's arm passed, the air was shaken and emitted oppressive sounds of air exploding as it smashed down towards Duanlingtian's head. It could be imagined that if Duanlingtian's head were to be smashed, he would die without a doubt. Forget it, I'm not playing with you anymore. The corners of Duanlingtian's mouth curled into a sneer when faced with the violent ape's arm that smashed down in extreme rage, and his other hand formed into a fist as his origin energy skyrocketed and raged. Whoosh! His fist smashed out like a cannonball as it moved to intercept the violent ape's arm that smashed down. On Duanlingtian's fist, origin energy started to tremble, and the frequency became faster and faster. It was precisely the quake energy that Duanlingtian had executed that was difficult to detect. Bang! Suddenly, Duanlingtian's fist smashed onto the violent ape's arm, and it emitted a oppressive sound. Not long after, the violent ape's body trembled, and its crimson-red pupils constricted as if it had encountered something terrifying. Its enormous body trembled as it hurriedly retreated, and it looked at Duanlingtian in terror. This scene caused the surrounding crowd of spectators to be greatly shocked. What's going on? The violent ape actually retreated. The 8 inner court disciples had shocked expressions, and although the crowd of outer court disciples were mentally prepared since long ago, they still couldn't help but be moved. Senior brother Duanlingtian's ability is too terrifying. Yeah, that day he used the strength of 100 ancient mammoths to kill Shirhao, who exerted the strength of over 120 ancient mammoths. Today this violent ape is only stronger than him by the strength of 10 ancient mammoths. Even if it goes berserk, it's probably not a match for him. In the next moment, the scene that occurred before their eyes caused the faces of all the outer court disciples to flush red, and their throats seemed as if they were choked by someone, causing them to be unable to make a sound for a long time. You're smart, you know how formidable it is. Chapter 337. This violent ape noticed something was wrong at the first possible moment when it was struck by Duan Lingtian's punch that contained the terrifying quake energy, and its enormous body retreated decisively. This caused Duan Lingtian to have no choice but to sigh with emotion. This violent ape was simply as intelligent as a human. As expected of a humanoid fierce beast. Awu! Suddenly, the violent ape whose legs were locked by Duan Lingtian roared furiously, then its arms pulled back as if transforming into a strong bow, and it once again smashed down towards Duan Lingtian. Too late. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a cold smile, and origin energy skyrocketed above his hands. Quake energy. The terrifying quake energy instantly gushed into the violent ape's legs, then spread out and shook the origin energy on the violent ape's body to disperse. In the next moment, under the gazes of everyone present, Duan Lingtian pulled with his arms and forcefully swung the violent ape up, then fiercely smashed it towards the side of the cage. Bah! The cage trembled for a moment, and the violent ape was forcefully smashed onto the cage by Duan Lingtian. Awu! The violent ape howled with grief. The current violent ape didn't have the bloodthirsty and furious appearance from before, and it was simply like an aggrieved little wife. Whoosh! Duan Lingtian's arms shook. Then he once again swung the violent ape up and smashed it towards the other side of the cage. Bah! The enormous body of the violent ape was once again smashed onto the cage, emitting an enormous bang. When this enormous bang entered into the ears of the surrounding crowd of spectators, it caused them to feel a chill run down their spines. They could imagine that if the violent ape was them, they would probably be directly smashed to death by Duan Lingtian. Bah! Another enormous bang sounded out, and this time the violent ape was swung around and smashed onto the ground by Duan Lingtian. Awu! The violent ape whose entire body was covered in injuries lay on the ground and emitted a wave of low and high-pitched sorrowful howls. Its arms hugged its head, and its pair of large eyes flickered with a pitiful sheen as it stared at Duan Lingtian. It was as if he was begging Duan Lingtian for mercy. Duan Lingtian also didn't plan on doing anything to the berserk ape, and directly released his hand. Meanwhile, whoosh! He raised his hand and a medicinal pill flew out, directly shooting into the berserk ape's mouth. Eat it. After the wild ape swallowed the pill, its injuries gradually recovered and it was finally able to stand up. After standing up, it knelt on one knee and bowed its head to Duan Lingtian. This scene caused the absent-minded crowd to quiver. They came back to their senses and looked at the scene in front of them in disbelief. This etiquette of the violent ape seems to be the etiquette of submission. Logically speaking, this sort of etiquette of submission is something that the violent apes ought to only display before the king of their race. Usually, even if they die in battle, they won't submit. A knowledgeable inner disciple couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva as he was inexplicably shocked. Looks like Duan Lingtian has obtained the true respect of this violent ape. Another inner court disciple said with a tone that contained traces of shock. As for the others, they were instead completely dumbstruck. Submission? That violent ape actually submitted before Duan Lingtian? F***K. An outer court disciple reacted to what happened and couldn't help but burst out with a curse. This inner court disciple test seems to only ask us to persist for 10 breaths of time before the violent ape before we're considered to have passed, right? Senior brother Duan Lingtian instead directly beat the violent ape to the ground, and even made the violent ape submit beneath his feet. Too awesome. The remaining group of outer court disciples mostly had flushed faces and were exceedingly excited. That violent ape is a 9th level origin core stage fierce beast at any rate, but before senior brother Duan Lingtian, it was like a kitten or puppy. Earlier Duan Lingtian swung it around and smashed it randomly, and it was simply like playing with a toy. Yet too exaggerated. If I didn't see it with my own 2 eyes, I utterly wouldn't dare believe that an 8th level origin core stage martial artist is capable of doing this. That's a 9th level origin core stage fierce beast, not a kitten or puppy. I've decided. In the future, senior brother Duan Lingtian is my idol. When I recall the scene from before now, I still can't help but feel my hot blood boil. The violent ape was swung around and smashed by senior brother Duan Lingtian just like that, and in the end, it was simply smashed to the point it lost its temper. All the outer court disciples now looked at Duan Lingtian with gazes that were filled with burning gazes. He Dong and Zhuqing glanced at each other. The 2 people who were never on good terms were filled with a rare tacit understanding. Hu Shuifeng's expression was as unsightly as it could be when he saw this scene. He'd barely persisted for 10 breaths of time before this violent ape before finally passing the test in a sorry state. Now, it was the same violent ape, yet Duanling Tian had made it submit. Such a large contrast caused Hu Shuifeng's heart to be unable to refrain from trembling, and the hatred he had towards Duanling Tian in his heart rose to the limit. Test Elder Jianghu had an astounded expression when he saw the scene before him. Although he had confidence in Duanling Tian, he never imagined that Duanling Tian would be so barbaric, directly making the violent ape lie on the ground. Just like what that outer court disciple had said earlier. This inner court disciple test seemed to only require one to persist for 10 breaths of time under the violent ape, right? This Duanling Tian instead directly smashed the violent ape to the point it had no temper. Oh! The violent ape that knelt on one knee before Duanling Tian abruptly lowered its head, and its cry was filled with respect. The violent ape's actions caused Duanling Tian to be unable to help but be stunned. He possessed the lifetime worth of memories of Emperor Wu, so he was naturally able to discern that the violent ape was performing the etiquette of submission. This was the etiquette that would only be performed when facing an ape king. Now this violent ape performed this sort of etiquette before him, and it caused him to be shocked in his heart. Get up. According to the memories of Emperor Wu, Duanling Tian had learned the actions of the Monkey King when facing this sort of situation, and he stretched out his hand to rub the violent ape's lowered head a total of 3 times. Ow! After Duanling Tian finished touching it for the 3rd time, the violent ape stood up and stood obediently at the side, meek like a little kitten. Meanwhile, Duanling Tian opened the lock on the cage and walked out. Duanling Tian noticed that the gazes of everyone present had descended onto him. Within these gazes were a variety of emotions. There was astonishment, reverence, adoration, yearning, of course there was also hatred. Duanling Tian's brows raised as he looked at the people that were staring at him with hatred, and the corners of his mouth were suffused with a wisp of coldness. This Hu Shuifeng is really like a ghost that refuses to leave. Duanling Tian has passed the inner court disciple test and become an inner court disciple. Meanwhile, Test Elder Jianghu announced. Duanling Tian's face revealed a smile. From today onwards, he was an inner court disciple of the 7-Star Sword sect. Today there were a total of 4 people that had passed the inner court disciple test. Duanling Tian, Hidong, Zuoqing, and Hu Shuifeng. This is your inner court command token. I'll report your names after we return today. Tomorrow, all of you can rely on the inner court command token to go register at the registration area near the Dubhe Peaks Trade Hall and receive the inner court disciples attire. Jianghu raised his hand, and 4 simple command tokens appeared out of thin air, and he passed them to Duanling Tian's group of 4. After Hu Shuifeng obtained the command token, he glanced hatefully at Duanling Tian before leaving with large strides. If it wasn't for the sake of waiting for this inner court command token, he would have left long ago. Elder Jianghu will be leaving first. Duanling Tian bid his farewells to Test Elder Jianghu, then left the test platform with Zuoqing and Hidong to walk towards Dubhe Peak. The group of outer court disciples respectfully sent Duanling Tian off with their gazes. I'm afraid it won't be long before today's matter will spread throughout the entire sect. This Duanling Tian really scares people to death. Jianghu glanced at Duanling Tian's figure and shook his head as he sighed. Oh! Duanling Tian had only just walked out of the test platform when he heard a respectful howl sound out from behind him. He turned around to look. He saw the violent ape kneeling on one knee within the cage, and it raised its arm as it sent Duanling Tian off with its gaze. The corners of Duanling Tian's mouth curled into a smile. Through the memories of Samsara Emperor Wu, he knew the meaning of the violent ape's actions. This was the etiquette of sending the ape king off respectfully. Duanling Tian raised his hand and waved at the violent ape before leaving with Zuoqing and Hidong. Oh! When it saw Duanling Tian vanish before its eyes, the violent ape stood up and raised its head as it roared loudly, then swung its arms and ceaselessly struck its spacious chest. Thump, 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 thump. A muffled sound sounded out as if a song of farewell was being composed. This scene entered into the eyes of the people that hadn't left, and it caused them to be unable to refrain from sighing with emotion. How is this a fierce beast? It's simply like a human wearing beast skin. It's said that apes are fierce beasts that are closest to humans. Even if their cultivations aren't high, they've already begun to understand human nature. Today I can be considered to have completely witnessed it. Even a fierce beast like the violent ape submitted before Duanling Tian. Could it be that it has discerned that Duanling Tian is extraordinary? It's possible. After Duan Lingtian's group of 3 left the test platform, they walked all the way up the mountain. They prepared to return to the outer court Sword Peak. Duan Lingtian, you're really... I don't know what to say. On the way, Hidong squeezed out a sentence with great difficulty, yet he didn't know what to say. Don't say anything if you don't know what to say. Zhuqing grunted coldly and was extremely displeased with Hidong. In next to no time, the 3 of them arrived nearby the chain bridge that led to Migres Peak. Hidong, you go back first. Duan Lingtian bid his farewells to Hidong, then he and Zhuqing arrived at another stone platform and stepped onto the chain bridge that led to Alcade Peak. He intended to go look for Li Fei. He hadn't seen that little girl for over a month, and he rather missed her in his heart. Duan Lingtian and Zhuqing walked past the chain bridge, and on the way, the gazes of the Alcade Peak female disciples lit up when they saw Duan Lingtian, and they bowed respectfully. Senior brother Duan Lingtian. Only when Duan Lingtian stepped onto Alcade Peak did he truly understand the meaning of, women are fiercer than tigers. After the group of Alcade Peak female disciples noticed him, they made a commotion and surrounded him. Senior brother Duan Lingtian, the sword skill I'm cultivating has encountered calmness. Can you guide me? Senior brother Duan Lingtian, I made a trip home a few days ago and brought back many snacks from home. Do you want to try some as well? Senior brother Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian was rather helpless when being besieged by the group of Alcade Peak female disciples, and he could only look at Zhuqing who stood at the side and was secretly laughing. Chapter 338. Perhaps it was because Duan Lingtian was pitiful, or perhaps it was because she recalled that Duan Lingtian had helped her pass the inner court disciple test. Zhuqing withdrew her smile. Junior sisters. Zhuqing walked gracefully and stood in front of Duan Lingtian, then looked at the group of Alcade Peak female disciples. That's enough. Duan Lingtian came to our Alcade Peak because my master asked him to come. If he's late because of you, then when my master blames you, you'll have to bear the consequences. Zhuqing's words were indeed effective. Although the group of Alcade Peak female disciples were reluctant, they still obediently dispersed. Many of the female disciples glanced affectionately at Duan Lingtian as they dispersed, and their gazes were filled with teasing. This caused Duan Lingtian to feel a wave of helplessness. Senior sisters Zhuqing, they seem to be very afraid of Elder Bai? After leaving the vicinity of the chain bridge, Duan Lingtian looked at Zhuqing and asked curiously. Of course. Zhuqing nodded and smiled. Normally, the peak master of our Alcade Peak doesn't ask about the matters of our Alcade Peak. It's all managed by my master. In Alcade Peak, my master can be considered to be half a peak master. Duan Lingtian came to a sudden understanding. In the past, relying on his formidable spiritual force and the lifetime experience of Samsara Emperor Wu, he was able to discern that Elder Bai's strength wasn't ordinary. She far surpassed the outer court elders of the other sword peaks that he'd seen. Now that he knew of Elder Bai's status in Alcade Peak, he felt relieved. After all, if one didn't have a certain amount of strength to manage such a large Alcade Peak, not to mention what the disciples of Alcade Peak would think, the other outer court elders probably wouldn't be convinced. Master shouldn't be here at this time. You go look for junior sister. Zhuqing sent Duan Lingtian out of the gorge and smiled ambiguously at Duan Lingtian, not intending to return with him. Thank you, senior sister. Duan Lingtian smiled as well. This senior sister Zhuqing was really considerate. Walking into the canyon, Duan Lingtian saw Li Fei. Li Fei was watering the flowers. Looking at Li Fei's curvaceous body, Duan Lingtian's lower abdomen couldn't help but heat up. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled up into a smirk. He approached silently, opened his arms and hugged Li Fei from behind. Who? Li Fei was frightened and shouted subconsciously. Little beauty, stop screaming. Even if you scream yourself hoarse, no one will come to save you. Duan Lingtian put his mouth beside Li Fei's earlobe and lightly blew on it as he pretended to speak with a hoarse voice. Bastard. Li Fei came back to her senses and her face was full of joy. She easily recognized Duan Lingtian. You're even able to recognize me? Duan Lingtian laughed bitterly and let go of Li Fei, then looked at Li Fei who turned around, and his eyes were filled with tender affection. Bastard, you went to participate in the inner court disciple test today as well, right? Li Fei blinked her beautiful eyes as she asked. Yes. Duan Lingtian nodded. You're at the 8th level of the origin core stage now. Passing the inner court disciple test shouldn't be difficult. Senior sister went as well, did she pass? Li Fei blinked her beautiful eyes and asked with a face full of anticipation. Since you want to know, why didn't you go watch the show with her? Duan Lingtian shook his head and smiled. I just finished cultivating not long ago and looked at the sky. The inner court disciple test ought to be ending soon, so I didn't go over. Li Fei said. I'll tell you later. Duan Lingtian domineeringly carried Li Fei, whose beautiful face was flushed red, and directly rushed into the wooden house. After being intimate for a while, Li Fei, who had a satisfied expression, stretched out her finger and drew small circles on Duan Lingtian's chest. Bastard, did senior sister pass the inner court disciple test or not? Do you hope she passes? Duan Lingtian hugged Li Fei a little tighter, rubbed Li Fei's soft and smooth long hair, and smelled the fragrance of Li Fei's hair as he asked with a light smile. Of course I hope senior sister passes. But, supposedly, it's extremely difficult for 7th level origin core stage outer court disciples to pass the inner court disciple test. As she finished speaking, Li Fei had a face full of worry. Alright, I won't tease you anymore. Duan Lingtian shook his head and smiled when he saw Li Fei's expression. With your man here, are you still worried senior sister won't be able to pass the test? Duan Lingtian's words caused Li Fei's eyes to light up. Senior sister really passed the inner court disciple test? Of course, why would I lie to you? But, you have to properly help your senior sister thank your man me. Duan Lingtian laughed wickedly. You bastard, you're really thick-skinned. Senior sister passing the test is her own ability, how can you take all the credit? Li Fei grunted lightly with a face full of disbelief. Forget it, I can't get through to you. Go ask your senior sister yourself later. Duan Lingtian laughed bitterly as he shook his head, and didn't have any intention of explaining. Bastard, is what you said true? Duan Lingtian saying this caused Li Fei's heart to slightly tremble, and she blinked her beautiful eyes as she asked in a light voice. Of course it's true. Little Fei, when have I ever lied to you? Duan Lingtian shook his head and smiled. He took a deep breath and was intoxicated by the fragrance of Li Fei's hair. Bastard, tell me. Li Fei's interest was piqued. What? You believe me now? Duan Lingtian laughed. Seeing that Li Fei was urging her again and again, Li Fei roughly explained what had happened. Bastard, thank you. Li Fei rubbed against Duan Lingtian's embrace as she spoke softly. She knew that it was precisely because of her that her man would help her senior sister. Little Fei, when have you ever been so courteous with me? Duan Lingtian shook his head and smiled. After accompanying Li Fei for a while longer, Duan Lingtian put on his clothes and prepared to leave. Before leaving he asked, Little Fei, I intend to make a trip to the solitary peak 2 months from now. Li Fei's gaze lit up when she heard this. You want to help that Boundless Sect's young sect leader deliver a message? When Duan Lingtian met the Boundless Sect's young sect leader in the misty forest outside Aurora City, Li Fei was present as well. So, Li Fei knew of the request the Boundless Sect's young sect leader had given to Duan Lingtian that day. Yes. Duan Lingtian nodded. It's for the sake of helping him deliver a message and going for a walk while I'm at it? Do you want to go with me? Of course. I'll tell Master about it later. Li Fei nodded excitedly. She'd been in the 7-star sword sect for over 7 months, yet she'd never left and had been bored to death since long ago. Duan Lingtian nodded. Then I'll come look for you at that time. I hope Kerr can return at that time and the 3 of us will go with Xiongquan. Subsequently, Duan Lingtian left after notifying Li Fei. When he left Arcade Peak, Duan Lingtian intentionally sped up his footsteps and quickly ascended the chain bridge to head towards the main peak, Dubhe Peak. It was as if he was fleeing for his life. This caused the group of Arcade Peak female disciples that had just reacted to the situation to sigh. Why's senior brother Duan Lingtian running so quickly? I still want to share the snacks I brought from home with senior brother Duan Lingtian. I still want to discuss life with senior brother Duan Lingtian. After Duan Lingtian arrived at the main peak, Dubhe Peak, he couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief, then he returned to Migres Peak. Duan Lingtian's brows frowned when he'd only just arrived at Migres Peak. Because he saw a familiar person walking towards him. Duan Lingtian. When Wu Yongqian saw Duan Lingtian once again, his eyes flickered with a ghastly sheen of hatred. It was precisely this outer court disciple that completely crippled his right arm, causing him to be unable to use his right hand to execute sword skills in the future. Is there something you need? Duan Lingtian's tone was calm as he asked indifferently. My foster father wants to see you. Wu Yongqian spoke directly. What? The Peak Master wants to see me? Duan Lingtian was stunned when he heard Wu Yongqian, then he raised his voice to spread throughout the surroundings. For a moment, it drew the attention of many Migres Peak disciples. Peak Master? Isn't that the foster son of our Migres Peak's master, Wu Yongqian? Looks like it's precisely our Migres Peak's master who wants to see Duan Lingtian. The crowd of Migres Peak disciples discussed animatedly. Wu Yongqian frowned when he heard the discussions of these Migres Peak disciples. Then he looked at Duan Lingtian and said in a low voice, Duan Lingtian, my foster father wants to see you. Why are you making so much noise as if you're afraid others don't know that you're going to see my foster father? Ha! Duan Lingtian couldn't help but start laughing without restraint. Wu Yongqian, I crippled one of your arms that day after all, and you suddenly said that the Peak Master wants to see me. How would I know if the Peak Master went back on the matter from that day and wants to do something to me? So now, I feel that there's a need to let everyone know more about this matter. Crippled arm? The crowd of Migres Peak disciples were completely petrified when they heard Duan Lingtian. Their gazes descended onto Wu Yongqian, and they instantly noticed that Wu Yongqian's right arm drooped down as if it had no bones. It can't be, right? Senior brother Duan Lingtian actually crippled senior brother Wu Yongqian's right arm? Isn't this too ferocious? I heard senior brother Duan Lingtian say that it seems like the Peak Master knows of this matter as well. Awesome. I can be considered to have witnessed what true awesome is now. All the Migres Peak disciples looked at Duan Lingtian with adoration, simply as if taking Duan Lingtian to be their idol. Duan Lingtian, an outer court disciple like you dares be presumptuous before me? Wu Yongqian's face went ghastly pale when he saw Duan Lingtian publicizing his embarrassing matter to everyone, and he shouted with a stern voice. Outer court disciple? The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a slight smile when he heard Wu Yongqian, and with a raise of his hand, an ancient command token appeared in his hand. Wu Yongqian, open your eyes wide and look carefully. This command token ought to not be unfamiliar to you, right? Wu Yongqian's face sank when he saw the command token in Duan Lingtian's hand. He naturally recognized this command token because he had one himself. As for the nearby Migres Peak disciples, their gazes lit up one after another. Isn't that an inner court disciple's command token? It seems to be. Looks like senior brother Duan Lingtian has already passed today's inner court disciple test. 1 month ago, there was a rumor that senior brother Duan Lingtian had broken through to the 8th level of the origin core stage, and becoming an inner court disciple with a cultivation at the 8th level of the origin core stage isn't strange. The problem is, senior brother Duan Lingtian seems to only be a little over 20, right? Senior brother Duan Lingtian is worthy of being the publicly acknowledged monstrous genius of our 7-star sword sect. Before he appeared, if someone told me that an 8th level origin core stage martial artist a little over 20 had appeared in our Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, I wouldn't believe it even if I was beaten to death. Chapter 339. When the whispers of the Migres Peak disciples entered into Wu Yongqian's ears, it caused Wu Yongqian's face to go livid, and his pair of fierce eyes flickered with dense rage. This Duan Lingtian crippled his right arm, causing him to be dragged down because of this, and his future accomplishments were worrying. His dream since he was young was to succeed his foster father's position and become the Peak Master of the 7-star sword sect's Migres Peak. But now it would seem that all of this would become an extravagant hope. Duan Lingtian, if it wasn't for you, I'd surely be able to become the Peak Master of Migres Peak in the future. It's all because of you. Wu Yongqian's heart was filled with rage to the limit, and wished for nothing more than to tear Duan Lingtian into pieces before burning his bones and scattering his ashes. As far as he was concerned, it was Duan Lingtian that destroyed his life. Duan Lingtian frowned when he noticed Wu Yongqian's ghastly and hateful gaze, then said indifferently, Wu Yongqian, you seem to hate me? Although Wu Yongqian didn't say anything, but a cold snort was sufficient to display his hatred towards Duan Lingtian. Wu Yongqian, although I crippled your arm, but you have to understand one thing clearly. On that day, if it wasn't for you stubbornly resisting and being unwilling to stop, your right arm wouldn't have been crippled. Duan Lingtian looked at Wu Yongqian with a calm gaze. So, the greatest responsibility for your right arm being crippled is on you? If you abandoned your sword a moment earlier, you would at most be lightly injured. It was your conceit, your arrogance, that completely destroyed yourself. On that day when Wu Yongqian fought Duan Lingtian, he'd used his right hand to wield his sword. Duan Lingtian was extremely clear in his heart what effect a crippled right arm would have on Wu Yongqian. But he didn't have the slightest feeling of guilt. On that day, it was because Wu Yongqian was too conceited and was unwilling to abandon his sword for a long time that caused him to fall to such an end. Moreover, from the beginning until the end, the conflict between him and Wu Yongqian was caused by Wu Yongqian's foster father, the peak master of Migra's peak, Wu Dao. If not for this, he would not have fought with Wu Yongqian. But now, sensing Wu Yongqian's hatred for him, Duan Lingtian realized that Wu Yongqian didn't think so. Wu Yongqian had clearly pushed all the blame onto him. Duan Ling. Heavens. Hearing Duan Lingtian's words, Wu Yongqian gritted his teeth. His eyes were filled with hatred and killing intent, vicious and cold. Didn't the Peak Lord want to see me? Why aren't you leading the way? Duan Lingtian calmly glanced at Wu Yongqian and said indifferently. Wu Yongqian shuddered when he heard this, and only now did he recall the proper business. He suppressed the flames of rage that had reached the limit in his heart before turning around and intending to take Duan Lingtian and leave Migra's peak. Senior brother Duan Lingtian. At this moment, a cry of surprise came from the direction of the cable bridge, causing Duan Lingtian to stop in his tracks. Duan Lingtian glanced over. A Migra's peak disciple was walking over from the other side of the cable bridge, and when the Migra's peak disciple saw Duan Lingtian, his eyes lit up and he walked over in large strides. With just a glance, Duan Lingtian recognized this Migra's peak disciple. Yi Xiaobei. Duan Lingtian remembered this name clearly. On that day he'd come to the trade hall with the intention of selling the pile of medicinal pills he obtained as a reward for the first place in the outer court martial competition. At that time, Yi Xiaobei and another Migra's peak disciple had a conflict for the things in his possession. In the end, Yi Xiaobei domineeringly took out 10 million gold and fiercely threw it at the Migra's peak disciple's face, causing the latter's face to be covered in blood. Duan Lingtian still remembered that scene clearly until now. It was precisely because of this that he had such a deep impression of Yi Xiaobei. Yi Xiaobei. Duan Lingtian nodded and smiled to Yi Xiaobei as he greeted him. Duan? Senior brother Duan Lingtian, you still recognize me? Yi Xiaobei was stunned when he heard Duan Lingtian. Then he seemed as if he'd been injected with stimulants, and his face flushed red from excitement. Duan Lingtian shook his head and smiled. Is it so exaggerated? Senior brother Duan Lingtian, congratulations on passing the inner court disciple test and becoming an inner court disciple. Yi Xiaobei smiled as he congratulated Duan Lingtian, then said with an expression of adoration. Senior brother Duan Lingtian, I heard that during the inner court disciple test, you empty-handed swung up the 9th level origin core stage fierce beast, the violent ape, and randomly smashed it. In the end, you smashed the violent ape to the point it knelt down and begged for mercy before you. Yi Xiaobei was extremely excited as he spoke. Duan Lingtian was speechless when he heard this. Why is it getting more and more ridiculous? At that time, the violent ape didn't kneel down and beg for mercy. That was the ape clan's etiquette of submission. Yi Xiaobei didn't intentionally conceal his voice, and the surrounding crowd of Migra's peak disciples heard it. Empty-handed swung up the 9th level origin core stage fierce beast, the violent ape, and randomly smashed it? Smashed the violent ape to the point it knelt down and begged for mercy? For a moment, the gazes of all the Migra's peak disciples that descended onto Duan Lingtian became extremely strange. Gulp, 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 gulp. Sounds of gulping down saliva in astonishment rose and fell. After a short moment, these Migra's peak disciples reacted to what had happened, and as expected, it caused an uproar. Is senior brother Duan Lingtian really a human? I heard that those formidable demon beasts of legend are even able to transform into human form, and are called demons. Could it be that senior brother Duan Lingtian is one of those demon beasts that has transformed into human form? No wonder senior brother Duan Lingtian has such a monstrous cultivation at such a young age, so it turns out that he was originally a demon. As they finished speaking, all the Migra's peak disciples nodded in all seriousness. In their eyes, the accomplishments that Duan Lingtian had obtained so far were utterly not something a normal human could obtain. At least, in the history of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, there had never appeared an 8th level origin core stage martial artist that was at the same age as Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian was speechless when he heard the discussions of these Migra's peak disciples. How did he become a demon? Yi Xiaobei frowned, then looked at the crowd of Migra's peak disciples and felt indignant for Duan Lingtian. What nonsense are all of you talking about? How could senior brother Duan Lingtian possibly be a demon? If he was a demon, do all of you think that all of you would still be alive? Do all of you think that there's anyone in the Seven-Star Sword sect that's still alive? Demons are existences that demon beasts have transformed into human form. According to legend, they're omnipotent. Do all of you think that there's a need for a demon to sneak into our Seven-Star Sword sect? Would a demon have the leisure to sit here and listen to all of you talk nonsense? As he finished speaking, Yi Xiaobei's voice was powerful and resonating. Duan Lingtian was surprised. The current Yi Xiaobei undoubtedly had a trace of an additional bearing in his eyes. Although it was only faintly discernible, Duan Lingtian was able to discern it. This was the bearing of a person in a high position. Looks like this Yi Xiaobei isn't simple. Right, a figure that's able to casually take out 10 million gold? How could he be an ordinary person? As soon as Yi Xiaobei finished speaking, the Migres Peak disciples present all started pondering. Yeah, according to legend, demons that are capable of transforming into human form are all demon beasts that have stepped into the fourth void stage, the void transformation stage. If an existence at the void transformation stage wants to, then not to mention our Seven-Star Sword sect, even if all the experts of the entire Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom came out in full force, it would probably still not be enough to fill the gaps between their teeth. Oh, I almost forgot about that. How could an existence at the void transformation stage possibly have such leisure? You're right. Through Yi Xiaobei's reminder, the group of Migres Peak disciples reacted. Duan Lingtian nodded and smiled to Yi Xiaobei, then followed up to Wu Yongqian, who had a gloomy expression and was slightly impatient from waiting, and stepped onto the chain bridge to leave Migres Peak. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian followed behind Wu Yongqian to arrive at the main peak, Dubhe Peak. They once again arrived at Migres Hall. Migres Hall's audience hall. The peak master Wu Dao stood in the audience hall with his back facing the outside of the audience hall. Foster father Duan Lingtian has arrived. At the entrance of the audience hall, Wu Yongqian, who stood together with Duan Lingtian, spoke respectfully. Come in. At the same time that Wu Dao spoke, Duan Lingtian followed behind Wu Yongqian to walk into the audience hall. Peak master. Duan Lingtian lightly nodded to Wu Dao, and it could be considered to be a greeting. Duan Lingtian, we meet again. Wu Dao's eyes flickered as he stared at Duan Lingtian and slowly spoke. I wonder why Peak Master has come looking for me? Duan Lingtian went straight to the point, and his eyes were calm and without splendor. Duan Lingtian, since you're so straightforward, I won't beat around the bush. Wu Dao spoke frankly. That day, you defeated someone stronger than you and killed the former #1 disciple in the outer court, sure how. Later on, you defeated someone stronger than you and defeated this useless foster son of mine, but you didn't cripple his arm. I'm extremely curious, exactly what method did you use to defeat someone stronger than you? As soon as he finished speaking, Wu Dao's gaze descended onto Duan Lingtian, and it was filled with burning yearning. Although Duan Lingtian was already mentally prepared on the way here. But when it was really time for Wu Dao to ask, slight fear still arose within Duan Lingtian's heart. Looks like there's another person in the Seven-Star Sword sect that coveted his things. The first person was none other than the Migres Peak's outer court elder, Zhao Lin. Now there was another Wu Dao. He could disregard Zhao Lin. But this Wu Dao was the peak master of Migres Peak. He played an important role in the Seven-Star Sword sect and possessed extraordinary ability. He had no choice but to fear him. Duan Lingtian was able to notice that Wu Dao's gaze was currently focused on him, seeming to be observing the changes in his expression, wanting to know if he would lie. Duan Lingtian felt disdain towards this. Controlling the changes in his expression was extremely easy to him. Peak Master. Duan Lingtian fearlessly looked Wu Dao in the eye and smiled indifferently. Actually, this is my greatest secret. But, since Peak Master wants to know, then even if I say it or even share it, it's nothing. Say it? Share it? Wu Dao's face revealed a smile when he heard Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian, looks like I really misjudged you the last time. Not bad, you're very sensible. So long as you're willing to share that ability, then even if we don't have the fate of being master and disciple, I'll surely take care of you in the Seven-Star Sword sect in the future. The nearby Wu Yongqian's face sank when he heard Wu Dao, then he looked at Duan Lingtian and frowned, and a wisp of jealousy and hatred appeared on his face. Then I'll thank Peak Master first. Duan Lingtian nodded and a brilliant smile appeared on his face. Go ahead. Chapter 340. Congratulations on the birth of the first alliance leader in this book. Thank you, Wine Sage. Under Wu Dao's incomparably anticipating gaze, Duan Lingtian slowly said, Peak Master, the reason I was able to defeat someone stronger as the weak was because an unusual change had occurred to my origin energy. Duan Lingtian had only just spoken up to hear when Wu Dao's breathing became hurried. What he wanted to know was precisely this. Even Wu Yongqian had a burning expression now. As far as he was concerned, if he was able to grasp this ability, then even if his accomplishments in the martial Dao were limited, he would still be able to defeat someone stronger as the weak. In the future, he might not be unable to become the peak master of the 7-star sword sect's Migres peak. Under the focused gazes of Wu Dao and Wu Yongqian, Duan Lingtian continued. My origin energy was originally no different than an ordinary martial artist's. But later on, when I arrived at the 7-star sword sect, I made a trip to the primeval forest and was fortunate enough to obtain a type of spirit fruit. An unknown type of spirit fruit. As he spoke up to hear, Duan Lingtian's breathing became hurried, and he had a burning expression. At that time, after I consumed that spirit fruit, an unusual change occurred to the origin energy in my body, and it actually started to tremble involuntarily. I've tested it before. So long as it's an opponent whose strength doesn't surpass the strength of 30 ancient mammoths, I'm able to defeat them by relying on the unusual origin energy. Duan Lingtian spoke excitedly. Wu Dao and Wu Yongqian's expressions became gloomy in tacit understanding. Spirit fruits could be chanced upon by luck, but not sought after. The fortuitous encounter of obtaining a spirit fruit was practically impossible to replicate. Wu Dao's fierce gaze seemed to be able to see through everything as he stared fixedly at Duan Lingtian, seeming to want to discern from the changes in Duan Lingtian's expression if Duan Lingtian was lying. However, no matter how he observed, the changes in Duan Lingtian's expression weren't unnatural in the slightest. Could it be that what this Duan Lingtian said was true? Was it really because he consumed an unknown type of spirit fruit that caused his origin energy to undergo an unusual change? At that time, after my origin energy mutated, I just happened to encounter the provocation of Hua Xian and Yuan Wu. Thus, on the Migres Peak life and death arena, I relied on my mutated origin energy to kill them in a single move. Later on, the Fecta Peak's 6th level origin core stage outer court disciple, Xiaoying, and the number 1 disciple in the outer court, Shihao, were both defeated by me, and I relied on my mutated origin energy to kill them. Duan Lingtian didn't seem to notice Wu Dao's burning gaze as he continued to speak, excitedly, with a face full of excitement. Wu Yongqian's gaze on Duan Lingtian was filled with jealousy. Finally, the excitement on Duan Lingtian's face calmed down. He took a deep breath and looked at Wu Dao. Peak Master, I've told you everything now. I've shared everything with you. Are you satisfied? Can I leave now? No matter how much Duan Lingtian's expression changed, his heart was terrifyingly calm. Everything he said was just to brush off Wu Dao. As for whether Wu Dao believed him or not, that was not something he needed to worry about. Whoosh. Practically at the instant Duan Lingtian finished speaking, a formidable imposing aura suddenly stretched out from Wu Dao's body and enveloped Duan Lingtian's body. Duan Lingtian stood on the spot without moving. As if he utterly didn't notice Wu Dao's imposing aura, he had a carefree expression, as if his expression wouldn't change even if Mount Tai collapsed before him. Duan Lingtian. Suddenly Wu Dao shouted out explosively, and his voice contained extremely terrifying origin energy that pierced into Duan Lingtian's eardrums, shaking Duan Lingtian to the point his vital energy and blood roiled, and his face slightly flushed red. My patience is limited. I'll give you one last chance, tell me the truth. Otherwise, don't blame me for leaving you here forever. You ought to know that I have this ability. Wu Dao slowly spoke out, and his voice contained a threatening intent mixed within. Completely shed all pretense of cordiality. Only for the sake of obtaining Duan Lingtian's method of utilizing origin energy. Duan Lingtian looked at Wu Dao and said in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing, Peak Master, what you want to know, I've said it extremely clearly earlier, but I wonder what you mean now. You think I'm deceiving you? Wu Dao's gloomy face seemed as if it was covered in a layer of ice, emitting a ghastly coldness, and his gaze that flickered with killing intent descended onto Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian, do you think I'll believe what you say? I'm the Peak Master of the 7-star sword sect's Migres Peak, and I've read through all the ancient books, yet I've never heard of a spirit fruit that's capable of causing origin energy to undergo a mutation. You actually dare speak without thinking in front of me? Do you think I'm unable to see through your lies? As he finished speaking, the aura on Wu Dao's body gradually became gloomy and cold. Faint origin energy had already started to blossom on Wu Dao's hand, and it became denser and denser. In the sky above Wu Dao, numerous ancient mammoth silhouettes were slowly condensing into form, increasing in number. In the blink of an eye it was a few thousand. Ah! Duan Lingtian started laughing when he heard Wu Dao, laughing without restraint. Presumptuous. Wu Yongqian's face sank. This Duan Lingtian actually dared be so presumptuous in front of his foster father, the peak master of Migres Peak. He truly deserved death. But he knew his own limitations. He wasn't a match for Duan Lingtian. Otherwise he would surely make a move to teach Duan Lingtian a lesson. What are you laughing at? Wu Dao's face was gloomy as he asked in a low voice. What am I laughing at? Finally Duan Lingtian restrained his laughter, then sized Wu Dao up from top to bottom and slowly said, Peak Master, it's not that I'm looking down on you. Cloud Continent is so vast, do you dare say you know everything? Read through ancient books? I wonder what ancient books Peak Master has read? Cloud Continent is vast and boundless. Even the legendary expert, Emperor Wu, doesn't dare say he knows everything. Could it be that Peak Master thinks your knowledge can surpass an expert like Emperor Wu? As he finished speaking, the corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a mocking smile. Even the Emperor Wu of Samsara all those years ago, who'd experienced 2 lifetimes, didn't dare say he knew everything. This Peak Master of Migres Peak, a higher-up of a tiny imperial kingdom sect, also dared to boast like this? Simply naive, laughable. You. Even though Duan Lingtian's words were reasonable, it was undoubtedly an undisguised slap to Wu Dao's face, causing Wu Dao to burst into rage, and the origin energy on his body raged and roiled restlessly. Duan Lingtian, do you know? Just based on these words of yours, I can directly kill you right now. Haha. When faced with the enraged Wu Dao, Duan Lingtian's face still remained carefree. Peak Master, your strength is shocking and you're a void stage expert. Killing me is naturally as easy as flipping your hand. But, if you kill me today, I wonder what the Migres Peak disciples would think, what the 7-Star Sword sect disciples would think, and what the other Peak Masters, sect leaders and even Guardian Elders would think. Even if I kill you today, who would know that it was me who killed you? Wu Dao grunted coldly with a face full of disdain. Peak Master, then I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. Before I came here, many Migres Peak disciples knew that I crippled your foster son's arm, and they knew that your foster son brought me to see you. Duan Lingtian's tone was calm as he spoke indifferently. Wu Dao's face sank when he heard Duan Lingtian, and he frowned as he looked at Wu Yongqian who was beside him. Wu Yongqian nodded with a bitter smile, proving that what Duan Lingtian said wasn't false. Trash. Wu Dao glanced coldly at Wu Yongqian, and his expression was terrifyingly gloomy. If it was really like this, then he really didn't dare kill Duan Lingtian. He could disregard the Migres Peak disciples and even the 7-Star Sword sect disciples. But once this matter was spread out, the sect leader would surely interfere. With the natural talent Duan Lingtian revealed now, practically everyone in the 7-Star Sword sect took him to be the hope of the sect. Even if it was the sect leader, perhaps he'd already started paying attention to Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian. Wu Dao looked at Duan Lingtian and said in a low voice, needless to say, you're extremely intelligent, truly extremely intelligent. You actually know how to create momentum for yourself and make me hold back from taking action. Peak Master, you're too kind. Duan Lingtian smiled lightly, and he felt a wave of delight in his heart when he saw Wu Dao's unsightly expression. Wu Dao continued. But, even if I can't kill you, but I presume it's understandable if I teach you a lesson. As he spoke up to hear, a wisp of gloominess appeared on Wu Dao's face. Peak Master, if you don't want to know the characteristics of the spirit fruit I consumed, then feel free to make a move against me. The smile on Duan Lingtian's face didn't change, and he glanced deeply at Wu Dao, as if victory was within his grasp. He knew clearly in his heart that everything Wu Dao did earlier was undoubtedly threatening him and probing him. Even if it was Wu Dao himself, he didn't dare be 100% sure that what he said earlier was a lie. So long as you speak, I'll let you leave safely. From today onwards, I won't make things difficult for you. Wu Dao was tempted as expected when he heard Duan Lingtian. What Duan Lingtian wanted was the first half of Wu Dao's words. As for the second half, he directly disregarded it. Could Wu Dao's promise be believed? That's a spirit fruit that's completely dark violet in color, and there are some small lumps on its surface. Duan Lingtian slowly described. Of course, the spirit fruit he described now wasn't a spirit fruit that was beneficial to a martial artist, but was instead a highly toxic spirit fruit that killed without leaving a trace. This type of spirit fruit was extremely rare, and it had always been loved by demon beasts that were extremely poisonous. Moreover, if one didn't recognize this type of spirit fruit, one would absolutely not know that it contained a highly toxic poison. Because the highly toxic poison within the spirit fruit was extremely rare, and even a silver needle was unable to detect it. There were many people that had seen this type of spirit fruit, but it was extremely rare for them to survive, and the reincarnation Emperor Wu was precisely one of them. Now, Duan Lingtian's original intention was to speak nonsense, because as far as he was concerned, it was very unlikely for this type of spirit fruit to exist in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. He only wanted to give Wu Dao a thought that was impossible to realize. You can leave. After finding out what he wanted to know, Wu Dao glanced coldly and indifferently at Duan Lingtian. Peak Master, farewell. Duan Lingtian nodded and left. Foster father, do you believe what he said earlier? After Duan Lingtian left, Wu Yongqian looked at Wu Dao and his brows knit together. I keep having the feeling that what this Duan Lingtian said can't be trusted. Wu Dao glanced coldly and indifferently at Wu Yongqian. Could it be that I can't discern it? Do I need you to teach me? Useless thing. I asked you to call him over and even made it known to everyone, allowing him to be fearless and seize the initiative. Wu Yongqian lowered his head, his body lightly trembled, and his eyes transformed into a crimson-red color. Duan Lingtian. I'm going to the primeval forest. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.